This child was born with a distinct consciousness. Each time he was hungry, he knew to grab the bottle and gulp it down, because he realized the liquid inside was not simple. It was not ordinary milk, but the blood essence of an ancient dragon. Thanks to this, from the time he was only 7 years old, he already possessed a transcendent physique with a toned body. Even the magical beasts in the forest were merely his daily meals. Whenever they met him, they were instantly knocked out with a single punch, while his peers had to train until exhaustion just to pass basic training. He was already demonstrating his strength by doing one-arm push-ups while carrying a 100-pound rock. But the children did not know he was actually the ancestor of the clan. Due to an accidental reincarnation, he came here to teach his spoiled descendants a lesson. The story began over 1,000 years ago. Jake was hailed as the strongest man in the world, but at the peak he felt emptiness upon realizing human life was too short. Refusing to be limited, he was determined to seek an ancient legend. Legend had it that in the Holy Land guarded by a divine dragon, there was a miraculous golden fruit containing the power of immortality. Overcoming countless dangers, he defeated the divine dragon and gazed upon the sacred fruit. Though his body was battered, he still let out a proud smile, saying he could pursue the ultimate power. Without hesitation, he devoured the fruit. A few decades later, in a splendid mansion full of roses, gloomy atmosphere pervaded as a legend was about to end. Gilliam, the eldest son of the Eldrigan clan, knelt in pain by his dying father's bed. With his last breath, clan leader Jake looked at his son and calmly said, "Do not be so pathetic, my time is simply up." Gilliam sobbed, holding his father's frail hand. The mansion felt cold without his gentle mother. Jake silently reminded his son not to be weak. He looked into the distance, thinking that the legend of the divine fruit was just an illusion. But in return, he felt lucky to have a virtuous wife and good children. "My beloved children, I, Jake, have lived long, and I have no regrets." In the moment his consciousness faded, a surge of thought flared up. His aged eyes flew open. Of course, he had something to regret. A trembling hand reached up. He seized his fate, roaring within. If only he had more time to reach the pinnacle of martial arts. A desperate cry of "Father" rang out, marking the moment the legend of Jake closed. At least, that was what everyone thought. In a different space, a newborn opened his eyes, full of arrogance. Had he just fallen asleep? He looked at the ceiling, recognizing the wallpaper pattern was exactly like the annex of the clan estate. The strange lightness of his body made him horrified. Raising his hand, he was shocked and asked himself, "What are these tiny hands? Are they a baby's hands?" The truth was unbelievable to him. Was he really a newborn? After calming down, Jake began to reason. To drag a 10th-star expert like him into this situation without being detected, that was an extremely abnormal event. The baby boy lay in the cradle, his amber eyes pensive as he wondered who did it and how. Jake suddenly remembered the moment he faced the divine dragon and the divine fruit years ago. He was startled. Could it be because of that fruit? Everything became clear. The real effect was not immortality but transmigration. An ambitious smile bloomed on the baby's lips. Fortunately, now he could witness the peak of martial arts. Observing his surroundings, Jake saw he was in an annex building with many other newborns. He wondered about this strange gathering. The door opened and maids entered with a cart full of bottles containing a strange red liquid. A cold commanding voice rang out, "1, 2, 3, drag him out now." Immediately, a goblin creature was dragged outside. To Jake's astonishment, the maid forced the goblin to drink the red liquid from the bottle. The liquid splashed all over his own body. Jake was horrified. Why were there goblins here? What were they planning to do? When a maid suddenly scooped him up and brought the bottle close, he realized with a start. "What the hell is this? What are you forcing us to drink?" Sensing the enormous yet dangerous power source within that liquid, Jake instinctively tried to spit it out, as the newborn body was too weak. The stimulation caused him to accidentally swallow a little. He was shocked to realize it was ancient dragon blood. While the maids indifferently thought the dilution would be safe for the babies, Jake felt his body was about to explode from the power. A bold thought flashed. This was a once-in-a-millennium opportunity. He told himself if he could absorb all this energy, he would surpass his previous life and reach the absolute peak of martial arts. Regardless of the reason, Jake decided to seize this opportunity. He began absorbing the blazing torrent of power surging within his body. His face contorted, veins bulging from the immense pressure, but Jake's eyes still blazed with pride. "Do not underestimate me." He gritted his teeth and endured, determined to conquer this ancient source of energy. "Let me show you what a festival really is." Witnessing that scene, the maid exclaimed in shock, "This child." Ignoring the pain, Jake frantically absorbed the red liquid. He told himself he would absorb all the power of the ancient dragon. Afterwards, he would reach the pinnacle of martial arts that he could not touch in his previous life. Lying flat in the cradle, his body smeared with dried blood, Jake panted in exhaustion. Somehow he had managed it. Looking around, he saw other children also overcoming the challenge. He secretly marveled that the survival instinct of newborns should not be underestimated. As night fell, his small body began to reach its limit. Drowsiness hit, and the consciousness of the Grand Master sank into sleep to let his body assimilate the power. Time passed. 7 years later, in a remote mountain area, a count rang out full of inner strength. 998, 999. Under the sunlight, a boy with toned muscles was training. He performed a handstand on one hand. His legs steadily lifted a massive boulder. Looking at his hand, he smiled confidently. The physique was truly amazing. Jake officially began his new journey, affirming it was thanks to the ancient dragon blood. All living beings possess their own source of power. The ancient dragon blood that Jake and the other children were forced to drink was the key to unlocking that infinite power. The children who drank it all possessed physiques far beyond ordinary people, combined with the divine dragon power he had defeated in his past life. Jake was the only child who completely absorbed the essence of the ancient dragon. However, he was still disappointed to see he had only reached 1 star. It should have been 4 stars by now. Oh well, forget it. Star or star power was the strength achieved when pushed to the limit. The body was like a miniature universe. The more stars, the greater the power, but creating a new star became increasingly difficult. In his past life with the title Jake L. Dragon, he reached 10 stars, an unprecedented record. 7 years had passed in a flash since he was reincarnated as the illegitimate child of the L. Dragon chieftain. Jake looked into the distance thoughtfully, his heart heavy thinking of his deceased mother and the father who never showed himself. He doubted the man's qualifications as a father, but was more astonished by the changes in the world after 1,000 years. Reincarnation was already unexpected, but waking up 1,000 years later was an even greater shock. The world now tested the survival of the fittest in a brutal manner. A typical example was the dragon trial, where newborns were forced to drink ancient dragon blood. Only the children who survived were educated to become true dragon warriors. But the reality in the place Jake lived was completely opposite. He turned to question the maid in confusion. For 7 years, no instructor had come to him. Shouldn't those who passed the trial be trained? Here, there were only maids. Before the maid's shock, Jake clicked his tongue and let it go. He told himself physical training was more important, and he could learn fighting on his own. Curiosity about the other children and the main clan still urged him. The maid only bowed coldly. "I am afraid I cannot answer." Jake emphasized he only wanted to talk about clan matters, but she still maintained her attitude, repeating the same old answer. Why did she keep repeating it? Jake's eyes sharpened. He said in a harsh tone, "Is this all you can say?" Even though the pressure from the boy was considerable, she steadfastly repeated it. Jake sighed in frustration. "Why treat me so harshly like this?" The maid explained they were only ordered to take care of his daily needs. Jake silently observed, realizing the maid had reached 3 stars, enough to teach him basic skills. But she deliberately kept her distance. Not wanting to waste words, Jake turned around and left. "Fine, I am going into the forest." He thought it was abnormal to have lived together for 7 years with only minimal interaction. He advanced deep into the dense forest. Suddenly, Jake picked a handful of strange leaves and put them in his mouth. He immediately chewed them ravenously. His face twisted from the bitterness. What kind of poisonous herb was this that was not sweet at all? Even though the taste was awful, he told himself this was part of the poison resistance training. Jake tried to calm himself, but he clearly felt a strange gaze constantly watching him recently. The feeling of being monitored made him uncomfortable. He wanted to do something to end this nuisance. Jake stopped, speaking provocatively. "Did not expect you to show yourselves for such a small matter. Is that really so? If you have something to say, come out here and say it directly." At that moment, a sinister black-purple aura emanated from the bushes. Jake carefully observed. There was something there. Revealed was a giant boar, eyes glowing red, its body covered in a strange dark mist. He was shocked. That is a berserk boar. Looking at the black bone essence coiling around it, Jake recognized something that did not exist 1,000 years ago. He wondered what kind of power that was. The beast quickly caught a strange scent. Immediately detected the intruder in its territory. The beast charged at a terrifying speed. Jake was not afraid. He smiled confidently, swiftly dodging the charge from its body. Instantly, Jake gathered force into his fist, his hand glowing with a powerful golden energy. With just one punch, Jake caused the berserk boar to explode in a blinding flash of light. Looking at his hand still shimmering with light, he silently assessed. Just a light touch on the first star, and this much power came out. Star quality was indeed very important. Jake casually carried the giant monster's corpse over his shoulder, walking in boredom. He said, "I'm starting to get tired of being left alone. How about we go explore a bit?" "Let's see, where should I go? The weather is too hot this season. I should go to the beach for a swim to cool off." However, all of his actions fell into the eyes of a stranger hiding in the tree. He was shocked by the child's strength, silently wondering what was happening here. Although not formally trained, he had used first star power to defeat a raging boar with a single blow. More importantly, he had also sensed his hidden presence. That child was not ordinary. The observer silently thought about Jake's fate, a child who lost his mother and was neglected by his father. But because he carried the Eldragon bloodline, he had never escaped the family's control. Even though he was an illegitimate child, he still belonged to the clan's bloodline. deadline. Is that so? This matter will be quite interesting from now on. Meanwhile, Jake had returned to the wooden house and immediately noticed the presence of several other strangers. He warily observed who were they. 3 4th-star people, 1 5th-star person, all were skilled warriors. What did people like that want here? Seeing the brilliant family crest emblem on their chests, he realized these were people from the main clan. An elderly official stepped forward, respectfully placing his hand on his left chest. He said, "This must be the first time we meet. We are here to escort you, Jake. You, Jake, must participate in a test." Jake froze at this sudden demand. He exclaimed in astonishment, "A test?" Anger and absurdity made the boy shout loudly. "We'll have to take a test without having learned a single word." Never expected that after 7 years of separation, Jake would return to the main estate of the Eldragon clan. He was escorted by the messengers from the distant borderlands here by order of the main house. Looking at Jake's disheveled appearance, the maids immediately stopped him, saying he needed to change. They said he could not enter the manor looking like that. Jake could only ask back blankly, "Can't enter, huh?" He understood that this return was not to live a noble life, but for a completely different purpose. It turned out that for the past 1,000 years, the Eldragon clan had established a specialized educational academy called Dragon's Den. Every child born in the clan longed to join this place, and was educated at home until the age of 5. Today was the entrance exam, but Jake wore a sarcastic smile. He said, "Well, I am the one who hasn't been properly taught at all." Even without basic knowledge, participating in the exam was mandatory for him. Jake sat down on the ground with a worried expression, silently complaining. "So I was brought from the borderlands here. Why did this happen just when I was about to leave? Thinking about all the effort I put into preparing my luggage to run away, now it's all wasted." He could only hold his head in his hands, walking away full of regret. At that moment, a blue-haired youth with a kind appearance approached worriedly. He asked, "Sir, are you okay? What's wrong?" Jake looked up at the stranger and coldly asked, "Who are you?" That boy scratched his head in confusion and introduced himself as Rengus, from Orgo village. Jake narrowed his eyes to observe, silently assessing. This cunning brat looks timid but is quite sharp. After Jake introduced his name, he frankly admitted that he didn't know what they were supposed to do in this exam at all. Rengus was extremely surprised to hear that. He stammered back that the exam content hadn't changed at all for years. Jake casually admitted that he didn't even know what the test consisted of. This made Rengus gape in astonishment. "What, you really don't know a single thing about the exam? Is he okay?" Meanwhile, a person with an arrogant expression approached. He was Retin from Osgil village. He did not hesitate to throw insults. "Hey, you weakest Rengus. Why is a weakling like you here? Lost. Go home before you get hurt." Retin continued to mock Rengus's intention to take the test as impossible. Said, "You, no way you can get in." He even dragged Rengus's father into the insults. He said, "Hey kid, your father is Nguyen Long, right? What can the son of Nguyen Long do? Let me keep an eye on you." Hearing those words, he clenched his fists but ultimately dared not talk back. Within the Eldragon clan, a strict hierarchical system had been established by an absolute monarch, clearly divided from First Dragon, Regular Soldier, Young Dragon, Mature Dragon, Squad Leader to High Lord Dragon, and at the very bottom of that society was the Nguyen Long, a title reserved for those who could not participate or could not graduate from Dragon's Den. Rengus lowered his head gloomily, but deep inside his will was still burning. He said, "But I want to prove that we are not fakes." Jake looked at his new friend and suddenly spoke up. "Why? How can you say that without even trying?" Seeing someone interfere in his business, Retin angrily shouted, "Huh, who the hell are you?" Jake still calmly faced him. He asked back, "So, what's the problem?" "No, just asking." "Why can't Rengus?" Retin roared contemptuously, "Of course, because he's weak." Looking at Rengus's dazed expression, Jake suddenly emitted a terrifying pressure, his eyes blazing like fire, causing the other to stop in fear. He coldly declared, "Weak. He is much stronger than you all." This statement was like pouring fuel on the fire, causing Retin to go mad and yell, "You're saying all of us are weaker than that idiot?" Just as the atmosphere was extremely tense, a stern announcement sounded over the loudspeaker. They said, "Attention, the entrance exam for Dragon's Den will begin now. The examinees are required to register in order, then quickly move with their number cards." Retin left angrily, but not before leaving a bitter threat. He said, "I'll remember your face, you bastard." Watching his back, Jake could only sigh in annoyance, silently thinking why today's youth are so easily angered, while he himself forgot that he also bore the appearance of a child of the same age. When he heard Rengus talk about the test being mandatory, Jake naively asked if it was possible to withdraw or drop out midway. This left his new friend dumbfounded at his incredibly unbelievable ignorance. Rengus smiled bitterly and advised Jake that if he could, it was best to withdraw to avoid getting hurt, because even people with his level couldn't turn back once they committed. Jake clicked his tongue to let it go and urged the two of them to quickly head towards the grounds to be in time for the ceremony. "This is a critical moment. Why are you still dawdling?" The competition area, the stern-faced examiner announced the rules clearly. The test was actually very simple. Contestants had to create a scratch on a giant boulder using bare hands or a weapon. Each person had only 3 attempts to prove their ability. Among the panicked and frightened children, Jake felt nothing but deep disappointment. He thought to himself, after surviving the horrifying bloodline trial back then, this test was truly mundane and boring. The first contestant stepped forward with a tense face, his face pale, his hands trembling with nervousness. The boy let out a loud shout, gathering all his strength to swing his sword and strike the boulder fiercely. Sudden powerful shock rebounded, causing him to clutch his hand in pain. The tremendous recoil shattered the sword and severely injured the boy's hands. Witnessing that disastrous scene, Jake and everyone around were shocked by the boulder's hardness. The boy collapsed, screaming in agony, but the examiner coldly recorded it and announced the first attempt a failure. He asked the boy if he wanted to proceed with the second attempt. The examiner coldly ordered the soldiers to clean up after the first contestant collapsed and withdrew. He really is colder than stone, those ruthless people sure live long. While the injured person was dragged away and the next contestant was called, Rengis trembled in fear. Jake, meanwhile, silently observed the boulder and wondered what kind of stone it was. Rengis explained it was regeneration stone, a material that could instantly heal any scratch. More frighteningly, if struck with pure force, it would retaliate with 100 times the power. It couldn't help but sigh at this harshness. Wasn't that a completely unreasonable material? However, Rengis said that if one knew how to circulate power and attack correctly, it was still possible to scratch the stone. Jake quickly understood the test's key point. Martial skills were less important than controlling one's source of power. He was truly strong, decisive, and intelligent. Watching the struggling crowd ahead, he saw that very few people passed the test. Even the arrogant ones from this morning had difficulty. The exam atmosphere grew extremely tense as consecutive failure announcements rang out, accompanied by the agonized screams of severely injured contestants. Number 51 failed next. Number 202 failed next. When the examiner loudly called number 315, Jake looked at the card in his hand. It was his turn. Rengis worriedly asked if he wanted to withdraw to ensure his safety. Jake remained steadfast as he walked toward the boulder and replied softly, "No need to worry about these 3 devils. This stuff is as easy as candy." Jake stood alone before the giant boulder under the watchful eyes of hundreds from the stands. The examiner began preparing to record. Jake focused his gaze, his eyes suddenly blazing with immense power. A golden radiance burned like flames enveloping his body, radiating the overwhelming aura of a Grand Master. Master Jake stepped forward barehanded. The surprised examiner asked if he wasn't using a weapon. He answered straightforwardly, "It's not really necessary, bare hands are enough." His arrogant declaration stirred murmurs in the crowd. They believed that even with good power control, scratching the stone barehanded was impossible, and some maliciously said his fists and arms would be crushed. Rengis sat below, drenched in sweat, regretting not having stopped Jake more forcefully. The examiner nodded, "I understand, then begin." Jake moved closer, intently observing the strange boulder. He thought to himself, this was definitely a new mineral formed over 1,000 years that he had never seen. Though many things were unclear, he decided to push the thoughts aside. Oh well, no problem. A blazing energy began to gather in his arm. Witnessing that reckless scene, Rengis sprang up in panic and shouted, "This is bad. I have to stop him." Ignoring his friend's call, Jake grinned with excitement. "With this, I can unleash all my power right now." He concentrated all his essence into one point and roared, "Dragon Remnant, breaking martial skill, first form, violent strike." A thunderous explosion accompanied by blinding dust engulfed the entire arena. Rengis could only gasp in astonishment. Even the examiner was stunned, his pen-holding hand trembling at the unimaginable power of a child. As the dust gradually dispersed, the boulder, once considered indestructible, now bore a deep crack. Jake looked at his injured hand and evaluated inwardly. This technique was still a bit beyond his current body's capability. He needed more practice, but still flashed a confident smile. The entire arena fell into a breathless silence before murmurs began to arise. Someone exclaimed in shock. He smashed the stone. Amid the crowd, a blonde girl with sharp eyes softly smiled with excitement. "Oh, this guy seems quite interesting." Meanwhile, Rengis stood frozen, his face twisted in shock. "Hey, what?" Jake merely stood calmly in the middle of the arena, smiling confidently at everyone's astonishment. The examiner stood still, his mind in chaos. How could that boy punch away half a regeneration stone? That was only possible for someone at 4-star level and above, yet a child had done it. He looked at Jake with suspicious eyes, wondering if the lineage blood within an illegitimate child was that powerful, or if the technique just used was something he had seen somewhere before. The examiner was silent for too long, so Jake spoke up. "Sir, how did I do on the test?" He snapped back to attention. He loudly announced number 315 passed. Then he handed him a small blue vial. Jake asked blankly what this was. The examiner just smiled lightly, urging him to leave quickly so they could clean up the scene. Jake walked away muttering in annoyance. Why is everyone in this era always in such a hurry? What's all the fuss about? Just calm down a little. Rengis immediately rushed over, grabbed his shoulder, and exclaimed in admiration, Jake, that was amazing, you smashed it. Jake replied bluntly, well, it was easy. He held up the blue vial and asked his friend, oh right Rengis, what is this? Rengis explained it was a standard recovery potion given to those who passed the test. Jake stared at the vial, sensing the energy inside. It didn't seem like poison. Don't tell me this is a spiritual elixir. He recognized it as Cloudstream Clear Insight, a type of extremely rare medicine made from secret realm herbs and the pure energy core of a divine beast. This substance not only instantly healed all wounds and old scars, but also significantly increased his strength. Even though he knew it was extremely rare and difficult to make, Jake did not hesitate to tilt the vial back and drink down the pure liquid. When Jake finished drinking, a soothing blue light enveloped his injured arm. Jake exclaimed in astonishment as he saw the severe wound from the backlash was restored instantly. Rengis, standing beside him, explained that while it was not a spiritual potion, the Eldragon family's items were always better than regular merchandise. Jake was surprised by the miraculous speed of the effect, thinking that although it did not increase strength, its recovery ability was truly impressive. Rengis looked at Jake with admiration, saying that Jake himself was even more astonishing than that potion. Jake just clicked his tongue. Why are you staring at me like that? What's so strange? Looking at the vial in his hand, Jake realized that human intelligence had advanced by leaps and bounds after 1,000 years of accumulation. Rengis did not hold back his praise, saying Jake was truly amazing and extremely strong, but each word he said came out stiffly. The competition continued with the repeated passing announcements for candidates numbered 373, 395, and 405. Jake observed and saw that these guys passing the test was completely within his expectations. Suddenly the atmosphere became tense when the examiner clearly called out number 414. Rengis trembled as he stepped onto the field. Seeing this, Jake reassured him. Why are you so nervous, old pal? These tricks are simple, no problem. Just stay calm. Rengis felt his gut twist hearing that, telling himself not to set the standards too high, or he would be disappointed. Standing before the regeneration stone, Rengis took a deep breath, drew his sword, and focused on circulating his power. Rengis shouted loudly, then swung his sword, slashing hard at the target. However, strong shock caused him to fail on his first try. Undeterred, Rengis got back up. He was determined to put all his strength into the next try, hoping to make things happen. A pained grunt rang out as Rengis was sent flying again, sprawling on the ground. Seeing the stone still standing solitary without a scratch, he exclaimed in shock, no way. Immediately, the mocking laughter of Riton and his gang rang out harshly. Just as expected, the son of Nguyen Long is still Nguyen Long. Give up. Retin approached Jake with an arrogant demeanor, sneering. What was it you said earlier? Didn't you say that Rengis, lying there, is stronger than us? Ignoring the mockery and the crowd's demands for them to stop their nonsense, the cold examiner looked at Rengis, who was prostrate on the ground, and asked, there is one more chance. Do you want to try again? While Rengis was still stammering, Jake suddenly stepped closer and spoke up. Geez, what are you doing? Where is the spear? Why aren't you using it? Why are you holding a sword and trembling like that? The bizarre question left Rengis bewildered. What? A spear? What do you mean? Jake replied, like I said, why use an unsuitable weapon with no plan? He emphasized that in his current state, no matter how hard Rengis tried, he could not even scratch the stone with that sword. Hearing this, Retin and his gang burst into mocking laughter. Hey look, is this guy an idiot? His old man probably doesn't know how to use a spear. That's why he taught his brat swordsmanship. He chimed in with taunts, saying that changing weapons now wouldn't help anything. Not paying attention to the noisy bunch, Jake turned and asked the examiner, Sir Examiner, is it against the rules to change weapons during the test? Upon receiving the answer that it was no problem, Jake winked at his friend. You heard him, Rengis. Lucky you. Jake's gaze suddenly turned extremely frightening. So, are you going to let it stay like that? As memories of their training years ago resurfaced, he gritted his teeth. His will blazed fiercely, dispelling the look of fear. No, I will. Rengis decided to bet on Jake's hint, clearly announcing, I'll try using a spear. In Rengis' mind, the image of his late father returned, deeply moving. His father could not enter the dragon's den, was called Nguyen Long and ridiculed for it, but he still calmly raised him to adulthood. Standing before the stone, Rengis told himself, the man my father raised is not a fake. Today, right here, I will prove that. He understood that if he tried again with the sword, the result would not change, so he decided to place his complete trust in Jake. Even though he was still uncertain since he had never used a spear, Jake pointed his finger and ordered, "Just thrust forward and don't think about anything. Whatever he says, just okay it and we're golden." Jake continued to urge him on, "Just thrust straight ahead." Normally, using such an unfamiliar weapon was unthinkable, but faced with the trust of this newly met friend, Rengis made his decision. "I understand, I will try." Because Jake had believed in him, he would also try to believe in himself. Having held the sword from the start, the flow within him had never circulated this much before. Rengis shouted out loud with determination, then channeled all his power into a thrust that rent the air. Retten's bunch were still laughing. "What do you think that's going to do? Just changing weapons won't help him pull anything off." But instantly their smiles vanished as Rengis felt the spear become like a part of his body. He created a terrifying explosion of power that left everyone stunned and gasping. "What?" The examiners could not help but be astounded by the unprecedented sight. They exclaimed, "My God, he didn't just damage it, he pierced right through it." Standing in the middle of the arena, Rengis was still dazed, not understanding what had just happened, until Jake's applause rang out. "Amazing! Well done, Rengis." The examiner quickly noted down in his book, then clearly announced, "Number 414, pass." Holding the spear in his hand, Rengis stood frozen with emotion, stammering back, "I passed." Jake rushed over and exuberantly threw his arm around his friend's shoulder. "That's right, you did it, just like I thought." Rengis burst into happiness, embracing Jake and shouting, "I did it, I really did it." Jake smiled confidently in return, "I told you so." Witnessing this, Retten and his cronies could only gnash their teeth in frustration, trying to justify it as a fluke and not real skill. At that moment, a resounding announcement echoed throughout the school grounds. The entrance examination had concluded, and the enrollment ceremony would begin right now. Jake asked blankly if the ceremony was really just that simple. Rengis explained that perhaps other harsh tests awaited them after they officially started school. The heavy footsteps of an imposing guard squad heralded the arrival of a significant figure. The head of the Eldragon family would give a welcoming speech for them. A man with blazing red hair, an overwhelming aura, stepped onto the podium with a cold expression. Seeing that sullen man, Jake immediately asked Rengis who that unpleasant-looking person was. Rengis turned pale with fear, tremblingly replying that he was the clan leader. Jake still ignored him, continuing to criticize his lifeless face, even sarcastically saying that ice was warmer. Extremely panicked, Rengis quickly covered Jake's mouth, begging him to stay silent to save his life. "Big brother, please speak quietly for my sake. I thought I found a teammate, but it turns out all you do is cause trouble." Even so, Jake's eyes began to gleam with sharpness as he silently assessed the current strength of the Eldragon family. He noticed that among the guard unit, several had reached the 7-star level, and there were many 6-star warriors, a truly formidable force. Jake's gaze stopped at the clan leader standing high above, radiating a suffocating pressure. The current clan leader, Banja Eldragon, must be at the 8-star level. Jake recalled that 1,000 years ago, the 8-star level was the peak that fewer than 12 people in the world had reached. He silently evaluated the sudden changes of this era, while keeping his eyes fixed on the immense source of power before him. He couldn't hide his disgust as he looked at Banja. "I don't like that man." The loudspeaker sounded, requesting everyone to focus on the speech from the authoritative clan leader. Banja stepped forward with a blazing red pressure, coldly telling them to strive to become the flesh and blood of Eldragon. The pressure of an 8-star expert radiated, making the air thick and heavy, causing the surrounding children to be unable to breathe and collapse from fear. Witnessing that scene, Jake gritted his teeth in rage, although he didn't know the reason he hated this man. Just as Banja had left, an official with a gleeful expression stepped forward to applaud in admiration. He enthusiastically declared that it was a valuable encouragement, that Lord Banja held high expectations for the new batch of students. Jake stared blankly at the strange man laughing and speaking loudly, silently wondering he was to speak so hollowly. The official kept encouraging, "You must work hard, young people of the country." Jake clicked his tongue in contempt at the superficial act, as if what he said was right. Even so, he also noticed that the tense atmosphere had somewhat dissipated. Another judge with a stern face stepped out to announce the dormitory assignment, requesting those called to move immediately. Seeing everyone disperse, Jake asked Rengis, "Isn't that strange? Don't all of us go to the same place?" Rengis explained there were 4 different Dragon Lair zones, east, west, south, and north for training students. Right after that, a call rang out, number 315. Jake realized it was his turn. "My turn now. Take care, Rengis." Jake was assigned to the Eastern Dragon Lair, and a magnificent and majestic mansion appeared before his eyes. Walking in the wide corridor, Jake mused, "After 1,000 years, so many things have changed. Turn here." Because he wasn't familiar with the roads in the huge manor, he fumbled for a long time before finding his room. Jake breathed a sigh of relief. "We're here. I'm late because I got lost. My roommate is probably here too." He cheerfully pushed the door open, intending to make an impressive greeting. "Sorry to keep you waiting. From now on, we're roommates." A smile on his face suddenly froze. Jake stood frozen looking at the person in the room, stammering, "You are..." It turned out that his roommate was none other than Rengis. "Seems we're quite fated, huh, Rengis?" Rengis also sighed in relief, happily replying, "What a relief. I was scared of being alone and lonely." "What a coincidence." As night fell, both of them rested in the room. Rengis reminded, "The training camp starts tomorrow." Seeing Jake looked a bit dazed, he asked worriedly, "Are you even listening?" "That's what the instructor said." Jake bluntly gave a thumbs up, declaring he hadn't heard anything at all. Jake's confident reply left Rengis speechless. He told Jake to go to bed early because tomorrow would be tough. Jake looked out the window, silently calculating his upcoming plans. Initially, he intended to escape this boring place to go on an adventure, but the interesting things in the exam, like revival stones and spirit herbs, had made him change his mind. To understand what had changed after 1,000 years, staying with the Eldrigan family for a while wouldn't be bad. In a flash, a month had passed since the enrollment day. At the Dragon Lair training ground, there was a harsh atmosphere under the supervision of a trainer. He shouted loudly, "Dragon breath is a breathing technique created by the 15th clan leader." Below, the students were sweating profusely from extreme physical training. "You must use this secret art proficiently in every situation." While Rengis and everyone else struggled with the iron blocks, the trainer silently observed and assessed their progress. He saw many people had mastered Dragon Breath, and some were even about to reach the 2-star level as their energy began to overflow. Then his gaze stopped at Jake and he was completely stunned. "And that kid, what is this?" Before his eyes was an unimaginable scene. Jake wasn't just lifting weights but also carrying 3 huge boulders. He was horrified because with that load, the boy still stood firm with ease. The trainer couldn't believe that a child without proper guidance could possess such monstrous strength. Jake inwardly scoffed, never expecting that the Dragon King breathing technique I created would be passed down by them under the name Dragon Breath. He understood the essence of the breathing technique was to absorb energy from the air to enhance strength, with the decisive factor being the user's skill. That was why families considered these complete secret arts as their ultimate secrets. Although Dragon Breath was safe and easy to learn for Jake, if it was only for calming the mind, then he didn't need it. Because he was the creator of the Dragon King breathing technique, the only breathing technique that allowed controlling energy without interrupting the breath while moving. But because the difficulty was too great, few could grasp it, so later generations simplified it into Dragon Breath to enhance the strength of the entire clan. Seeing his technique so distorted, Jake was both moved and curious about how other martial arts had changed after 1,000 years. He carried training stones while looking forward to the interesting things to come. At the academy cafeteria, Jake was wolfing down a mountain of food, astonishing everyone around him. Seeing Rengis sitting in a daze, he asked while chewing, "What's up? You look as sad as if you just got dumped." Jake reminded his friend that without eating, he could never grow stronger. Rengis looked at Jake with confusion, not understanding how his stamina could be so bizarre and overflowing with energy. Jake replied bluntly with a bucket of cold water, "It's because you're too weak." He urged Rengis to eat more and train hard, as there was no other way for a weakling like him. While eating, Jake quietly noted that among the students a few had been trained quite systematically. Just then, a blonde girl with a special aura approached their table and spoke, "Hey, you're pretty good, aren't you?" While Jake was still blankly wondering who she was, Rengis beside him turned pale, trembling to the point of speechlessness. Rengis panikedly whispered to his friend, "Jake, don't you know? This is Lady Lika, the chieftain's daughter." He explained that Lika Typhona Eldrigan was one of the top candidates for the successor position, and people like them had no right to speak with her. Jake remained unbothered. "Don't know. If that's the case, then I'm also the chieftain's son, even if I'm a bastard." This shocking revelation left both Rengis and Lika frozen in astonishment. Lika stared intently at Jake, questioning how a rootless bastard could crush regeneration stone with his bare hands. Jake just bluntly cut a piece of steak and replied, "Ah, well, because that's just me." Rengis stopped gawking, "Eat up." Lika gave an excited smile, her eyes clearly showing approval. "Oh, it seems you're quite interesting. Hey, how about it? Become my subordinate." Jake continued eating calmly. She kept persuading, "I'm asking if you want to become someone under my command. I will be your support. A bastard probably wants allies too, right?" Lika painted a promising picture, asking Jake to use his power to help her seize the chieftain position, promising to treat him well in return. However, Jake only coldly uttered a single sentence, "No, thanks. That just sounds so awkward, being that blunt is just too much." The decisive refusal stunned Lika, her eyes suddenly turning sharp and full of suspicion. "What's the matter? Don't tell me you also have plans to compete for the chieftain position." Jake silently evaluated the spiritual energy emanating from Lika, realizing she had reached the threshold of the 2-star level, an impressive achievement for her age. However, he still wore a nonchalant expression, "Do whatever you want. I have no interest in becoming chieftain or anything." The indifferent reply left Lika astonished. Instantly, Jake radiated a blazing golden pressure, enveloping his entire body with an overwhelming aura. His eyes grew wild and full of pride as he declared, "I have no obligation to submit to anyone, because I am the strongest." Terrifying pressure from Jake completely shocked Lika. She trembled and stepped back, stunned inwardly. Am I being overpowered? It took a while for Lika to regain her composure while Jake calmly returned to his meal, ignoring Renjis beside him who was so scared he dared not breathe. Feeling insulted and wanting to save face, Lika shouted angrily, "Then I'll force you to submit. Come with me." Jake sat still with a mouth full of food, his face blankly staring at the furious young lady. News of the match between the rookie and Lady Lika spread quickly across the academy. "Where are you guys going?" "Training folks. There's a spar between the rookies and Lady Lika." Curious students rushed towards the training ground, none believing that a nobody would dare challenge the genius of the Typhona clan. At the vast training ground, Lika stood waiting with a blazing aura, while Jake and Rengus approached under suspicious gazes. "Who's that guy?" Standing before the upcoming match, Rengus worriedly exclaimed, "Oh my god, this is really bad." "Are you okay, sir? Your opponent is Lady Lika." Jake replied blankly, "Even saying that I still don't know who she is. Why did you suddenly switch to such a formal tone?" The blue-haired friend shouted, "Of course, sir, you are the chieftain's son." Rengus earnestly urged Jake to think carefully, because Lika was not only the daughter of Chieftain Banja, but also carried the bloodline of the Typhona clan, one of the 4 pillars of the Eldragon family. He also emphasized that she was a genius who had mastered the supreme technique, Great Lightning Sword, at the age of 7, matching the other outstanding children of Lord Banja. Jake kept a calm face. "Sorry, I only understood that she is the chieftain's daughter." The reply shocked Rengus, who yelled, "Why?" Jake explained that everything here was too new to him and told his friend not to ask further. Jake laughed loudly, thinking that not knowing who his opponent was made it even more interesting. Rengus grew more anxious. No matter how strong Lord Jake is, facing Lady Lika is still too disadvantageous. "Why did you accept the challenge?" "Ah, well, when someone challenges me, I don't back down." He noticed the opponent had appeared, and beside him she seemed to have already arrived. Lika entered the arena with an overwhelming aura, her hand gripping the sword hilt authoritatively. All casual chatter officially ended as Lika was ready for the spar. Lika impatiently cut off the conversation, snapping, "That's too noisy. Are you done talking so we can start fighting?" The opponent was ready. Jake only smirked confidently while Rengus still couldn't hide his worry. The blue-haired friend ran off shouting, "Please be careful." In response, Jake bluntly declared his safety depended on the young lady's skills in front of him. He curiously asked why Lika was so set on challenging him. With a firm gaze, Lika admitted her goal was to become the clan leader, and to achieve that, she needed Jake to submit and join her side. Jake still asked blankly, "Hey, what does that have to do with me?" Lika was astonished to realize he was completely clueless about the clan's situation, likely due to his status as a bastard. Jake silently mocked himself as an ancestor who knew nothing, suggesting she explain more directly. Lika began to analyze that there were currently 5 candidates for the next clan leader, including herself and Jake. Among them, everyone except him had already allied with one of the 4 main branches of the Eldragon clan. She emphasized that the future clan leader's origin would decide the branch's status. So the competition was extremely fierce at Dragon Pit. To face the other siblings, Lika craved Jake's power to strengthen her faction's resources. Jake pondered the tangled information. What a mess is this? I'm not sure I understand all this mess. But then he nodded slightly. Got it. Not letting Jake think further, Lika immediately drew her sword, asserting this was exactly why she had to act right here. She shouted, "I will defeat you," and charged forward like a whirlwind. A powerful slash swung down, creating a terrifying shockwave that shattered the ground. Lika swung the enormous heavy sword, pursuing relentlessly. She roared, "Do not even think of running. I will not let you escape my grasp." The surrounding crowd exclaimed in astonishment. So fast, she wielded that massive, greatsword with such ease. While dodging, Jake assessed the opponent's speed and precise control of power. He inwardly recognized the formidable strength of the main family, and understood the match was about to be decided. Jake casually dodged, frustrating Lika as she had yet to land a single hit. Witnessing the scene, Rengus could only exclaim, "Truly beautiful." Jake silently observed the unfamiliar martial technique and the speed far surpassing that of a typical 1-star. Provoked, Lika screamed, "Shut up, focus on fighting." In response to that anger, Jake only thought calmly, "I am focusing." Immediately, he closed in and unleashed a decisive blow. A powerful punch to the abdomen forced Lika back in pain. The crowd buzzed in shock, unable to believe that every attack from Lady Lika had missed. They stared in bewilderment at Jake and asked themselves, "Who is that man?" Lika questioned why she could not hit him. Jake calmly explained she was faster than a typical 1-star, but still just a 1-star. Ignoring Lika's rebuttal about being at the same rank, Dex simply pointed and explained. By just looking at the breath and muscle tension, she could read most movements. The rest was experience. He shrugged casually at the collapse of the arrogant young lady. Lika roared, "How ridiculous," then swung her sword in a frenzied attack. Jake still dodged calmly and coldly repeated, "I told you I can read them." Immediately, Jake unleashed a powerful punch, sending Lika flying, crashing hard into the stone wall. The crowd was stunned, unable to believe their eyes. "Impossible. Has Lady Lika lost?" Renjis exclaimed in surprise. "He has won," but Jake interrupted. "No, not quite." He realized she had concentrated power into her core to block the blow, so it was not enough to finish it. Lika struggled to her feet from the rubble, breathing raggedly. Seeing the tension, Renjis tried to stop them, but Jake coldly demanded he step back. "I am not responsible if you get hit." Jake noticed a strange change. Has she reached the 2-star level? A white radiance enveloped Lika. The crowd of trainees buzzed, recognizing the mark of a 2-star. That was the state of releasing power outward to use martial techniques, a power called radiance. Lika wiped the blood from her face, smiling. "Thanks to you, I have reached 2-star. Not giving Jake time to react, she charged at him with astonishing speed. Lightning bolts surrounded Lika as she unleashed blindingly fast slashes. Jake was surprised to realize he had been hit. "I thought I dodged that." Watching the small cut on his face, he looked at his opponent warily. Lika declared proudly, "See, this is my ability." Lika concentrated all her lightning energy into her sword, her eyes blazing now with 2-star radiance. "I will show you the true lightning sword." Instead of fear, Jake appeared extremely excited. He flashed an arrogant smile and pointed in challenge. "Is that so? I am about to see a new martial technique. Awesome." Lika unleashed the lightning flash technique, lightning strikes raining down continuously across the field. Jake dodged while exclaiming in amazement, "Hold on, you can control the lightning itself." The boy was not afraid but excited, finding this ability utterly absurd. Seeing this, Lika roared, "You seem to be enjoying this quite a bit." She immediately executed the lightning net technique, creating an explosion that shattered the ground. Jake clearly felt the difference, silently assessing that even for his current self, these lightning bolts were troublesome. He wondered how a single level increase could change so much. Jake calmly analyzed that although Lika's movements were quite simple, with the 2-star radiance, the power of her lightning greatsword had exploded violently. Her speed was unbelievable, and she was also shrouded in a mysterious layer of thunder and lightning. Even though he could counterattack immediately, his curiosity about the nature of her power urged Jake to continue observing. Seeing her opponent so calm, Lika roared in fury. "Still smiling in this situation, you really are a relaxed young man. If so, I will personally wipe that arrogant smile off your face." She charged with terrifying speed, swinging the lightning arc sword horizontally to form a brilliant arc, the explosion sending rocks flying. Witnessing the horrific scene, Renjis and everyone else could only scream in despair. Jake stood firm amidst the rubble, but Lika gave him no time to breathe, immediately unleashing the powerful lightning flash technique. Renjis panicked and rushed to stop it. "Lady Lika, please stop if you continue." Lika coldly observed her distant opponent, believing that stopping now would be an insult to Jake's will. Renjis cried out in despair, "Sir Jake, please surrender." "Surrender for what when the fun show is not over?" Lika noticed Jake's terrible condition. She issued a final offer. "If you surrender and pledge loyalty, I will stop." The only reply was Jake's cryptic smile. Lika understood that even as a bastard, he still carried the pride of Eldrigan. She decided to respect her opponent by using all her strength. Greatsword martial skill, the first secret technique, was named Heavenly Thunder. Colossal pillar of lightning struck straight down from the sky. It completely obscured Jake's figure. Amidst Rengis's roar, the smoke and dust cleared, leaving only Jake lying motionless amidst the rubble, his body severely injured. Lika planted her sword into the ground, softly uttering words of regret. "The match ends here." She quietly turned and walked away, believing everything had officially concluded. Then a straightforward voice rang out from behind, "I understand now." Lika turned around in shock, witnessing a radiant surge of energy erupting from Jake's body. She couldn't believe her eyes as she saw him enveloped in blazing bolts of lightning. He was dusting himself off while observing his new power with fascination. When Lika pressed him on how he managed to do that, Jake just shrugged and replied frankly, "I don't know either." Leaving Lika completely frozen in astonishment, Jake excitedly boasted, "I deliberately took the attacks to understand this power, but somehow I can also use it now." Jake explained that while receiving the lightning attacks, he continuously utilized the Dragon King breath-breathing technique. It was the reaction between this breath and Lika's lightning aura that caused the thunder to accumulate inside his body. Before he realized it, Jake found he could manipulate that accumulated lightning. Though unclear on the exact principle, he began to suspect he possessed a special constitution, or perhaps the entire Eldrigan clan carried this unique bloodline, enabling them to perform the family martial skills. Jake laughed heartily. This truly was a wonderful training session. Blazing lightning bolts began to cover his hands. He stated clearly, "Thanks to you, I have reached the 2-star rank." Terrifying pressure burst from Jake's body, making him look like a true god of thunder amidst the ruins. Jake's amber eyes flashed with a sharp, dangerous glint, Just as Leica swung her greatsword, he vanished in a golden lightning flash and closed in on his opponent with a proud smile. A horrifying energy explosion occurred as Jake unleashed a lightning-fast counterattack, creating a blinding halo of light. Landing gently on the ground, Jake looked at his body and silently marveled at this new speed and power. He noticed that as the source of power increased, it directly affected his nerves and reinforced his entire body. He took a deep breath to regulate his breathing. I need to get used to this a little. Watching from afar, Rengis was completely overwhelmed by the battle, only able to stand and stare in shock. Jake easily dodged Lady Leica's lightning-fast slashes. Seeing her opponent no longer capable of effective attack, Leica shouted in frustration, "Who exactly are you mocking?" Jake smiled back sincerely, "I truly consider you a formidable opponent." Jake excitedly thought to himself, "It's been a while now, how about I create a new technique?" Leica asked back in confusion, "A technique?" Jake pondered for a moment then decided to call it a secret technique. Witnessing that confidence, Leica couldn't help but wonder in shock if Jake had received secret training. Taking advantage of Leica's distraction, Jake lunged forward. "You're distracted." The lady could only realize the situation was dire before Jake unleashed his decisive strike, the Dragon Ruin Destroyer secret technique, Extreme Thunder Claw. Officially end the intense match, Jake stood proudly, beaming a bright smile. This was truly an interesting match. Lying flat on the ground with her body limp, Leica was stunned, unable to believe the reality. "I lost." He felt that she still wasn't entirely convinced. The pressures of having to become the clan head and defeat her older brothers suddenly flooded back into Leica's mind. She bitterly realized she absolutely could not afford to lose. However, Jake approached with an expression full of admiration. "You are truly very strong." Seeing his opponent still dazed, he sincerely shared that he had learned a great deal. Jake extended his hand, flashing a sunny smile. "Let's spar again." "Okay." Faced with Jake's enthusiasm, the proud lady suddenly blushed, quietly looking at him with a completely changed gaze. Jake smiled radiantly, reaching out to pull the fallen lady to her feet. Seeing Jake's sincerity and overwhelming aura, Leica was shocked to realize the massive gap in their strength. A few hours later, inside a dark space within the rift, clan leader Banja El Dragon was single-handedly confronting a legion of grotesque monsters. With a sharp, authoritative gaze, he unleashed a wave of blazing red, oppressive dragon might. It shrouded the entire battlefield, terrifying the monsters. Instantly, Banja executed the Dragon Key Annihilation martial art. The first form, named Origin, created a terrifying power explosion that swept away all enemies in a single blow. Amidst the devastated scene after the battle, a closed soldier approached to respectfully report and received a cold glare from the clan leader. The soldier cheerfully announced momentous news: Lady Leica has reached the 2-star rank. Contrary to the jubilation of his subordinates, Banja maintained a cold and distant expression. He turned his back and walked away, contemptuously saying talent was nothing. Report when the girl proves useful. The soldier tried to explain that reaching 2-star at this age was a miracle, that Leica could reach 5-star by graduation. Banja remained completely unconcerned by those justifications. Trembling under the master's pressure, the soldier was forced to utter the final truth: Lady Leica had been defeated. Banja was skeptical of this news. He asked pensively if the girl had challenged an older child. The soldier quickly denied it, insisting that the one who defeated the young lady was a child of the same age named Jake. Hearing that name, Banja's eyes darkened. He murmured distantly, "Jake, that woman's child." The image of the woman with her slender back surfaced. He admitted she had martial talent but had traded it with her life. Banja repeated the fact that she died right when Jake was born. He wondered who had taught the boy to defeat a 2-star. Upon hearing the report that Jake had reached that level on his own without anyone's guidance, Banja decided firmly, "I understand, begin the first training session." Despite the subordinate worrying this was too early since the children had only been enrolled for a month, Banja held onto his brutal reasoning. He asserted that death treats everyone fairly. Only the strong have the right to survive. Sternly, Banja declared that those who do not pass the first trial are not worthy of being an Eldragon. He ordered his subordinate to report this matter to Freya, assign her the task of supervising the content and the entire process of the trial. Banja wanted Freya to closely follow Jake throughout the journey to see how the boy performed. Looking into the distance, the clan leader smiled faintly with hidden meaning. "Jake, huh? That sounds interesting." The next day at the training ground, the atmosphere of the trainees' practice was extremely lively. While Rengis and the other children were passionately performing the Dragon Seal combat art, a body-strengthening technique created by the 15th Chief Clan so that even children could master it. Meanwhile, Jake was performing an extreme physical conditioning exercise, instead of fiddling with a pile of rocks. Rengis, drenched in sweat, asked if Lord Jake did not plan to train. Jake replied blankly, "Don't you see me training?" Jake casually answered, "I already learned it," a statement that shocked Rengis into stammering, "Oh my god, that's awesome." Having just learned it a moment ago and already mastered it, Jake nodded in affirmation, "Of course. More importantly, Rengis, the flow of your power is going in the wrong direction. Turn around." A stream of golden energy from Jake's hand transferred into Rengis. The blue-haired boy asked blankly if he just floated. Jake adjusted the energy flow. This is the correct flow. Rengis felt a distinct change in his body. Rengis admired and thanked him, because Jake had truly mastered it. Jake asked petulantly if you doubted me. Rengis panically apologized, confessing this was the first time someone had taught him. He always felt desperate. He admitted he used to think the dragon seal combat art was too simple for someone as strong as Jake. Jake waved it off, saying he was impressed by its stability, recalling his own complex dragon ruin destruction technique. The Dragon Ruin Destruction combat art was complex, but possessed overwhelming power, starting from the first stance to the secret technique from the fight with Lika. Above all, the final stance carried a destructive power that once defeated even the Divine Dragon long ago. Jake excitedly mused to himself, I am also curious about other martial arts. Perhaps they have been modified. Truly exhilarating. He told Rengis that since he had finished learning the Dragon Seal combat art, he was training his body. Different people have different paces. Suddenly Rengis bowed his head and shouted loudly with determination. Please train me, I want you to guide me like just now. Before Jake's stunned expression, the blue-haired friend earnestly begged to become stronger, even if just a little. Jake calmly replied, I don't mind. Rengis asked blankly, really? Jake affirmed he was not lying. Right at that moment, a voice rang out from behind. Hey, in that case, me too. I also want to join the training. It was Lady Lika with her face flushed with embarrassment. Lady Lika is here too. Lika snapped back, asking if there was a problem. She admitted the pride of a chief candidate had been shattered by Jake when he overwhelmed her with his lightning aura. Lika shouted enthusiastically, I want to become even stronger. Strong enough to defeat my older brothers and you too. Jake looked pensively at the young lady burning with determination, silently assessing the situation. Lika hesitantly asked if it was not allowed. She explained that Vizik was also a candidate, so training with an opponent might not be okay. Rengis agreed because Jake carried the blood of the chief clan, being on the competition list. But Jake calmly replied he did not mind. He squinted at Lika's injury, wondering if she was okay since that blow should have kept her immobile for a month. Lika replied, I used a recovery potion, so there is no problem. Jake silently marveled at how effective the potion was, like a miracle drug. Rengis explained that vial was higher grade than the ones distributed at the entrance exam. Truly befitting Lady Lika's status. Jake smiled smugly. This is a wonderful era, isn't it? Being teased by Jake, Lika snapped back, insisting that without the medicine, she would have been immobile for a month. Then she worriedly asked if Jake would agree to train her, since he also needed time for his own practice. Jake flashed a bright smile. Of course, I will not refuse a young person full of ambition. Hearing this, Rengis broke into a sweat, mumbling in confusion, young person, you are also young, we are the same age. Jake just laughed it off, then turned to look straight into Lika's eyes, asking for confirmation, are you sure I am the one who defeated you? With eyes burning with determination, Lika affirmed that she had no right to choose. She clenched her fists, declaring that if being stronger meant becoming the chieftain, she would do everything. Jake asked curiously, she had mentioned the chieftain position before when she challenged him. Why was she so obsessed with it? Lika lowered her voice, revealing the bitter truth. If she did not become the chieftain, a political marriage was her only future. She could become the wife of some unpleasant man, or be forced to be a concubine of a stranger. What? Jake exclaimed in shock at the clan's barbaric customs. Lika explained that maintaining the Eldragon bloodline was of utmost importance, especially for the four great clans, because their source of primal power was very unique. Hearing this, Jake only wanted to run away, sickened by the mindset of these bastards. He roared in anger. What do you people take humans for? That monstrous custom, I will destroy it all. Just as he was seething with the urge to smash the clan, a sharp voice rang out, focus. Jake and Rengis were startled out of their wits, hurriedly looking towards where the sound came from. The air was tense. A radiant figure with long red hair appeared, leaving the group of kids bewildered, wondering what was happening. The instructor in charge introduced her. From today, there is a new instructor joining. Despite being busy, she personally came to guide you. Be grateful. The woman glided over like a breeze. You must be Miss Lika. Her sharp gaze made Lika freeze, unable to utter a word. This woman's speed was so fast it terrified everyone. She flashed a charming smile, winking as she praised, excellent reflexes, and your spiritual energy is not bad either. The guards broke into a sweat at her sudden appearance. Jake narrowed his eyes in alertness, realizing he had not sensed her until she revealed herself. Rengis hugged Jake tightly in fear, trembling as he asked who this powerful woman was. That is Miss Frigga Winkik, a member of the Black Dragon Guard, titled the Wind Goddess Frigga. She happily waved her hand. Hello everyone, nice to meet you. Her gaze stopped on Jake. You are Jake, right? Freya showed interest. Teacher Jake is still calm, you don't seem surprised. Jake slightly curled his lips, his eyes blazing with excitement. Nothing surprising at all, but this young lady seems to possess quite an interesting martial skill. Freya looked at Jake and thought to herself, no wonder the chieftain took an interest in this person. Jake observed intently, silently assessing her stealth technique was impressive, but what was more special was the martial skill she had comprehended. He noticed the flow of primal power concentrated in her lower body, a pattern he had never seen before. He deciphered the mystery of her silent footsteps. This must be why she wears shoes but makes no sound. What martial skill is this? Very interesting. Freya smiled and announced, "From today, I am your instructor. Let us work hard together." The trainees were astonished. "My god, it really is the wind goddess Freya." The old instructor added, "Miss Freya has reached the 6-star level. She is a key figure on the coaching team." He urged the kids to learn from her. The trainees were confused. The Black Dragon Guard is the chieftain's personal guard. Why would such an important figure appear here? "Will you really train us, Miss Freya?" Freya happily affirmed, "Of course. But she set a condition. Only if you pass my test." This news threw the kids into panic. "A test." Freya reassured them. "Don't worry, it is quite easy." He took out a shining spirit stone, announcing the challenge. "Keep this spirit stone intact and survive for 1 month in Poison Dragon Mountain." Jake thought to himself, "Oh, that name sounds familiar. That land is filled with highly toxic creatures. Even touching an ordinary blade of grass can be fatal. Truly a place of death." In his past life, Jake had trained there. The terrible memories still gave him goosebumps. He worried about the kids, but for them, is it a bit too soon? Freya coldly continued, "If the spirit stone is broken or lost during the trial, you will be immediately eliminated." One trainee tremblingly asked about the consequences of failure. Freya smiled cryptically, "Of course you will be expelled, if you survive." "Oh god, either way we get expelled," Freya explained. "Poisoning can be easily dealt with by using dragon breath to expel the toxins." She reassured them, "Just keep the spirit stone intact, and it will be fine." When a trainee worriedly asked about monsters, Freya's face suddenly turned dark and frightening. She coldly stated, "They just need to defeat them. Otherwise, they will have nothing to eat and die before the test ends." The direct threat made the kids' faces turn pale, trembling before a harshness far beyond their imagination. Seeing the tense atmosphere, Freya broke into a bright smile. "Don't worry, you still have 5 days to prepare. During that time, each person can choose a weapon and practice the Eldragon martial arts secret manual." She believed that if they found ways to deal with the monsters, survival would be easier. But a sharp glint flashed in her eyes. Freya warned that if they had not mastered the martial skill within 5 days, she would not be responsible for anything that happened. In response to a trainee's naive question about whether she would step in to save them, Freya laughed mockingly. She pointed at her blazing emblem, sternly declaring, "Eldragon is a place where the weak are weeded out. Only the strong have the right to survive." To her, failing to fight the monsters and meeting a tragic end was a given. Freya coldly said, "If you cannot pass this simple test, you might as well sleep forever on a bed full of poison." The pressure from the female instructor left the trainees speechless, sweating in fear. Witnessing this cruelty, Jake thought, "This place is nothing like the Eldragon I once knew." He remembered the warm past when son Gilliam happily carried his grandchild to show off, a stark contrast to the coldness of the present. Freya clapped her hands, cutting off his train of thought, announcing it was time to distribute martial skill manuals for each weapon type. The kids buzzed with choices, while Rengis stood frozen, confused about what to pick. Seeing his friend hesitating, Jake advised Rengis to choose the spear, since it was the weapon he had successfully used in the entrance exam. "Listen to me, you will definitely crush it. Just trust me." Lika was still deliberating over the lightning spirit greatsword arts. Even though it was only basic level, Jake immediately cut in. "Hey, Lika, I think you should choose the sword arts." In response to her bewildered look asking why, he frankly explained that this was the perfect thing to compensate for what she was lacking. "Teacher Jake has a point." Lika agreed and immediately chose that manual. Freya stood high above, looking down at the kids who had received the materials, coldly warning, "In the next 5 days, train as if your life depends on it. Otherwise, you will only end up dead." Her smile suddenly turned eerie as she announced another shocking piece of news. The seniors from 10 years ago would also participate in this challenge with the sole mission of stealing the new recruit's spirit stones. Those seniors were all seasoned warriors with bright, murderous eyes. Freya waved goodbye and reminded them that while Poison Dragon Mountain was vast, they would definitely be hunted fiercely, so they should give it their all. Rengis hugged his head in fear and screamed when he learned he had to face both monsters and seniors, who were all at least 2-star level. Even Lika was worried, because if they were ambushed by many people at once, most people's chances of survival were nearly zero. Contrary to his friend's panic, Jake calmly read a book and then let out a curt remark. Seeing them both staring at him, he leisurely suggested that if going alone was too difficult, they should form teams of 2 or 3 people. Jake analyzed that cooperating to hunt monsters was not forbidden, and the more people, the more efficient. Finding the advice reasonable, Lika and Rengis nodded in agreement, but wondered what Jake would do. With a radiant face and confident smile, he declared, Huh, me? Is there even a need to ask? Of course, I will enjoy this challenge alone. The answer made his two friends freeze in shock at his recklessness. Jake laughed loudly and urged everyone to find food before training, making Lika sigh and admit he was the oddest person she had ever met. The 5 days of preparation passed quickly. At the foot of the majestic Poison Dragon Mountain shrouded in mist, the trainees gathered in full, all in neat uniforms with weapons ready in hand. Freya appeared with a weathered look, glanced around at the spirited trainees, and clearly announced, "All present, are we? Let us begin." Even though Jake had suggested forming a team, Renjis could not help but worry about accompanying Lady Lika. He hesitated, wondering if a commoner who had not yet reached any star level was truly fit to stand alongside the orthodox nobles. Just then, Celine and Raymond, other promising members of East Hall, suddenly appeared, leaving Renjis extremely astonished. Celine cheerfully reassured him, "We are all the same here, Renjis." Raymond calmly explained that noble or commoner did not matter, because he agreed to join based on his high regard for everyone's abilities. Hearing those words of encouragement, Rengis gripped his spear tightly, determined to do his utmost so as not to become a burden to the team. Seeing the group was ready, Lika turned to ask Jake one last time, "But will you really go alone?" He calmly replied, "Of course that is the case." Witnessing that confidence, Raymond silently admired. "Excellent, I have been worried all this time, so this is the feeling of royal blood." Lika immediately snapped, demanding he not equate her with a weirdo like Jake, since she herself was trembling with worry. Jake asked blankly, "Are you scared? What is there to worry about?" He casually thought that with the best trainees like Lika all gathered, there was nothing to fear. Seeing Jake seemed overconfident, Rengis sighed. "Actually, there are many reasons for everyone to be worried, Sir Jake." Jake asked back, "Do even you think those people are truly capable?" Lika firmly asserted, "Of course." From the perspective of a grandmaster, Jake judged that Lika had been very wise to gather the most promising trainees in the class together. He noted their defensive and offensive abilities were all excellent, so this test would surely go smoothly. Rengis could only click his tongue. Right, Sir Jake has always been this confident. Just then, Freya appeared with a radiant smile. She clearly asked, "All right, everyone. Is everyone present?" Seeing that the trainees had already divided into groups, she nodded in approval, saying this was not a bad choice for those not yet truly proficient with their weapons. Freya held up the radiant blue spirit stone, clearly announcing the official start of the test. She emphasized that the mission for everyone was to survive for 1 month on Poison Dragon Mountain, while keeping the spirit stone intact. If by the end of the time the spirit stone remained, they would pass the assessment. However, a brutal rule was laid out. All spirit stones were identical, so if they lost theirs, the trainees could simply go and steal another from someone else. Not stopping there, as soon as the children found a hiding place on the mountain, the seniors would begin their hunt to seize the spirit stones from them. Standing from afar, the seniors smiled contemptuously, believing that dealing with these new recruits who had not even reached 1 star would be as easy as eating candy. Amidst the tense atmosphere, Jake still kept a pensive expression, silently observing everything around him. Those who stay quiet are usually the dangerous ones. Freya shouted loudly, "Now the explanation of the rules is finished. The test begins." Immediately, the trainees rushed off like arrows, creating a rumbling of footsteps across the school grounds. Before disappearing into the deep forest, Lika turned her head and shouted loudly, "Jake, you must survive for sure." Jake only silently watched the young lady's back and softly replied, "Yeah, you all too." From start to finish, he maintained that same ice-cold attitude. Freya found it strange and spoke up to remind him, "Be careful, aren't you supposed to go too?" When Freya pressed him on whether he was worried about something, he calmly turned and walked away, leaving behind an arrogant reply, "I have nothing to worry about. Now, if you will excuse me, supervisor." Watching the boy's back gradually disappear into the distance, Freya murmured softly, "What a strange kid." When night fell, the firelight from the supervisor's tents flickered in the silent space. A guard soldier approached Freya, expressing concern that this test seemed still too early for the new trainees. He wondered about the children's lacking combat experience, and asked himself how many would be strong enough to pass this challenge. Freya calmly reassured her subordinate not to worry too much, because although Poison Dragon Mountain had countless poisonous creatures, the quantity and quality of the monsters here were not truly concerning. She pointed out that most of them only ranged from 1 star to 2 star, levels that the trainees could basically handle on their own. The soldier bowed his head in acknowledgement, while Freya kept her eyes fixed on the dark mountain, where the harsh survival struggle had just begun. Freya's gaze suddenly turned deep. She silently calculated, "Nevertheless, I will still release that thing at the end." When the guard soldier beside her asked again, because he did not hear clearly, Freya immediately returned to her usual cheerful demeanor and waved her hand. "It is nothing." Right after that, she clearly ordered the senior trainees who were brimming with killing intent. Come on, it is time, you all set off too. Watching the backs of the hunters gradually disappear behind the mist, Freya smiled with anticipation, wondering how many poor children would survive this test. Seniors quickly crossed the dense forest with extreme excitement. Hey, you there! One of them shouted upon spotting the figure of Jake leisurely walking alone with a backpack on his shoulder. He silently mocked the boy's naivety. Found one already this soon? After all this time and still just lingering around a place like this, that man sneered. He signaled his comrades to act immediately. An arrow cut through the wind, flying straight toward Jake from the thick bushes. However, Jake suddenly turned his body. Using his bare hands, he caught the arrow just before it could touch him. He shouted excitedly, "I was waiting for you!" This insane action and unbelievable strength made the seniors freeze, in shock. Oh my god, what nonsense is that guy spouting? One of them realized the horrifying truth in horror. No, he blocked the arrow with his bare hands. Ignoring the opponent's shock, Jake leaped down from his previous position. His amber eyes blazed with arrogance. He flashed a bright smile and proclaimed loudly, "Now let the game begin." At Poison Dragon Mountain, a fierce survival battle unfolded as a giant frog monster lunged to attack. Celine screamed in terror. She swung her sword in a fierce counterattack, but as soon as she took down the target, another threat lurked behind her. Raymond spotted it in time and shouted a warning, "Celine, behind you." He quickly rushed over, using his sturdy shield to block the monster's lunge. Finally, Rengis threw a precise spear to finish the monster. Raymond breathed a sigh of relief and asked his teammates, "Alright, is everyone okay?" Looking over at Lika, the group was stunned to see she had single-handedly cleared the pack of monsters some time ago. Celine silently admired her, just as the rumors said. Amid the chaos, Lady Lika had taken down countless monsters. Lika proudly showed off her gleaming 2-star emblem. She winked mischievously. "Hey, don't forget I've already reached 2 stars. However, she also praised the group's progress after a week of non-stop training, especially Celine and Raymond, both of whom officially reached 1-star rank. At the lady's modesty, they both thanked her in unison, saying it was because of her guidance that they had advanced so quickly. Seeing his friends improve, Rengis felt a pang of envy as he remained stuck in place. Raymond and Celine approached to comfort him, advising him not to be impatient because in reality, Rengis had grown much stronger. Lika also chimed in to encourage him, saying that taking down an XK monster alone was an impressive feat. She reminded Rengis that Jake had trained him in spear skills, so reaching 1 star was only a matter of time. The sky gradually shifted to the brilliant red of sunset, signaling the end of a long day. Lika ordered the group, "Alright, it's getting dark, let's head home for Mom's home-cooked meal." As the team just returned to their shelter, they unexpectedly discovered a stranger present there. Lika's eyes sharpened. She growled and questioned the figure in the shadows. "What are you doing at our base?" A dry footstep echoed. In the silent night, it startled the entire group. From the darkness, a senior male student stepped out with a smug smile. "Finally found out, have you?" Lika, Rengis, and Raymond recognized the stranger as a senior. "You are from the 10-year-old class, right? You came to steal the Thalia crystals." The man frankly admitted it. He boasted proudly as a 2-star expert and easily found Lady Lika's base. Coming to steal, yet brazenly confirming it. How impressive. Lika growled fiercely. "Then why don't you turn back? You can't take us down on your own." That senior only sneered maliciously, a cold glint flashing in his eyes. "Who said I came alone?" Instantly, 3 other senior students, all at 2-star rank, suddenly revealed themselves and surrounded Lika's group. The leader sneered mockingly, "Even if it's Lady Lika, carrying 3 dead weights must be tough. So surrender now." He drew his sword from its sheath and launched a lightning-fast attack. The battle exploded violently. Lika swung her sword to block the leader's slash. She shouted angrily at her teammates, trying to hold on a little longer until he returned. While Lika was pinned down, Raymond had to use his shield to withstand the heavy blows. Celine and Rengis were also struggling under the suffocating pressure from the hunters. That senior kept attacking wildly while yelling, "Come on, hand over the crystal." Seeing his teammates at a disadvantage, Rengis was extremely flustered, not knowing how to escape the dire situation. Facing the suffocating pressure, the memory of that conversation with Jake suddenly flooded back into his mind. When he worriedly asked how to defeat a stronger opponent when he himself didn't have any stars, Jake had doused him with cold water. "Give up." The harsh answer made Rengis exclaim in shock, "What? Oh my god, mind blown." Jake calmly explained that it was only natural, because a person with 0 stars fighting a 3 or 4-star opponent was impossible. He reassured him that if the opponent was only 1 or 2 stars, he could still manage. Seeing his friend worried about the exam at Poison Dragon Mountain, where the monsters and seniors were mostly 2 stars, Jake stated firmly, "There is still a way, nothing new." The only way Jake taught him was to exploit an opening. He asserted that even a 0-star person like Rengis could turn the tables if he found the weakness of a 2-star opponent. When Rengis confusedly asked how to make them reveal an opening, Jake coldly laid out a brutal tactic: take the hit, endure and keep enduring until you see your opponent's opening. At Rengis' shock, Jake gritted out that the weak have no right to choose another way when facing a strong stronger enemy. Jake emphasized that this wasn't about whether Renjis could endure it. It was that he had to endure it, otherwise defeating the enemy would be nothing but a fantasy. He used Lika, who possessed electric power, as an example to affirm that Renjis could absolutely hold his ground against a 2-star opponent. Seeing that his friend was still too lacking in confidence, Jake advised him to believe in himself if he wanted to become strong. He gave one final firm piece of advice: don't overthink it. You don't need to find openings or different powers. Seeing Renjis dazed, he explained that he just needed to patiently wait for his opponent to reveal an opening, and then thrust his spear right into it. Jake pointed and stated, yes, that's it. That is the ultimate secret to defeating a stronger foe. Back in the present, that senior roared in frustration. Damn it, this guy is as stubborn as a mule. He continuously unleashed powerful slashes while Renjis gritted his teeth and endured. He thought to himself, that's right, he is weaker than him, so he must endure and wait at any cost until an opening appears. Losing patience, that senior yelled, damn it, then leaped up to perform a powerful overhead strike. Is this guy so mad he's gone crazy or what? What the hell is he doing? That very moment, Renjis's eyes lit up as he realized the opportunity had arrived. Right now, he gathered all his strength to deliver a fatal spear thrust. The spearhead shot straight into the opponent's abdomen, catching him off guard. Amid the night, Renjis stood proudly upright, the single star on his chest blazing brightly, marking his spectacular breakthrough. Across the battlefield, Lika had also just finished her match. She noted that the other side seemed to be done. Her opponent screamed in shock and disbelief. He exclaimed that he was also a 2-star, yet he was completely overwhelmed. He was utterly dominated by the terrifying force of Lika's heavy sword. She understood that by learning the levering technique, she had channeled her power into the heavy sword, and all of it was thanks to Jake's earlier suggestion. Daring to target us was your bad luck. Lika growled as she unleashed the decisive lightning strike. The senior could only utter a desperate no, before being completely engulfed by the electric current. A brilliant energy explosion signaled the end of the battle, causing the attacker to fall and immediately lose consciousness. Lika quickly sheathed her sword and turned back to ask her teammates with concern, everyone, are you all right? Seeing that everyone was safe, she breathed a sigh of relief and declared, we won. The group burst into joy, their cheers echoing through the forest clearing as they had just overcome a life-and-death challenge. Lika enthusiastically congratulated Renjis for his spectacular breakthrough to 2-star. The blue-haired boy was so moved that his face turned red, stammering his thanks to Celine and Raymond for always believing in and standing by him. Looking at the sword in her hand, Lika felt silently satisfied seeing that everyone now had their own star and could confidently fight opponents of the same rank. However, amidst the joy, she still wondered about one person. She asked herself how Jake was doing, while her group was temporarily safe. Then, in another area of Poison Dragon Mountain, a true nightmare was unfolding. A senior student was frantically fleeing, his face twisted in absolute terror. He ran while screaming in despair, don't come here. Tears and sweat streamed down his face as he realized he was being hunted by something beyond his comprehension. He yelled, demonic, what the hell is that? Amid the gloomy night mist, a horrifying scene appeared with rows of students lying motionless. Standing imposingly amidst blazing blue spirit energy was a lone figure, radiating a terrifying pressure that made any witness shiver and cry out, what is that monster? The senior students were frantically fleeing in utter panic. Every one of their faces was twisted in fear. They ran while screaming in despair, stay away from me. Standing imposingly amidst blazing blue spirit energy, Jake wore an eerie smile as he watched the backs of those trembling who called him a monster. He spoke up, what's wrong? Why won't anyone play with me anymore? That would be too boring. The arrogant laughter of the great master echoed through the night, sending chills down anyone who heard it. The arrogance of the hunters now completely collapsed as they realized the harsh truth. They blurted out, that guy is crazy. Why is a lower year hunting seniors like this? Weren't we supposed to be the hunters? In the midst of the chaos, an unfortunate senior stumbled and got his leg firmly stuck in a tangle of vines. He gasped out a startled oh, then froze as he saw Jake slowly approaching with blood-red, murderous eyes. Jake stretched out his hand and coldly declared, this is getting pointless. I'm sick of this boring game of tag. Get up and use that thing. Come on, fight me for fun. His amber eyes flashed a sharp glare that made the opponent only manage a terrified scream before fainting from sheer fear. Jake sighed in disappointment as he looked at the pile of defeated soldiers lying around. He muttered, oh man, seriously? Why are you all so cowardly and spineless? Weren't you all eager to fight at first? Watching the backs of those fleeing, he yelled, don't leave me alone here. However, Jake faltered, his gaze turning towards dark bushes with a meaningful look. He said, that's right. Maybe you all should observe more carefully. Just standing there watching like that means my direction isn't problematic, right? He smiled with amusement before vanishing into the night. Then I'll just go ahead and have fun playing on. At that moment, a small sound came from behind, startling the hidden observer. Hiding behind the bushes, a supervising soldier was drenched in sweat from shock. He muttered, "What is this?" Being able to sense my presence after detecting the seniors. Pretty impressive. I have to report this. He quickly withdrew to the base point to meet Freya. Seeing her subordinate return, Freya calmly ordered, "You're back. Report." The soldier respectfully replied yes. 1 week after the exam started, about 30% of the 7-year-old class students have been eliminated. However, remaining students are gradually adapting. I believe this number won't drop much more from here. Freya pondered while studying the map, then asked, "Is that so? What about the senior students?" The soldier hesitated, his face clearly showing confusion. "The senior students, they are fleeing now." Freya asked in surprise, "Fleeing? The seniors? What monster on Poison Dragon Mountain could make them run away?" The soldier tremblingly revealed the shocking truth. "It is Master Jake. He is currently actively attacking the senior students." Initially, the senior students tried to resist, but now they are all scattering in panic. The faces of the supervising soldiers all showed utter shock. They discussed, "Who the hell is this Jake anyway? He's even enthusiastically sending off every senior student. This is truly unheard of." One soldier muttered in assessment, "Even if he is the clan leader's son, Jake is still an anomaly that defies all logic. He has far surpassed the concept of an ordinary genius. He is essentially a true monster." Freya observed thoughtfully, "I also find him very strange. He deliberately chose to act alone and leisurely appears so unexpectedly. Could it be that from the very start, he wasn't the one being hunted, but rather the hunter himself?" Suddenly, a dull thud accompanied by the heavy clatter of iron chains rang out, startling the soldiers into alertness. "That sound is," Freya cried out excitedly, "Oh my, has it arrived? I've been waiting." A burly man carrying a massive, chained iron cage on his shoulder stepped forward and asked, "Lady Freya, where should I place it?" Freya ordered bluntly, "Just put it down there." Soldiers panicked and shouted as they realized the danger. They clamored, "What is this? Lady Freya, what is that? Don't tell me you're planning to release this thing into Poison Dragon Mountain." They were terrified because the creature inside possessed 3-star power, something the current children could not possibly handle. Freya smiled reassuringly. "Everything has been specially adjusted. This monster will only attack those who have reached 2-star rank." Freya explained that ordinary children would not be significantly affected by this creature. When the guard soldier questioned why they would perform such a dangerous act, she coldly revealed, "This is the clan leader's order." This information completely shocked him, leaving him only able to stammer in astonishment. From the clan leader, truly? Looking at the wooden cage shaking with ferocious, blood-red eyes inside, Freya schemed silently. "Let's see how he will handle this." She knew Jake was strong enough that even veterans called him a monster, so she was very curious if he could handle this thing. Freya ordered it to be released at dawn. As the morning sunlight just began to peek over Poison Dragon Mountain, Rengis's group suddenly stopped moving. Rengis asked anxiously if the ground had just trembled. Lika and Raymond also sensed something wrong, their faces tense. Lika wondered worriedly if it was another attack from the senior lock enforcers, while Raman guessed it was just a wild boar. Rengis could not shake a strange sense of unease enveloping the group. Suddenly Lika yelled out a panicked warning. "Hey, a tree is falling. Everyone run to another spot quickly." The group swiftly leaped out of the way just as the ancient tree trunk crashed to the ground. From within the rubble, a massive stone creature gradually revealed itself. Raymond and Rengis trembled in shock seeing the glowing red eyes of the entity lumbering towards them, a golem. At the same time elsewhere, Jake sat bored on a pile of monsters he had just defeated. He sighed in weariness, beginning to feel bored. For him, having no one left to fight was truly a disappointing thing. Suddenly, an extremely powerful tremor shook the entire forest, catching Jake's attention. Sensing the strange presence, he realized it had been a long time since a demon beast of this level appeared. Jake wondered if the instructors had deliberately released it into this area. With the mindset of a master, he feared a 3-star opponent would be too much for the current kids. This dangerous thing should have been dealt with before the exam, but then Jake suddenly realized a truth. He understood they deliberately released it to test the students, making him curious about what they were planning. Instead of worry, his eyes blazed with extreme excitement. "Think I am scared? Not a chance." He laughed arrogantly, telling himself he would have more fun. Unable to sit still and watch a tasty morsel, he immediately dashed off to find the 3-star monster. Jake ran, regretting that it was not closer for more fun. At another corner of Poison Dragon Mountain, Lika's group was struggling with the stone golem. Celine shouted, and then unleashed a powerful slash. But the sword only created sparks without leaving a single scratch on the monster's body. She exclaimed in shock, unable to believe it was that hard. The shield-bearer immediately charged to assist. Using his shield, he struck a powerful blow accompanied by a mighty roar. Yet the golem remained unmoving, not budging, startling the shield-bearer into admitting even his full-strength attack did nothing. Seeing the critical situation, Lika immediately unleashed a blazing aura, a lightning-tempered slash. The strike carried a thunderous power as it came down, Finally, a small crack was created on the golem's stone shell. Lika quickly realized the key. Only using energy force could break the shell, meaning only a 2-star could defeat it. Seeing the monster still lumbering towards them, Rengus worriedly asked what to do. Why was it so dumb, just waiting to be pointed at? Leica decisively made a risky choice. Draw its attention, everyone run. The suggestion made Rengus exclaim in shock. What? He firmly refused to abandon a comrade. No, we cannot leave you behind, Leica. Knowing it would cause hurt, Lika still coldly poured cold water. I know saying this will hurt someone, but you all will only get in my way. She pointed at the small crack on the golem's arm, explaining she had used all her energy force just to make it crack a little, while with their current abilities, the rest could not even scratch the stone shell. The blunt words made Celine only lower her head in dismay. However, Raymond unexpectedly stepped forward with a determined look. That is right, we cannot scratch it, but we can provide support so Lady Lika can strike more precisely. With teammates like these, no wonder they could not fight nonstop. Raymond's courage renewed the group's strength. Celine regained her spirit, promising to try her best. Rengus enthusiastically added, that is right. If we all fight together under your guidance, maybe we really have a chance. Seeing her teammates' unity, Lika gave a faint smile. Everyone, very well. If so then, golden lightning began to blaze around the young lady's body. Raymond immediately raised his tower shield to lead, shouting loudly, support me. Lika also took a running start to leap, declaring clearly, I am coming. The coordination is quite good, no joke. The battle erupted fiercely as Raymond bravely used his shield to block the golem's 1,000-pound punch. Though the immense pressure shook his body and made him cough blood, the shield-bearer stubbornly held his position. Seizing the opportunity, Celine and Rengus simultaneously attacked from below to distract the monster. Above, Lika had closed in on the target with her sword blazing thunderously. She poured all her power into the final strike and yelled out, soul-severing heavy sword technique, heavenly thunder. A massive pillar of light carrying a thunderous, earth-shattering force slammed straight down, creating a blinding explosion that violently shook the entire area. As the dust gradually cleared, Lika stood there panting heavily. She had to drive her sword into the ground to keep her exhausted body steady. Seeing this, Rengus rushed over in a panic, asking worriedly, are you okay? She softly said that the recent attack had consumed all her inner energy, then turned to ask Han if Raymond was injured. Just as Raymond replied he was fine, and Lika was about to order a retreat to the base, then a huge black shadow suddenly appeared behind them. The golem's glowing red eyes were full of menace, freezing everyone in terror. Rengus was flung far away while Gulen was still there. It suddenly reached out and grabbed Lika in its giant stone hand. Being squeezed tightly, Lika gritted her teeth in pain. She bitterly realized she had lost her vigilance, never expecting it could still move after that lethal blow. Watching their comrade in danger, Celine and Zaman could only scream in despair. Rengus struggled up, firmly gripped his spear and charged straight at the monster, shouting, let her go. However, the golem silently swung its fist. It threw a heavy punch, immediately intending to crush the blue-haired boy. But in that moment of danger, reinforcements arrived just in time. A large tree trunk was slammed hard into the golem's body. This caused it to crash to the ground, creating a thick cloud of dust. Rengus immediately rushed over to support her, saying, are you all right, my lord? Lika was still dazed, answering weakly, but inwardly she could not help wondering who had come to their aid. As the group was still bewildered, a calm voice rang out from behind. Aya, really now? What's all this noisy racket? Recognizing the familiar voice, Rengus and Lika both cried out in surprise. It was Jake. The black-haired boy appeared with a bright smile, casually running over and waving to his comrades as if nothing had happened. Oh, what's going on here? Going back a few minutes, when he saw the dazzling gold flash in the sky, he immediately recognized it as Lika's lightning and understood her group had encountered the target first. Jake shot forward like a whirlwind, feeling a pang of regret that in his prime this vast distance would have been nothing. Seeing the figures of promising friends like Rengus, Jimin, and Celine flash through his mind, Jake could not help but worry, facing a 3-star opponent. How long could they hold out? To arrive in time, Jake decided, alright, I'll try that new technique I learned the other day. He stopped in front of an ancient tree. He dug his small hands firmly into the trunk, then used terrifying strength to rip it up by the roots. With a loud roar, Jake hurled the tree trunk like a giant spear straight at the monster. Content merged into the line above. Witnessing the power of the attack, he said smugly, this style is pretty good. Jake silently praised himself for taking the time to study the giant dragon basic martial arts and dragon nurturing technique distributed before the exam. Although they were only basic guides for circulating inner energy, they perfectly suited his current physique. Jake smiled, remembering his past life 1,000 years ago, when he had already been a master of long-range attacks. Pushing aside the nostalgic memories, Jake continued rushing towards his comrades. I need to do something right now. His sudden appearance left Rengus and Lika only able to shout in shock. "It's Jake." Seeing everyone stunned, Jake casually waved his hand in greeting. "Hey, hello, you guys all okay?" As Rengus panicked and pointed at the threat of the golem, Jake just said, "Oh," with great interest. Hearing the name of this giant stone creature for the first time, Jake observed the golem, realizing it had an aura but no life force, truly a bizarre entity. An unexpected attack struck down, causing his comrades to shout in worry. Jake, be careful, casually blocked the golem's punch with one hand with utmost ease, inwardly evaluating its shell as quite hard. Without an attack enveloped in energy force, it couldn't be broken, but defeating it in a conventional way would be too boring, wouldn't it? Watching from a distance, Rengus and Lika could only look on anxiety, inwardly marveling at Jake's recklessness. Lika couldn't help but wonder why he found such a hair-trigger situation boring. Golem continuously unleashed punches with the force of 1,000 pounds. But Jake quickly evaded them with a terrifying speed. He shouted loudly to command the entire group. "This is very dangerous, so you guys should fall back and use items." Hearing the order, the youngsters hastily retreated to leave the stage for Jake. He gathered power into his fist, then charged straight at the target. Jake thought to himself, "If the outer shell was this hard, let's see if the inside was truly solid." He declared with excitement, "Let me test it out." He then immediately executed the Dragon Slayer technique, the first stance. Right after, Jake followed up with the second stance named Rupture, creating a horrific explosion from within the golem's body. Instead of attacking the shell, he had filled it with true energy from the inside, causing it to explode completely. Standing amidst the rubble, Jake smugly asked, "How about that? A success, right?" He wore a satisfied smile, inwardly feeling that this era was starting to become more interesting. After the test ended, Freya was absolutely furious when facing Jake. She screamed in anger. The upperclassmen's test was clearly to attack the underclassmen to steal crystals, but you went and attacked them instead. No one has ever done that. Because of Jake's crazy actions, none of the upperclassmen trainees collected any crystals and all had to retake the test. "It's over," he reported everything. Faced with the reprimand, Jake just clicked his tongue innocently, believing he hadn't done anything against the rules. Freya sighed in exasperation, reminding Jake to immediately change that calm tone of his when standing before the clan leader. Seeing him still naively asking why, she coldly warned that he would be eliminated, even if he was just a child. Still, Freya insisted she wouldn't let that happen, causing Jake to inwardly lament the cruelty of this place. Standing before the majestic door guarded by sentries, Freya clearly announced, "Member of the guards, Freya Windkick, I have arrived per the summons." After a commanding enter came from inside, the two stepped into the luxurious office of Banja el Dragon. Freya respectfully asked permission and introduced that she had come along with Jake. Banja stared intensely at his illegitimate son, pressing for the reason why he had attacked the upperclassmen trainees. Jake sighed in annoyance as everyone kept asking the same question, and he asked back again, "But so I'm not allowed to attack them at all?" Jake calmly reasoned that the only conditions were to survive for a month and keep the crystal. He hadn't heard any rule forbidding attacking the upperclassmen, so he had freely used his time. He added a challenging remark, "If it was a forbidden action, you should have clearly stated it before the start." Jake's arrogant answer turned Freya's face pale with fear. Instantly, a wave of crimson, evil dragon might burst forth from Banja. Terrible pressure enveloped the entire room. Freya collapsed under the unbearable force, panicking and screaming that this pressure would kill him. But Jake stood as firm as a rock amidst the destructive energy. He frowned in displeasure, told her to shut up and stop threatening him, then looked the clan leader straight in the eye and questioned him. "Did you call me here just to ask about these trivial matters?" Faced with the child's toughness, Banja narrowed his eyes sternly and asked exactly how he had done it. "Done what?" "According to the report, you not only defeated the Seal Guardian, but also took down a golem." He noticed something unusual about a child who could remain eerily calm in his presence. He pressed on, asking how a bastard child like him could possess such power. Jake curled his lips slightly, his amber eyes glowing with confidence as he replied that there was no reason, it was innate talent. Banja's gaze darkened, conceding that his attitude was indeed as arrogant as the rumors claimed, but he still rewarded him for defeating the golem. The clan leader offered two valuable choices, a treasure from the Dragon Vault or access to the second floor of the Dragon Script Pavilion. Freya, standing nearby, could not help but be stunned by this overly generous reward. It was widely known that the Dragon Script Pavilion and the Dragon Vault were places storing rare treasures and secret techniques for over 1,000 years, dating back to the time of progenitor Jake. These were secret treasures managed strictly, storing legendary weapons, spirit medicines, magical artifacts, and forbidden books. In particular, to reach the second floor of the Dragon Script Pavilion, one had to achieve extremely outstanding merits. Freya was astonished that Jake's disrespectful attitude was still considered outstanding, while he silently thought the clan leader was stingy. When Banja ordered them to withdraw, Jake did not stop, saying he still had many things to say. Sensing the situation was unstable, Freya panicked, clamped his mouth shut, then dragged him away, bowing and asking for permission to leave the room. But just as they reached the door, Jake suddenly stopped and dropped a provocative remark aimed at Banja. As long as you keep suppressing your emotions like that, no matter how hard you try, you will never become stronger. The words struck a nerve, causing Banja's draconic pressure to erupt violently in suppressed rage. Freya's face turned pale with fear. She quickly pulled Jake out of the room and told him to be quiet. The clan leader sat alone in the main hall, immersed in terrifying silence after the bastard child's declaration. As soon as they left the room, Freya yelled angrily, asking what on earth he was thinking. "How dare you speak with that attitude in front of the clan chief? Did you not listen to what I told you before entering the room?" Jake remained nonchalant, asking what was wrong with her. He had held back as much as he could, making Freya nearly faint from shock. Jake calmly explained that Banja was his biological father, so there was nothing to fear. Freya stared at the boy, her mind in turmoil, thinking he was no ordinary child. Just who was he? Facing Freya's question, Jake only smirked and told her not to be crazy. He was just himself. Why so much curiosity? The boy's mystery made Freya ponder the clan's harsh order. She understood that everyone drank the ancient dragon's blood, and no one opposed the clan chief who held the Dragon King's power. But she could not understand how this child could be so calm before that majestic existence, so she decided to investigate Jake's birth records. She quickly changed the subject to the reward, asking if he chose the second floor of the Dragon Script Pavilion or a treasure from the Dragon Vault. Jake raised 2 fingers, demanding both, but was rejected by Freya, so he pouted in disappointment. "Could you not help?" Jake looked at the clan's grand architecture, silently affirming that his goal was knowledge. After 7 years of neglect in the annex, he realized he lacked far too much knowledge about this era. He was curious about the spirit medicines and new tools of humanity over the past 1,000 years, while Rengus was ecstatic to enter the Dragon Script Pavilion. His green-haired friend excitedly shared that the martial techniques he had just learned were good, but this was a chance to access even higher skills. Seeing Rengus mutter to himself that he had to give it his all, Jake asked in confusion, was there a time limit? Just then Lika appeared and confirmed that was correct. The basic rules were probably the same. Lika explained the rules of the Dragon Script Pavilion. Each person could only borrow 1 book, but you could read as many as you liked within the time limit, so time management was crucial. Jake nodded in understanding. Lika suddenly turned to ask with a suspicious tone why he chose the Dragon Script Pavilion over the Dragon Vault. Jake calmly replied that knowledge was more important to him right now. Lika pointed at the towering spire, reminding him that the second floor contained rare martial art books with a level far exceeding that of the first floor. Lika proudly asserted that nothing was better than her soul-devouring heavy sword art, but Jake was busy observing the building and paid no attention. She called out loudly asking if he was listening, but was completely ignored by Jake. When they reached the entrance, the stern overseer announced that the time inside the building was 5 hours. They should use it quietly and strictly follow the rules. Jake wondered whether 5 hours was long or short. Rengus quietly replied it was probably quite long. The group discussed strategy. First, they had to choose a book to borrow, then try to read others within the allotted time. Jake nodded in understanding. As soon as they stepped inside, everyone was overwhelmed by the grandeur of the Dragon Script Pavilion. Jake silently assessed that this place was more impressive than he had imagined. Enchanted by the smell of books, he could just dive in and sleep there. Standing before the vast treasury of knowledge of the Eldragon clan after 1,000 years, Jake grinned excitedly, thinking to himself, let us see if there was any knowledge that truly piqued his interest. The Grandmaster confidently strode into the endless rows of bookshelves, beginning his journey to find the power that would return him to his peak. What the hell is this? Jake exclaimed in shock as he just opened the first pages of a book in the Dragon Script Pavilion. He could not believe his eyes at the shocking concepts of rifts, chaos, and magic. Over the past 1,000 years, the world had changed so much that there was too much information he knew nothing about. Lying flat on the floor amidst the towering rows of books, Jake pondered that terrifying period of 1,000 years. About 900 years ago, a spatial rift called the Rift suddenly opened, connecting this world to the chaotic realm of Pandemonium. Monsters poured out from everywhere, forcing humanity to cultivate a special energy within themselves to fight for survival. The Eldragon clan stood shoulder to shoulder with powerful warriors from the other world. From this, 4 major branches formed, Typona, Phoebus, Thavius, Livius, and Bahamut, which still exist to this day. Jake suddenly recalled the black bone armor surrounding the wild boar and Lika's lightning aura, understanding that it all came from that chaotic world. Although he blamed himself for lacking knowledge, what intrigued Jake the most was magic, a novel technology. He frantically searched but found no instruction manual, angrily shouting because they weren't placed next to the history books. In the midst of his frustration, a voice echoed throughout the building, demanding silence. Jake was startled to realize that voice had no breath. It was merely a sound transmitted in a strange way. He suspected this was sound transmission magic, which required no external energy. Suddenly, a burst of golden light erupted. A series of books lit up, floated, and swirled around Jake. He He could only cry out in shock before being sucked into a vortex of energy right in the middle of the library. Seeing the energy threads controlling the flying books, his eyes lit up with excitement. Oh, using power like threads to move objects. Interesting technique. As he was absorbed, a dignified voice rang out again to remind him, please maintain silence. Unfazed, Jake shouted back, how can I stay quiet in front of something this interesting? Come out in front of me right now and teach me directly. Immediately, the energy threads tightened around his body. It is closing time, the mysterious voice finished its sentence. Jake was thrown out of the dragon script pavilion like an arrow. He tumbled in the air and landed clumsily on the ground. Ouch, take it easy with everything. Watching the tower gate slam shut, Jake grumbled, another thing I don't know about. Just let me have a proper look. Seeing his disheveled state, Rengis and Lika hurried over to check on him. Jake just smiled sheepishly. Hee hee, I just got a little too excited. How about you all? Find anything you like? Rengis proudly showed the book in his hand. Yes, I borrowed the martial skill scroll Cloudwater spear art and think I learned a simple footwork technique. Celine chimed in cheerfully. I also learned a footwork technique from this Windflower swordsmanship scroll. Even Raymond couldn't hide his smug look. I learned the Eldragon style Guardian swordsmanship from this Guardian shield scroll. Seeing his friends excitedly showing off their gains, Jake could only smile wryly to himself. All those martial skills were things he had created to kill time in his past life. Jake turned to ask Lika, what did you choose? Lika held up an old, worn book. This one is the Heavy Wave Greatsword art created by the first clan head, and a revised and improved version by the 15th clan head. Jake's gaze turned contemplative. The 15th clan head again. The Dragon Breath combat technique and the Dragon Slaying Strike were also created by that same clan head. He observed the records in the tower silently and realized many martial skills he had once created all had improved versions by this clan head placed right next to them. Jake smiled faintly, full of hidden meaning. Very interesting. Walking out of the manor, Jake thought to himself, I thought it would be boring coming here, but now I can't wait to see what happens next. Time flew by and 5 years later found them at the Eldragon Academy. Lika, now a beautiful and composed 12-year-old girl, was striding down the hallway looking for her teammates. Jake, where is everyone? Seeing a passing student, she asked and received the answer. Lady Lika, Lord Jake, and the others have already gone to the training ground. At the training ground, the atmosphere was extremely serious as Jake's group trained with enthusiasm. Rengis, Celine, and Raymond had all matured, now possessing much more professional combat gear. Standing in the middle of the arena, the 12-year-old Jake exuded a dignified and mysterious aura. His sharp amber eyes displayed the profound strength he had gained after 5 years of intense training. In the clan head's office, Banja Eldragon was carefully examining an important report regarding the appearance of a special rift. Then, the commander of the Black Dragon Legion sternly reported that there was a high probability of magic wellspring water existing inside this rift. Banja pondered and asked about the certainty of the information, receiving a firm nod from his subordinate. However, and was worried because the rift appeared in a troublesome location, causing the clan leader to frown in calculation. This trip is going to be a real headache. Magic wellspring water was a miraculous liquid that turned its drinker into a true mage, converting primordial force into mana, and opening up new techniques that would change the world's landscape. Because of its value, fierce territorial disputes erupt across the world to claim magic springs. In this age of magic, the number of mages determined a clan's military strength. But ironically, the entire Eldragon territory did not have any natural magic springs. For a clan without a magic spring, the only way to obtain magic wellspring water was to risk conquering special rifts. Currently, Eldragon only had a few elite mages, including Banja, who had obtained the wellspring water through arduous expeditions. They were being overwhelmed by other clans who relied on natural magic springs. Capturing the new rift was a vital mission, but I'm worried that this location, the bereft Dragon Forest, was a complicated area where border conflicts frequently occurred. This vast forest extended beyond Eldragon's border into the territory of the Sebroth clan, who arrogantly called the place the Bereft Hound Forest. Even though the rift was located on Eldragon's land, considering its scale and position, its area of influence would extend into the enemy's domain. And affirmed that with a sense of smell as sharp as wild dogs, the Sebroth clan would soon detect it and march their forces over to cause trouble. Banja Eldragon assessed that they needed to prepare a sufficiently strong force to control the situation in case of a direct confrontation with Sebroth. Since it was a special rift, options were limited for both sides. He stated firmly, "We naturally have to compete. We must act before they can even realize it." Immediately, the clan leader ordered and to notify all dragon teams to organize a rigorous selection period, and bowed his head in acceptance with a solemn expression. Understood. At the same time, Lika stood with her arms crossed, observing and marveling that Jake had truly gone all out. Jake was now a young man with keen eyes, sparring simultaneously against all three of his close friends. Celine unleashed the elusive Windflower Scattered Blossoms sword art, Raymond used the Eldragon Guardian shield with powerful punches, and Rengis executed the extremely tricky Cloudwater Water Pierce spear art. Amid the relentless attacks, Jake calmly dodged, even flashing a smug smile when Rengis's spear tip was barely an inch from his neck. That strike was decent. However, Jake immediately made harsh comments to help his teammates improve. He frankly pointed out that Rengis was putting too much force into his moves, causing his spear technique to lose its inherent flexibility. Turning to Celine, Jake criticized her for focusing too much on speed while neglecting balance, demanding she learn to distribute her center of gravity properly. Finally, he praised Raymond for doing fairly well, but still reminded his friend to practice attacking more instead of just passively defending. Jake clapped his hands to signal, "Come on, one more time." Then he immediately plunged back into the frenzied training session. This left Leica standing by, exasperated by the bizarre sight. Leica immediately criticized him for daring to block an attack head-on without using his vital energy to protect his body. Jake brushed it off, claiming this was also serious training, showing off his toned muscles and asserting it was the result of intense conditioning. Watching Jake argue with her while ignoring his friends charging at him, Leica could only hold her head in helplessness, as everything around him defied common sense. Seeing Jake defend without any vital energy, she told his friends to never compare him to them, because he was not a normal person. Leica revealed that the upperclassmen had also given him a respectful nickname, the Monster Child of the East District, and asked if she wanted to train with the group. Leica nodded in agreement, but said she first needed to share an important piece of information. Based on a diagram of the North, West, South, and East districts, Leica assessed that the group would soon face off against children from the other dragon nests. This news left Rengis and Raymond so shocked their mouths hung open. Meanwhile, Celine sank into thought, realizing the next test had finally arrived. Jake asked in confusion how she knew about these major matters. Leica answered frankly that she could tell just by observing the trainer's attitudes and conversations. Jake admitted he had never paid attention to such trivial details, causing Leica to sigh and mock him for being the most carefree hair candidate she had ever seen. However, she suddenly became serious and reminded Jake to be especially careful. Leica revealed that in the West District, there was a formidable opponent, also a strong candidate for the position of next family head like them. Instead of worrying, Jake broke into an excited smile, thinking this would definitely be very interesting, then said confidently, "I can take them all on alone." A few days later, the atmosphere at the academy became lively. Strangely, all students from every class were gathered in one place. Rengis noticed the unusual scale of the gathering, while Jake inwardly confirmed this was the event Leica had predicted. The group stood in the middle of the schoolyard, nervously waiting for the official announcement from the family. Just then, Freya appeared with an overwhelming presence, coldly ordering everyone to fall silent immediately. After the crowd had completely quieted down, she clearly declared that starting today, and for the next 3 days, a grand battle would officially take place. All students would have to directly confront children from other dragon nests to determine who was superior. Facing the tough challenge, Jake was not daunted at all but instead wore a challenging smile, ready for the fight. Over the next 3 days, all students would step into direct confrontation with children from other dragon nests. The shocking news from Freya caused murmurs in the crowd, because these inter-district matches usually only occurred during the graduation exams. Freya emphasized that although there were many reasons she could not disclose, the winner would be entrusted with a very special mission. Hearing this, Jake's eyes lit up with interest at a special case that forced everyone to make such a trade-off. The match would follow an elimination format to select the 7 best representatives from each of the East, West, North, and South districts. Freya ordered the finalization of the representative list before the end of today. When Rick asked if the 7 people would be chosen from their grade, Freya confirmed the selection would take place across all grades. Rick and the seniors did not hide their contempt. They thought the lowerclassmen were nothing but trash, and that besides them, no one had enough real strength to fight. Rick arrogantly roared, forcing everyone to nominate representatives for the seniors, while he proudly asserted no one would dare to object. Leica unexpectedly stepped forward and firmly objected, arguing that only choosing seniors was unfair, and that she herself was fully qualified for this position. Rick laughed mockingly, saying Leica was misunderstanding the matter of strength, but he immediately fell silent when she radiated a terrifying pressure from beneath her feet, then said coldly, "You have underestimated the wrong person." The seniors were stunned to realize Leica had reached the 3-star level, far surpassing the rumor that she was only at peak 2-star. Leica challenged whether there were really 7 seniors stronger than her, leaving Rick stammering excuses that she was just an exception. Just as Rick was trying to insult the lowerclassmen as useless, Jake suddenly spoke up, cutting in coldly, "You're giving me a headache. You people are too noisy." Enraged, Rick roared to assert his authority, but Jake remained unfazed. He approached with a sharp gaze, suggesting they all settle things once and for all. Jake broke into an excited grin, making a shocking proposal. How about we fight until only 7 people are left standing? Faced with his excessive brutality, Leica shouted to stop him and quickly calmed the situation with a more reasonable plan. She clearly proposed organizing a fair preliminary round for everyone who wanted to participate in the match 3 days later, regardless of grade. Leica challenged the seniors. If you're confident in your strength, then jump in, okay? Although they felt this was a waste of time, with the crowd watching, Rick and the upperclassmen were forced to accept. As soon as things were settled, Leica turned to ask Jake if he would participate. Jake calmly nodded, but he unexpectedly called out to Rengis, Raymond, and Selene, demanding that all 3 also join this preliminary round. His close friends were so shocked their jaws dropped, trembling as they asked, "What? Us? You want us to fight the seniors?" Jake coldly reminded them that if they could not show results, then training was meaningless. Under pressure from Jake, Rengis and his friends could only grit their teeth and resolve to give it their all. Leica stepped forward to call out to see if anyone else wanted to try, but the lower classmen only whispered in fear because their opponents were seniors who had at least reached the 3-star level. Jake crossed his arms and observed, inwardly criticizing everyone's lack of spirit, because he understood that fighting a stronger opponent yielded the most gain. He decided to use this opportunity to verify the true extent of the strength those seniors boasted about. A senior from the upper class looked contemptuously at the lower classmen, clicked his tongue, and asserted that no matter how hard they tried, they had no chance of winning. One beside him even mockingly told his comrades to go easy, because aside from Lady Leica, the rest were just lowly 2-star kids. Seeing Rengis and his teammates trembling from the pressure, Jake immediately spoke to reassure them. "Hey, what's wrong? Why do you look so worried?" Rengis stammered, expressing his concern because their opponents were top-ranked seniors, all of whom had reached 3-star level. Jake raised a finger in encouragement. "You've trained non-stop for the past 5 years, right? You've all done very well. Have a little more faith in yourselves." Jake's encouraging words seemed to inject strength, making the group shout out their determination in unison. Seeing that, the hot-headed senior yelled, "Stop that jumping around, top trainees aren't that free." He swung his sword and charged, declaring he would teach the rookies their place. Shouts of astonishment rang out across the stands as the results appeared. The trainees couldn't believe their eyes, dazedly wondering if the high-ranking trainees of this batch were just too weak. Rengis stood proudly with his spear, with a senior lying flat on the ground at his feet. That senior exclaimed, "Impossible." Witnessing his comrade's growth, Jake crossed his arms and smiled with satisfaction. "Great fight, very well done, guys." He silently assessed that Rengis had become much sharper at parrying strikes and spotting his opponent's openings. On the other side, Selene was also executing mystical sword moves, making excellent use of the Stormflower sword art's chain strikes. Even the shield bearer showed remarkable progress, smoothly transitioning between shield techniques and sword techniques to overwhelm the enemy. Jake silently affirmed that all of them had shown the results of their excellent training over the past 5 years. It wasn't just Rengis's group, even Leica had grown noticeably stronger. Watching that scene, the seniors from the previous year could only stand frozen, exclaiming, "This can't be." Leica calmly sheathed her sword, muttering softly that this was probably enough. The leader still refused to accept the truth, pointing his finger and yelling bitterly, "No way. How could we, 3 stars, lose to you 2-star brats?" Jake stepped forward, uttering a contemptuous remark, "How foolish. Even with the clear result right in front of you, you're still spouting nonsense." He walked away calmly, leaving behind a harsh truth that age and rank indicators meant nothing anymore. Jake stared straight at his opponent, coldly asserting that they were nothing but mere numbers. Combat strength is only decided by the winner. Weak loses, that's all. Remark enraged the senior, who roared, "Are you stupid? Star rank is power, don't tell me you little brat don't know that." Jake curled his lips slightly, his eyes blazing with menace. "But stars or no stars, destroy the heart and anyone dies. Don't turn away from the true nature of power. Combat strength is simply whether you can win or not." Cornered, the senior yelled in despair, "Shut your mouth. I am a top trainee. Don't think the sophistry of a snot-nosed brat like you can scare me." Jake sighed in annoyance. "I'm tired of this verbal sparring. For a kid, you should use your fists before your mouth. Alright, now it's just you and me." He got into a ready stance, his eyes burning with fighting spirit. "Show me what kind of martial arts you've mastered, and to what level." The senior gritted his teeth and charged, shouting, "Don't underestimate me." He used all his strength to execute a powerful fist technique. In the blink of an eye, Jake launched a lightning-fast counterattack. The blow caused the opponent to let out only a pained cry before collapsing to the ground. Jake beamed a bright smile, calmly commenting, "You've trained pretty well." Witnessing that, Leica could only stand frozen, sighing and saying, "You dare say that after knocking him down without even seeing the result." The match ended swiftly, leaving the other trainees stunned. At the same time, at the West Wing training ground, an equally horrifying scene was unfolding, with rows of trainees lying on the ground. Amid the defeated, a silver-haired, cold-eyed youth was calmly sitting on the back of the one he had just taken down. He sneered, "Every single one of you is equally useless." This was Venian Fabniel Dragon, a strong candidate for the next clan leader position. Just then, Alan Venian's trusted assistant approached to report that the selection list there was complete. Among the few still standing, Venian unexpectedly noticed Retin, the little kid from years ago who was now 12 years old and possessed a dazzling 3-star on his chest. Venian squinted with interest, his voice deep and hoarse. "Huh, you're a junior who reached 3 stars?" Under the senior's attention, Retin quickly bowed respectfully, "Yes." Seeing his potential, Venian declared, "Quite impressive. I like capable people. If you prove useful, I will take you in as my subordinate." Retin was ecstatic, bowing repeatedly in thanks for finally being acknowledged by a figure of Venian's caliber. He gave a sinister smile, secretly plotting to accomplish a great feat in the upcoming special mission, in order to become a direct subordinate of the future clan leader. Just then, Alan suddenly leaned close to Venian's ear and whispered an important piece of news. "It seems Lady Leica will be joining the selection team from the East Wing, huh?" Hearing that name, Venian's face darkened with murderous intent. He was irritated by the appearance of an annoying obstacle. That girl always meddles in others' affairs, always getting in the way. However, Venian quickly regained his arrogant demeanor. He walked away calmly, asserting that no matter how gifted Leica was, the eventual winner would be his side. With eyes blazing with ambition, he confidently declared he would easily pass the special mission, to show everyone clearly who the true master of the clan leader's seat was. The next day, everyone had gathered in full at the arena. Rengis noticed that even though many had been eliminated after the harsh exams, the number of remaining trainees was still overwhelmingly large. A hint of sadness flickered in Rengis's eyes as he thought of those eliminated, those called Engen Longs, the insulting title his father had once borne. Leica immediately patted Rengis's shoulder, urging him to cast aside negative thoughts. She reminded him that the whole group had been brilliantly chosen as representatives of the East Hall, so they should be proud instead of worried. Encouraged by her enthusiasm, Rengis resolved to give his all in the upcoming battle. However, they suddenly noticed Rick standing motionless with a very thoughtful expression. When Leica asked about it, Jake calmly replied, "I'm just busy assessing the strength of the trainees around me. Quiet, let me judge them, little girl." At that moment, Rick, the senior who had been beaten by Jake, suddenly rushed forward with a completely different attitude. He clearly stated that he and the other senior members of the East Hall had now changed their minds. With a beaming face, Rick yelled that even as a member of El Dragon, he respected the strong and considered Jake a true idol. Rick's excessive enthusiasm only made Jake laugh it off. While Rengis was still stunned by this shocking change in attitude, Jake quickly returned to his main goal, squinting to observe the representatives from other areas. As expected, except for the East Hall, all the selected trainees had reached 3-star level, with none at 4-star yet. However, Jake's gaze sharpened as he noticed many were on the cusp of a breakthrough. He secretly looked forward to seeing in this great war what pinnacle martial arts techniques he would get to witness from his opponents. As everyone was focusing, a beautiful blonde girl suddenly rushed over and hugged Leica tightly. She was startled to realize it was Celine Typhona, the beloved daughter of the head of the illustrious Typhona family. The appearance of a person from one of the 4 great families shocked Ren's group. Jiz could not help but be stunned and feel immense pressure. When Leica introduced them as her teammates, she clearly showed contempt, believing they were not worthy to stand beside a candidate for family hair. "So you put on that kind of air the moment you show your face, huh? Think you are the only one in the world?" Jake calmly spoke up, asserting that a single match would reveal their true strength. Celine was surprised to recognize him as the rumored illegitimate child, then insulted the whole group as worthless, since none had reached the 3-star level. Jake coldly warned that if she kept looking down on others, she would be overturned and meet a bitter end. Celine flew into a rage, constantly mocking his lowly status and lack of backing. If she said any more, it might be that he would swallow it whole instead of leaving. Jake still wore a defiant smile, insisting it was just a sincere warning for her. Just as the tension peaked, Aegis Van Breed, representative of the North Hall, unexpectedly intervened, asking everyone to stop causing trouble. He reminded them that the selection battle was about to begin, and they should not waste time on useless arguments. The atmosphere suddenly became solemn as a powerful stream of golden spiritual energy enveloped the arena. The captain of the Golden Dragon Legion, Tech Manchik, officially appeared, declaring that the moment of the brutal selection battle had arrived. This competition was a knockout tournament between the 4 halls, divided into 2 groups to select the best for the finals. The format was one-on-one duels, with each hall sending out fighters in a predetermined order. Among the 7 members of each hall, the first hall to defeat 4 opponents would be declared the victor. Instructor emphasized that the formation order could not be changed, as arrangement was a crucial tactic. The winner would receive a special mission affecting depicting the rise and fall of the Dragon family. Jake smiled excitedly upon hearing about this grand reward, because whoever completed the mission would take a great step forward on the path to becoming the future family head. To decide the matchups, the instructor asked each hall's representative to step forward and draw stones from a wooden box. West Hall representative, Venian Fabnud Dragon, stepped forward coldly with an arrogant expression. He bluntly picked out a stone, then turned around and walked away without even leaving behind a single word. Witnessing that attitude, Lika's expression changed, and she muttered, "What the hell? What is that guy's problem?" Seeing his friend anxious, Jake curiously asked, "What is it? Do you know him?" Lika nodded slightly, confirming this was the formidable hair candidate of the West Hall she had mentioned before. Regarding the legislative foundation of DL Dragon, Jake inwardly assessed that the West Hall not only had him, but also possessed many other powerful warriors. Although the other halls had trained hard, everyone could feel the intimidating and immense power radiating from the West Hall. Jake's gaze suddenly halted as he recognized a familiar face, even though it had been a long time since they last met. It was Redden, the one who had crossed paths with him during the entrance exam. Jake silently admired his effort in reaching the 3-star level at that age, truly impressive. Meanwhile, Rengis's appearance caused a stir among the former students. "Look, is that Rengis? Why is that dropout standing over there?" Faced with the mockery, Rengis was flustered and sweating. Seeing this, Celine asked worriedly, "Rengis, are you okay?" The green-haired boy only stammered that he was fine. The loudspeaker announced clearly, "Next, the representative of the North Hall." Aegis Van Breed and Celine stepped forward with great dignity. Right after was the representative of the South Hall, with Venian appearing. Finally, when the East Hall was called, Lika urged, "Hey Jake, they are calling you." Jake asked blankly, "Me?" causing Lika to firmly assert, "Of course, because you are the strongest." Jake still wore a lazy expression, thinking these events should be left for the kids to show off. But Lika dismissed it, as in fact they were the same age, leaving him surprised about his own age. Witnessing Jake step up instead of her sister, Celine flew into a rage. "Wait, why is that bastard child replacing Lika?" Lika calmly explained that Jake was the strongest, but Celine did not accept someone who had not reached 3 stars representing a hall. She was worried because this was an important succession war between herself and Venian. Faced with her sister's irritation, Lika smiled confidently. "It is fine, sister, we are very strong." The instructor ordered each hall's representative to channel their true power into the stone they had drawn to determine the group divisions. Immediately, the 4 representatives simultaneously released their spiritual energy, causing the spirit stones to shine brilliantly in a variety of colors. The drawing results were quickly announced. The first match was East Hall against North Hall, and West Hall against South Hall. The air became thick with killing intent as the North Hall stepped onto the battlefield. Rengis and his teammates were stunned to see a student with an aged and frightening appearance. "Hey, is that person also a student?" Lika was worried to realize their first opponent was her sister Celine. Celine, enveloped in a blazing, thunderous aura, coldly declared, "Lika, this is a good chance to help you wake up. I will crush you until there is nowhere to hide, and then you will remember your place and purpose. Here I come." Responding to the threat, Lika also erupted with lightning power, smiling with a challenging look. "Bring it on." On the other side, Aegis also approached Jake with a friendly demeanor, greeting him and expressing anticipation for the upcoming match. Jake responded enthusiastically, saying they should have a real fight. Both exuded an overwhelming aura, Aegis chuckling as he affirmed he was also looking forward to this match immensely. Rick stepped onto the field first, his spirit blazing, shouting loudly that he would definitely win against Jake. Despite his determined appearance, Lika could clearly see the anxiety on his face. She wondered if Rick would be okay since he was so tense. The referee announced loudly if both sides were ready, then let it begin. Immediately, Rick charged at his opponent with a glowing fist. Observing from the outside, Jake thought to himself, "Let's see how this turns out." Lika worried that the opponent's eyes showed the fight would be very difficult. Jake coldly replied that in battle, nothing is guaranteed. He added arrogantly that his victory was absolute, causing Lika to snap that she wasn't talking about him. Jake turned back to focus on the arena, concluding that the Northern District Gladiator's skills were essentially no different from Rick's. As long as Rick stayed calm and fought like he did in training, victory was well within reach. However, Lika remained concerned because this was their first time fighting before a large audience and under the pressure of the whole team. Rick was struggling to endure the brutal blows from his opponent, gritting his teeth in pain. Jake squinted at the remaining representatives of the Northern Hall. Aside from the usual opponents, the 2 top fighters were the real exceptions. Those were Sister Celine and Aegis, who were already very close to the threshold of the 4th star. Jake squinted as he observed the arena, silently assessing that the opponents from the Northern Hall would not be easily shaken. He realized that Celine, Lika's cousin, probably also used techniques from the same bloodline, and this was a good experience for Lika to observe. At that moment, the loudspeaker announced that the first match was won by the Northern District. Rick collapsed right on the arena floor. Witnessing their teammates' defeat, Marin, a female trainee from the Eastern Hall, trembled under the pressure, telling herself she had to win despite her friend's encouragement. She lamented that she was about to go to the chopping block, and seeing this made her want to go home. Yet, harsh reality set in as the referee announced the second match was won by the Northern District. Marin and her teammates returned dejectedly, bowing their heads to apologize to Jake for being overwhelmed by the arena's atmosphere. Jake was not angry but smiled radiantly to comfort them. He said that if this were a real battlefield, life and death would hang in the balance. But here it was a place to learn by testing one's strength, not a place to kill each other. Jake affirmed that the safe lessons today would become nourishment for them to hone their skills for the real battlefield. This made both of them regain their determination and reply that he was talking too much and they didn't understand. But forget it, whatever, Strange, got it, right. Jake turned to look at Rengis, reminding him that the Eastern Hall had lost 2 matches, so his next match was very important. Rengis lost his composure, yelling not to add more pressure as he had been worried sick since morning. He looked towards his opponent, a senior from a higher grade with blazing aura and a giant sword. Rengis was so scared his eyes were watery, believing this guy was scarier than anyone he had ever met in the Eastern District. Jake patted Rengis's head, reminding him that he had previously faced seniors when forming a team at Poison Dragon Mountain. Jake asked Rengis what weapon his opponent used. After hearing Rengis confirm that it was a swordsman, Jake flashed a confident smile and began instructing tactics, saying that he was fighting someone with a sword, don't think about anything else. If that man punches, parry it. If he slashes upward, retreat. If he chops downward, step in and thrust. Jake patted Rengis's shoulder, reassuring him with a trusting tone, asking him to focus on handling the weapon in front of him. As always, he looked into the steady eyes of his friend. Jake silently assessed that Rengis's ability to concentrate was very impressive, but right now he still needed a bit of guidance to maintain his mindset. He was curious how this match would help Rengis improve, especially since he had naturally entered a state of intense focus. From below the stands, sneering whispers rang out, mocking the petty thug and little frog, saying the scrawny weakling couldn't match the water buffalo. Ignoring the gossip, Rengis gripped his spear tightly, his eyes blazing as he entered a battle state. The referee shouted loudly, "Begin." Immediately, the Northern District gladiator charged like a whirlwind, executing the fastest tri-leaf sword art to maximize power. He roared ferociously, telling him not to think of escaping. The lightning-fast slashes forced Rengis to continuously retreat and defend. Observing from behind, Jake concluded that the opponent was intentionally closing in to cut off the spear's reach, forcing Rengis into a passive position. Seeing his friend in trouble, Raymond worriedly asked if Rengis would be okay. Jake maintained a calm smile, telling him not to worry, just look at his eyes. He was more focused than ever. Indeed, Rengis's eyes at that moment were blazing with a deep blue spiritual light. He was completely in control of the match's pace. And the opponent unleashed his strongest move, called the Leaf Storm Dance. Rengis immediately countered with the Cloud Water Spear art, drifting clouds and flowing water technique. The spear moves, graceful like flowing water, completely neutralized the enemy's tempestuous attack. The senior exclaimed in shock, seeing his move so easily broken. Not giving the opponent time to react, Rengis spun and unleashed the decisive move of the Cloud Water Spear art, Riptide Surge. A spear carrying the force of 1,000 pounds, thrust straight into the opponent's chest. It created a massive shockwave, sending him flying far and knocking him out instantly. The referee announced the result loudly. The match is over. The third match, Eastern District wins. Rengis breathed a sigh of relief, wiping his sweat and silently telling himself he was lucky to have overcome the pressure. Seeing his teammate's first victory, Jake flashed a sinister and confident smile. His eyes blazed with determination as he declared it was time to prepare for a truly spectacular comeback. Starting from Rengis's brilliant victory, the Eastern side continuously rode the wave of victory, sweeping away their opponents to establish an impressive winning streak. Victory in rounds 4 and 5 quickly belonged to the Eastern faction as they overwhelmed their opponents. With just one more win, they would officially claim glory for China. The dramatic 6th round began between the 2 sisters of the Eldragon family. Facing her older sister, Lika smiled lightly. "It has been a while since we crossed swords, Sister Celine." Celine coldly replied, "You should not even be qualified enough to reach our level. I did not expect the elites of the Northern faction to lose." She admitted she had underestimated her sister's teammates. Celine asserted that teammates were secondary. To be a leader, one must possess absolute personal power. She questioned her sister, "Yet you are only the 2nd seed of the Eastern Institute?" Celine exclaimed loudly, "Do you understand how dangerous that situation was?" Faced with her sister's worry, Lika calmly replied, "Of course I understand," but Lika cast her gaze toward Jake and her teammates standing steadfast behind her. Her eyes blazed determination. I have not given up my ambition to be a leader. Even if I have to face you, I can beat you now. Witnessing her sister's growth, Celine narrowed her eyes slightly. Celine suddenly accelerated, causing the crowd to gasp in astonishment. She disappeared. Instantly, she appeared from above with a sword blazing with lightning. She shouted loudly, "If you are capable, show me here." They both clashed in a terrifying explosion of thunder and lightning. Watching from a distance, Jake observed that Celine had the upper hand, uncertain how long Lika could hold out. Celine continued executing her thunderous greatsword technique with the move Lightning Needle. The thunderous blow sent Lika flying and made her scream. Witnessing that, her teammates could only shout her name in fear. Lika forced herself up, trying to steady her breathing. She told herself it is fine, the wound is not deep. She is too strong. Beneath the stands, Rengis and Raymond were shocked to realize Lika was being cornered. They recounted that Celine was the one who trained Lika since childhood. Lika gritted her teeth and charged to attack. Celine easily dodged and taunted. "You still have not fixed your habit of swinging recklessly when backed into a corner." As Lika shouted and executed lightning flash thunder, Celine immediately countered with the powerful skill Scatter Thunder. Lika was engulfed by a colossal bolt of lightning. She screamed in pain. Celine coldly looked at her sister, futile. "Your bad habits have not improved at all. Not even number one of the Eastern faction could train them out of you." She lamented, thinking that if Lika had moved to the Northern faction that day, she would not be this pathetic. Though her body was in pain, Lika still forced herself up and clung to her sword. "I am not done yet," Celine stated firmly. "With that level of skill, you cannot defeat me." She regretted not asking her father to force her sister to transfer to the Northern Hall from the start. Seeing Lika's stubbornness, Celine sighed, "You are truly headstrong. Fine then, take this opportunity to reflect on yourself." Celine lunged forward with a flurry of attacks. The lightning strikes forced Lika to defend arduously in pain. Lika was knocked back. The ground beneath her feet cracked from the pressure of her sister's blows. Celine leaped into the air, preparing a finishing blow. Beneath the stands, her teammates anxiously called her name. Jake narrowed his eyes, sensing that Lika seemed about to break through another layer of limits. Celine shouted from above, "Give up." Thunderous greatsword technique. She executed her second secret skill, Heavenly Thunder. An explosion of lightning engulfed the arena, making the crowd wonder if the match was over. Celine stood proudly, convinced of her victory, but as the smoke cleared, Lika was still standing, though her body was covered in wounds. She whispered hoarsely, "So this is Sister Celine's thunderous greatsword technique." Celine was stunned. How is that possible? That should have been the finishing blow. She realized the Lika from 5 years ago would have fallen, but things were different now. Lika beamed a radiant smile despite her bloodied face. "I have been training too. The real battle is just beginning." Turning back to before the match, Jake saw Lika was tense and asked, "Why are you so strange today?" "Not like usual. Something worrying you." Lika sighed and admitted, "Yeah, my opponent is Sister Celine." She revealed that Celine was the one who taught her the foundational principles of the thunderous greatsword technique. Jake listened thoughtfully. Lika bitterly admitted that was the reason she had never been able to beat her sister. Even though she had grown stronger over the past 5 years, Celine had also improved ceaselessly. Seeing his friend lose confidence, Jake reminded her, "Remember those practice sessions with me, and all the days of training over these past 5 years. Images of the harsh training process suddenly flashed through his mind. From the enormous kicks to the time Jake mercilessly knocked him flying across the training ground. Seeing Lika wince at that memory, Jake smiled and asked why she was so bothered by such a small matter. He seriously pointed out that her weakness was getting flustered when emotional, so for the past 5 years, she had to train to stay calm during combat. Jake joked that his merciless strikes were his charm, leaving Lika speechless and helpless. Jake affirmed that the training results helped her observe opponents better, but Lika still worried if that was enough to face her sister. Jake firmly told her to just fight and she would know. He believed that with Lika's talent, everything would change when she saw through her opponent's movements. Jake did not forget to add an arrogant remark that she was being taught by the strongest person here. Then there was no need to worry about past victories or defeats anymore, right? Lika smiled at his confidence, but her heart was still anxious. She thanked Jake for helping her feel more at ease. Jake nodded in satisfaction and confirmed good. By the way, he asked again if her sister taught her the lightning strike greatsword technique. After Lika's nod, Jake excitedly pointed and called it perfect. "This is a great opportunity, just like during practice. Observe her sister's greatsword technique very closely. If she could do that, she would become even stronger." Lika stood in the middle of the arena, blood on her face but eyes shining brightly, declaring that she had closely observed her sister Celine's lightning strike greatsword technique. She clearly stated that she had taken the blow and observed, and finally saw the key point. Celine exclaimed in shock, "What?" Immediately, Lika charged forward with a completely different speed and rhythm than before. Celine swung her sword to defend but stopped in astonishment, wondering what was happening. She asked herself why her sister had stopped and become so slow, unable to believe it. Celine could not believe her eyes when she saw Lika's attack trajectory change bizarrely, with a bright electric current enveloping the sword. She could only utter a word in utter shock. Lika roared and executed an extremely swift lightning needle technique, catching her opponent off guard. Selene struggled to defend, but things did not stop there. Lika suddenly leaped into the air and changed her attack direction, panicking Selene because the movement change was too abrupt. Lika unleashed a heaven-shaking, earth-shattering attack named Lightning Flash. She smiled arrogantly, revealing the secret was the rhythm that her sister had but she lacked, and now she understood and could execute it. Selene stood frozen in shock, unable to believe that understanding the theory could help someone imitate a technique immediately. From below the stands, Rengus and his teammates gaped in astonishment at Lika's transformation. Jake stood among the group of friends, wearing a smug smile. Indeed, fighting someone who used the same martial art yielded a lot. He explained that Lika grasped her sister's technique, thanks to training to calmly observe and comprehend opponents. Previously, Lika was often too bloodthirsty, lost her composure and only saw her own sword, but now she was completely different, more composed. By observing the same swordsmanship, Lika had officially reached a new height. Selene gritted her teeth and shouted that shoddy technique could not beat her. He launched an attack, but Lika seized the opportunity. Immediately, Lika countered with a powerful lightning speed technique. Pushed back in shock, Selene could not believe she was being overwhelmed. Attacking, Lika asserted about the harsh physical training, like having died and been reborn with someone. She put all her strength into the final blow, shouting her sister Selene's name. This is the lightning strike greatsword technique, Heavenly Thunder. A massive lightning bolt struck directly at Selene's position, causing her to only scream in pain before being engulfed by the energy. The dust slowly cleared. Lika stood panting from exhaustion after unleashing her full power. Though tired, Selene still smiled proudly at her sister, praising her for growing much stronger. Immediately after, Selene fainted and fell. The loudspeaker announced the end of the match with Lika's convincing victory. Lika stood in the center of the arena, her body covered in wounds but her spirit blazing after defeating her sister. From the stands, seeing his lord looking pensive, the subordinate softly called Lord Venian, but he only silently stared at the girl who had just achieved a miracle. Lika tiredly walked towards her teammates, softly muttering regrettably that the fight just now was acceptable. She said it was a peak match, even though she herself did not get any screen time. Though her face was bloodied, she gave a bright smile, glad that everything was resolved. If she had lost, Jake's opponent would have been Aegis. Jake asked blankly if Lika knew him. She explained she did not know him, but he was very famous. In the martial arts world, Aegis Van Breed was hailed as the greatest genius since the Van Breed family was founded. Jake squinted at the opponent from afar, remarking that he was definitely on a completely different level from the others. Lika worriedly reminded him no matter how strong Jake was. When meeting someone like that, no one knew what would happen. The instructor stepped onto the field and announced that victory belonged to the eastern side, but the matches would continue. This information shocked Rengus and Jake. They asked why that was truly mind-blowing. They found it strange, because initially it was said that it would end once 4 members were defeated. Jake thoughtfully watched the back of the departing instructor. Doubt rose in his heart, unsure of the true purpose here. On the other side, Aegis smiled faintly, a cryptic look on his face as he gazed toward Jake. Whatever, as long as I get to fight, that's enough. Jake wore a proud smile as the fierce battle erupted. Facing the prodigy of the Van Breed family was more than enough for him. Aegis looked straight at Jake, admitting that while his Northern Hall team might lose, he was incredibly excited to face him like this. Aegis stated clearly, of course. I mean, you represent the Eastern Hall, right? Even with someone like Lika on the roster, you were the one who secured the spot. He pointed at Jake with a suspicious look. What kind of factor are you anyway? Aegis couldn't understand why someone who claimed to carry the Master's bloodline, but was still only 2 stars, could represent a 3-star like Lika. Jake curled his lips slightly in reply. Seems we're birds of a feather. I've been wanting to cross blades with you for a long time. Seeing Aegis's surprise, Jake affirmed that while there were many experts in this arena, Aegis was truly special, praising him with the moniker Genius of the Century. Jake's eyes suddenly blazed with madness, and he declared solemnly, "Of course I want to test my strength against you." Aegis drew his katana from its sheath excited. Great, now I'm even more fired up. Jake inwardly assessed that it had been a long time since he had faced a blade with such spirit. The call for the 7th match to begin rang out. Aegis charged forward like a violent whirlwind. Jake was startled to realize that with just one step, his opponent had closed the distance. That footwork was truly terrifying. Immediately, Aegis executed his technique Heaven's Sword, single strike stream. A blinding flash of light erupted, forcing Jake to exclaim in shock. He was stunned to realize the sword's aura had completely vanished in that instant, but with sharp reflexes, Jake managed to dodge the lightning-fast strike, causing Aegis to only utter an astonished cry. Aegis was shocked to see that Jake had dodged his attack. He marveled inwardly. He twisted his body right at the moment of impact. I thought that strike would definitely land. Contrary to his opponent's astonishment, Jake was extremely excited, shouting loudly, "That was absolutely top-notch, a masterful move. Do it a few more times for me to see." Aegis curled his lips slightly. "Got it. You're the real deal." If that's the case, then he immediately stomped his foot for momentum and lunged forward. He executed Heaven's Sword, single strike stream with the illusory technique of Wave Sword. Jake was horrified to realize that the trajectory of Aegis's sword tip was unpredictably shifting, impossible to read. Instantly, an extremely powerful wave of energy named Torrent swept through, forcing Jake to leap and dodge by a hair's breadth as pillars of energy water exploded around him. Despite being pressured, Jake did not hold back his praise. "I can't believe I let you slip past me so easily, but don't get cocky yet." Immediately, Aegis added another flash of a dazzling light sword. He was inwardly astonished by his opponent's chaotic, yet powerful sword strokes. Jake's expression became more serious than ever as he admitted, truly a genius. Aegis's blade was completely unpredictable, yet it still maintained incredible speed and power. Jake realized his energy flow was smooth, with no wasted movements. Each slash was sharp and accurately measured against his own breathing rhythm. Jake inwardly affirmed that this was impossible without undergoing relentless training. He shouted excitedly, "This is truly amazing. I didn't expect it to be so hard to land a hit." He just narrowed his eyes at Jake, asking in a low voice, "You really are something. Just how have you been training?" Jake winked mischievously. "A secret, huh? Curious, are we? And train with me to make it livelier." Jake threw a powerful punch straight at his opponent. Despite being pressed by Jake at a terrifying speed, Aegis managed to block, but the power behind that punch was truly monstrous. Aegis grinned excitedly, affirming that with this level of strength, Jake absolutely could not be just a 2-star. Jake stepped back, observing his bleeding hand, inwardly assessing Aegis as a formidable warrior for adapting immediately to the change in his breathing rhythm. Aegis noticed Jake had finally launched a counterattack, and asked if he had finished analyzing him. Jake honestly replied that he had seen enough, causing Aegis to laugh in amusement. Not giving Jake time to rest, Aegis lunged forward once more at a terrifying speed. Jake was shocked to realize his opponent was using the same technique again, but he was immediately stunned to realize that it was only an illusory afterimage flashing before his eyes. By the time he regained his senses, Jake discovered his chest had been struck by a sword. Jake raised his hand to his chest, his eyes blazing with mad excitement as he felt the thrill surging through his veins. He wore a proud smile and declared resolutely that this was when the real fun began. The two stood opposite each other in the wind-swept arena, preparing to clash in an explosive battle. Outside the arena, Celine regained consciousness after her defeat by Lika. Her bloodied hands trembled as she asked dazedly where she was. Immediately, the group of subordinates rushed over in panic, surrounding her with worry. "Lady Celine, are you all right?" She softly replied yes, then suddenly recalled the bitter moment of her defeat. Looking toward the arena, Celine murmured, "That's right. He lost, did he not? And after losing comes memory loss. Why was he so foolish?" Celine smiled sadly, softly apologizing to her teammates, saying how good it would be if they could win. Disciples quickly bowed their heads, admitting fault, blaming themselves for being a burden that made her worry. Celine gently comforted them, saying it was only because the opponent was too strong. She encouraged the team with warm eyes, promising to try harder next time to avoid losing. The whole team shouted in unison with passion and determination. Celine suddenly wondered if the match between West Hall and South Hall had started yet. The junior pointed at the arena, stammering that the battle between Jake and Aegis was still ongoing. Celine looked on in shock, her face turning pale from the surprise, unable to believe it. Before her eyes was a shocking scene as Aegis executed the 5-sword key with a dense, sharp aura. Celine trembled as she realized Aegis intended to unleash all his power to overwhelm the opponent immediately. In her heart, she silently affirmed that Aegis was the strongest among all the candidates. Aegis roared, executing the Heaven Sword technique with the powerful 5-shadow sword move. Strikes shot straight toward Jake, creating terrifying aftershocks. Jake still stood firm, his face full of scratches, but his breathing was not chaotic. Aegis exclaimed in astonishment that move 2 was useless. He had been fighting so long and still was not out of breath. Was he even human? Jake answered frankly that demon equipment was too ordinary. He just focused on training his physique. Good martial arts, but the basics were also important. Aegis slowly looked down at his own legs and admitted that seemed true. His fighting spirit blazing, Aegis declared he would train his body even more harshly. Meanwhile, Jake was engrossed in observing and evaluating the opponent's strength through each sword strike. He silently judged the sharpness, hardness, speed, and range of the sword were still at a low rank. But considering the guy's age, it would probably be very interesting later on. The match helped Jake confirm the difference between martial arts 1,000 years ago and modern times. In the old days, physical movement was the most important. Fighting was using techniques to manifest all things. Ezra was just support. In modern times, people manifest all things by materializing Ezra. Mastering Ezra was the essence of martial arts. Jake charged forward, laughing excitedly, mocking himself for being so engrossed in martial skills that it took him long to notice the change. He wondered with excitement, how could a span of 1,000 years be so interesting? All of Aegis' attacks were perfectly nullified by Jake, causing Aegis to mutter in horror that his opponent was truly a monster in human skin. 2-hour match left Rengus and his teammates dizzy, seeing no end in sight. Lika, though covered in wounds, watched intently, commenting that both were abnormal, but the match was nearing its end. Aegis looked at Jake and remarked that he had carefully observed his movements. It truly was a glorious time. Jake agreed, yeah, he felt the same way. To show respect, Jake decided to use the lesson from the battle to end things. Jake raised his bloodied fist, smiled arrogantly. He would give him a new move right now. Aegis was shocked to realize the gap in strength, so that was it, no wonder he could not win. Even so, with a genius's will, he still did not give up, he would fight to the end. Aegis channeled all his spiritual energy to execute the Heaven Sword technique, the ultimate secret skill, 5 Sword. Facing Aegis's secret technique, Jake immediately unleashed a shocking counterattack called the Dragon Slaying Combat Art. Instantaneous transformation, Essence Star Fist, countless blazing fists descended from the sky, like a meteor shower sweeping everything away, creating an earth-shattering explosion. The entire arena shattered amidst thick smoke and dust. Witnessing the terrifying power, Rengus's group stood frozen in fear. Selene exclaimed in shock, "Oh gods, how could it be that strong? Who won?" The referee stepped onto the field and clearly announced, "Enough, the match is over." Aegis's sword fell, lay flat on the ground, out of strength, admitting he could not move against such a powerful opponent. Realizing he still had a long way to train, Jake stood proudly amidst the rubble, smiling as he heard the referee finalize. "The winner is East Hall." Shocked murmurs spread across the North Hall stands. "No way Lord Aegis lost? What the hell was that match? Who the hell was that guy from East Hall?" The organizers announced a pause to level the arena, preparing for the next match. Jake leisurely returned to a warm welcome. Rengus and Raymond admired him. Truly impressive. Never thought he would take down Aegis. Lika looked at the ruined arena, teasing him. He wrecked it again. Truly a monster. Jake replied with a face-saving but aggrieved tone. What was with that attitude? He just won a hard-earned victory. Putting the past aside, he looked toward the arena with curiosity. What was next? Lika mentioned Venian was about to go on. Jake silently assessed that West Hall had the highest overall quality of fighters, but he also noticed South Hall had one person who looked very strong, holding a long staff. Jake eagerly wondered how this match would play out. However, things turned out completely opposite to his expectations. The match between West Hall and South Hall was completely one-sided. In the blink of an eye, Venian easily won with his glowing iron fan. As for the opponent from South Hall, he lay beaten on the ground with injuries all over. Venian's eyes flashed with a cold and cruel glint that asserted the overwhelming strength of West Hall in this tournament. After the match with Aegis, Jake looked at the shattered arena and could not help worrying. He thought he might have gone overboard, such damage would be hard to fix quickly. But Rengus showed him a miracle. It was fine. Look. Jake was shocked to see broken stones automatically fly back to their original positions and reconnect, as if never damaged. Rengus explained that the arena was made of azurite, a rare stone with the ability to self-repair when charged with azure energy. Jake was stunned by the absurd yet incredibly impressive material for this grand structure. The referee witnessing the match could not help frowning in doubt. He felt something was strange. With his experience, he noticed the match was illogically one-sided, wondering if Venian was truly strong enough to overwhelm Lila Sona. On the field, Venian, with his arrogant silver hair, holding a pair of sharp short blades, coldly looked at his fallen opponent and asked if she wanted to continue. Receiving no answer, the referee declared the match over. The winner was West Hall. Thus, the dream final was set between East Hall and West Hall. An announcement rang throughout the arena that the final match would begin in 1 hour. Layla Sona was helped away by her teammates in an exhausted state. The crowd still stunned in disbelief that a genius like her had suffered such a humiliating defeat. Jake stood observing from a distance, slowly realizing something was wrong. He silently analyzed that the strength of the two sides clearly did not have such a huge disparity, but for some reason that girl's energy flow had become terribly stagnant. Jake's eyes sharpened as he firmly asserted there must have been an irregularity on the field. Losing like that was simply unacceptable. Looking at Layla's wounds, Jake understood that was the reason the battle ended in such a one-sided and troubled manner. He saw that the referee seemed to have vaguely noticed something too, but remained silent. Raymond and Celine began to talk worriedly. They never expected Lady Lila of the Sona family to be powerless against Venian. Raymond admitted it was as expected, the difference in caliber of a legitimate heir. Celine found the match too one-sided, but her friend said that was the harsh reality when seeing the strength of experts from other halls. Rick with the bandaged nose also agreed, saying Venian was a legitimate heir like Jake and Lika, so he must have immense power. Jake silently observed the West Hall team. He noticed not only Venian was strong, but all members of West Hall radiated an overwhelming and mysterious aura. Jake wondered if everyone among them was that absurdly powerful. Rick confessed with inferiority that he could not even beat his friends despite having a lower star rating. But right after, he clenched his fist with determination. His eyes blazed. Rick affirmed he did not plan to lose, and his teammates could also win like they had defeated high-ranked opponents before. Jake stood observing from a distance, smiling in satisfaction at the fighting spirit of Rick and Aaron. But his eyes quickly grew worried as he looked at Lika. Jake saw that Lika had not noticed the irregularity in Layla's energy flow. If she thought it was pure strength, her anxiety was understandable. Jake thought to himself that he did not fully understand the anomaly yet, so he could not give random advice, making him ponder what he should do. Seeing Lika dazed, Rengus worriedly asked, "Lady Lika, are you okay?" Lika thanked him and silently turned to walk away with a gloomy face, saying she was just going to get some fresh air to clear her head. watching the lonely back of the young lady disappear into the distance. Jake could only stand still with a heavy heart. Standing alone by the fountain, Lika was immersed in negative thoughts about the opponent's strength. She did not believe Venian could defeat Lila so overwhelmingly, something that even a genius like Aegis could not do without being injured. She reached out and touched the cool water. The memory of her humiliating defeat against Venian, when she was only 5, flooded back, making her heart tighten. Since then, Lika had trained obsessively to avenge that disgrace, and was once confident she had caught up to him. Realizing the order of matches, Venian's next opponent would very likely be Jake. She felt a slight relief that she did not have to fight him directly. Lika gritted her teeth, clenching her fists so hard they trembled. Her face showed clear self-loathing for feeling relieved like that. She felt that feeling was an admission of bitter defeat from the bottom of her heart, while she yearned to defeat him. Lost in thought, Lika was startled when a mocking voice sounded from behind her, saying she looked quite serious. It was Venian and his lackey Alan approaching with smug expressions. Lika coldly asked what he wanted, saying she had nothing to say to him. Venian made a frivolous remark, telling her not to act high and mighty, because he would become the family head, and she would become his wife. Lika snapped, telling him to shut up and saying she would be the one to become the family head. Venian smirked, probing the fear in her eyes, asking her if she thought she could not win, right? He said she had watched the match, and asked why she could not beat him back then either. He gripped her hand tightly, whispering poisonous words to crush Lika's will, telling her she knew she could not win. Why was she so stubborn? He said she could not do it back then, and the same now, she would never beat him. Venian even demanded she give up and submit to him. Unable to bear the humiliation, Lika gritted her teeth and yelled at him to shut his mouth. Watching Lika's retreating back, Venian clicked his tongue in contempt. He said she was not cute at all, but with this thing it was done. As for the rest, she knew what to do, right? Venian turned to his subordinate and asked about the next step. Alan stepped closer, anxiously asking about that bastard Jake. Venian replied calmly, his matter in the match was nothing to worry about. Alan still cautiously reminded that although a bastard, Jake was the one who had taken down the genius Aegis. They needed to strike first. Venian admitted the ideal was to settle everything before the match, but he felt Jake had an eerily sharp intuition. He pondered, recalling the previous match. It would be troublesome if he found out. Moreover, from what he saw, sometimes he deliberately took the hits. Even during the match, he could still set a trap. Even without relying on anyone, he would never lose to a brat like him, a bastard. Sitting by the fountain, Venian and his subordinate smugly looked into the distance. With excessive confidence and deep malicious schemes, he concluded that the winner of this match would be him. Back in the arena, Rick trembled, facing the harsh reality, muttering in fear that the time had finally come. Even as a second-year student, Rick considered himself the weakest member of the East Hall representative team. While the West Hall side was a lineup of elites full of pressure, his eyes showed clear wavering, his hands clenched tightly in anxiety, wondering if he could win. Just as self-doubt was enveloping Rick, a sudden punch from Jake landed on his head, accompanied by a scolding calling him an idiot. He asked what was wrong with him, where had that fiery momentum from before gone. Rick only stammered in confusion, well, that was... Jake was relentless, pointing directly at Rick and shouting loudly, "What did you fight for, to lose?" Jake sternly reminded him of a warrior's true nature. Once you go out to fight, you must be determined to win regardless of your actual strength. Those sharp words were like a bucket of cold water, snapping Rick out of it. He clenched his fists, his eyes resolute as he blurted out, "Win." Seeing his friend had regained his spirit, Jake patted him hard on the shoulder to encourage him, saying, "You trained well, be confident." Rick was moved and replied, "Yes, thank you." To give Rick a better chance, Jake gave him a small tip to relax his shoulders. Seeing Rick still confused, asking, Jake began to explain the essence of martial arts. The ultimate technique of the great strength fist concentrated all power into one point to strike. If you tensed up too much, the force would scatter. Jake directly stepped over to adjust his posture, urging him to relax. Feeling a miraculous change in the flow of power, Rick excitedly yelled that he thought he could win now, and thanked him a lot. Jake smiled and pushed his friend onto the field, saying, "Touch wood, now go bag your opponent." Watching from a distance, Lika couldn't help but raise an eyebrow in suspicion. She thoughtfully pointed out the oddity. "You never studied the great strength fist, yet you know so much about it. Sometimes you even have an unusual understanding of other martial arts." Responding to Lika's seriousness, Jake just slightly smirked and asked what a corny question that was. "Well, of course it's because I'm me." Witnessing his excessive confidence, Lika sighed in exasperation, silently scolding herself for being stupid to ask him something serious. Stood before his West Hall opponent with wary eyes. He recognized this was the strong one who had shown his power in the first match. This time, Rick was determined not to let himself taste defeat ever again. West Hall opponent looked at Rick contemptuously, mocking him as the weakling who had lost in the North Hall, daring to stand there looking arrogant. Insulted, Rick snapped at him to shut up, because he was no longer the weak child he used to be. The man just slightly curved his lips sinisterly, wondering if Rick could change anything in such a short time. The referee's clear voice echoed across the arena. East Hall versus West Hall, first match begin. Immediately, the West Hall opponent charged in with a short blade blazing with blue spiritual energy. He mocked Rick's naivety, believing that no one could miraculously change their strength in a few hours. He gathered his force to execute the war insect short sword technique with the mantis slash move. Rick was pushed back, crying out in pain from the power of the strike. The opponent laughed mockingly, seeing that he now knew to use aura to block the attack like a professional. He immediately followed up with a more brutal move called Myriad Insect Heart Devourer. Waves of green corrosive energy surrounded and attacked, making Rick scream in agony. He laughed gleefully, questioning where Rick's proclaimed change was now. Despite being battered and bleeding, Rick gritted his teeth and endured, insisting he would not be dominated one-sidedly ever again. Rick tried to launch a swift counterattack, but the opponent easily dodged, sneering that the foolish attack could not even touch the hem of his garment. Rick was continuously injured by the opponent's blade. He realized in shock that he could not keep up with his speed if he fought the old way. In his moment of deepest despair, Jake's instruction echoed in his mind. Relax, use the great strength fist to concentrate all your power into one spot. Rick regulated his breathing, his eyes resolute as he told himself he would go all in, risking everything. The West Hall opponent gritted his teeth and charged in, cursing Rick for being trash, but annoyingly persistent. He put all his force into his sword, executing the powerful wind sting strike move aimed directly at the target. Surprisingly, Rick did not dodge, but used his hands blazing with golden light to grab the opponent's blade. Before the enemy's sheer shock, he smirked, said, "Did you die yet? I've got you by the throat now." Ignoring the stunned silence, Rick poured all his essence into his blazing fist. He yelled, "Take this, great strength fist trigger." He created a massive energy blast, causing him to only have time to scream in pain before being sent flying. The clear sound of the speaker announced the end of the match, witnessing the spectacular comeback. The entire stands buzzed with astonishment, while Jake and Lika both smiled contentedly. The referee clearly declared the winner belonged to the East Hall. The defeated man lay slumped on the ground in utter shock. Meanwhile, Rick stood still in the middle of the arena with an emotional face. "See, do not rush to judge others by their appearance." Rick exclaimed in sheer delight, "How lucky, thank God." He raised his fist high toward the stands as an affirmation of his hard work over the past 5 years. On the other side, the opponent from the West Hall was clutching his wound in pain, bitterly unable to believe he had failed. At that moment, a cold, deep voice from Vinian's side suddenly rang out. Ignoring the lackey kneeling to apologize, the man still mercilessly blasted the opponent away without hesitation. His eyes were wild as he ordered the next fighter to crush the opponent to restore the West Hall's honor. Over at the East Hall, Rick cheered loudly to boost Marin's strength. He wanted Marin to have enough power before she stepped out to face the enemy. The referee clearly announced the start of the second match. Marin immediately unleashed her blazing spiritual energy. She executed the accumulated fire sword skill with the powerful move Spark Flame Slash, heading straight for the opponent. However, the West Hall opponent quickly neutralized the attack. He immediately counterattacked using the piercing Great Soul Spear technique. With the thrust strike move at lightning speed, he left Marin severely wounded, clutching her chest in agony. She was subjected to a suffocating pressure from the spear, watching Marin being brutally tortured right on the arena. Rengis and his teammates were left stunned. Rick and the other members gritted their teeth in fury, about to rush out to save their friend. But they had to restrain themselves because the match had not yet been called to an end, and they did not want to be disqualified. Finally, the referee clearly declared the West Hall the winner. They won this second match. Rick and Rengis rushed over in a panic to support Marin, who lay unconscious in a pool of blood. Jake observed from a distance with blazing eyes full of anger at the opponent's cruelty. Rick held the unconscious Marin tightly in his arms as Rengis and Celine could not hide their shock. Rick roared angrily at the opponent, "Hey, you, why did it have to come to this?" In response to that outburst, the West Hall warrior turned back with a cold expression. "Is there a problem?" He calmly reasoned that this was a match, in other words, a real fight. He just did things thoroughly to ensure victory. The cold-blooded explanation made Rick and Celine unable to contain their rage. Doing this is going too far. He laughed, calling them a bunch of naive people, asserting that the West Hall people never showed mercy to their enemies. He clearly stated that his only goal was to crush the enemy under Vinian's banner. Faced with Lika's questioning, he challenged them to forfeit if they did not like it, then affirmed that crushing Marin's will was perfectly natural. Lika gritted her teeth in fury, "You bastards." Suddenly, Breton appeared with a malicious expression, sarcastically saying they should worry about themselves first. He said they were all about to get a bitterer end than a bitter melon, arrogantly challenging the East Hall group to give up if they were scared. When Rengis called his name, Breton immediately dismissed it with contempt. He called him a small fry and forbade him from casually saying his name. With a smug smile, Breton threatened to beat Rengis to a pulp like Marin. He pointed his finger insultingly at his face. "Right, you weakling, Rengis." Faced with that insult, Lika flew into a rage and was about to charge, but Rengis stopped her. He said, "Lady Lika, I am fine, I will not run away." He stepped forward with determined gaze, shedding his usual timid demeanor. Rengis pointed his hand straight at the opponent, clearly declaring before everyone's witness, "Today, right here, Rayton, I will surpass you." Marin was carried out of the arena in a severely injured state, making the atmosphere extremely tense. Rengis stepped onto the arena floor with trembling hands, the pressure from the stands making him shudder. Suddenly a voice echoed inside his mind. Rengis. He yelped in surprise, looking around. What is this? Why do I hear Lord Jake's voice around here? From a distance, Jake slightly moved his lips, using telepathy to calm his friend. Do not mind, I am just recreating an experience from a few years ago. Rengis was completely confused, stammering in his mind, I do not even know where to start reacting. Jake continued calmly, more importantly, I used magic to give you some advice. As Rengis was still blankly asking back, Jake began to recite a mantra full of hidden meaning. Clouds drift in stillness, water flows on its own. He slowly repeated the instruction. Clouds drift in stillness, water flows steady and even. In trouble, try thinking about that. Rengis was so engrossed in the advice that he stood frozen, causing the referee to shout loudly, Hey, you, are you high on drugs? What the hell are you doing? He snapped back to reality, and quickly bowed his head in apology. Regaining his composure, Rengis tightened his grip on the spear, his eyes growing sharper and more determined than ever. The referee announced in a clear voice, the East Hall versus the West Hall. The second match, begin. Immediately, Rengis assumed a combat stance, facing Raiten, who was brandishing his sword from the opposite side. He stomped his foot to gain momentum, shooting towards his opponent like an arrow tearing through the wind. Rengis initiated the attack. He shouted loudly, Cloud Water Spear Art, Water Pierce Move. The spear carrying a stream of azure, ki like a torrent of water thrusting straight forward. However, Raiten was not fazed at all. He roared in contempt, Stop putting on airs. What's with the tough act, you weakling like a lotus? In the blink of an eye, Raiten unleashed a brutal counterattack, Snake Strike Sword Art, Piercing Assault Move. A stream of dark purple spiritual energy shaped like a giant snake had shot forward. It slammed into Rengis' chest, causing him to only let out a pained grunt. Raiten roared in disdain, Is that all your big mouth is good for, you damned weakling? He lunged forward again with terrifying speed, catching Rengis off guard. Raiten executed the Snake Strike Sword Art, Long Snake Trajectory. The sword blade undulated like a venomous snake, slithering through the spear's defense. Rengis could not block it, and was slashed across the ribs by his opponent's sword. Rengis staggered back holding his wound, bewilderedly wondering how he could have blocked it, yet the blade still bent so irrationally. Seeing his opponent struggling, Raiten continuously taunted, Hey, what's wrong with you? Why don't you counterattack? What are you waiting for? If you're so good, then try it. Gritting his teeth and enduring, Rengis decided to use his own technique to retaliate. Cloud Water Spear Art, Floating Clouds, Flowing Water. However, Raiten only curled his lips in a sinister smile before launching. A strike that batted the spear away, he shouted, Get lost. Rengis was sent flying far away, amidst the worried calls of his teammates. Rengis collapsed, his body covered in wounds and blood. He realized that all his movements were being read and exploited by his opponent for counterattacks. Raiten approached with a smug expression, mocking Rengis' intention to counterattack as ridiculous. He gleefully revealed that his specialty was the ultimate counter technique. How pitiful. Do you want me to tell you what my specialty is? It's counter technique. Before Rengis could react, Raiten grabbed his hair and yanked it brutally, incessantly insulting his bloodline, asserting that the child of a false dragon could never become strong. He said he was just a weakling like his father to crush his spirit. Rengis' eyes blazed with utmost fury upon hearing the enemy insult his family. Do not insult my father. Raiten only roared, Fake. Then he delivered a brutal kick to the stomach, sending Rengis flying far, collapsing to the ground, and continuously coughing up blood in helplessness. Rengis bitterly realized that all his efforts over the past 5 years still seemed insufficient. He painfully told himself he was still just a weakling, a fake like his opponent's insult. Amidst the haze, memories of peaceful days with his father suddenly surfaced. On a rocky ledge by the stream, his father gently asked if he liked the folk song. Then he smiled, saying that Rengis was just like him, also loving to watch the clouds and the blue water. His father once gently taught him that clouds always drift idly and river water keeps flowing endlessly. And when looking at them, all worries suddenly become so small. He hoped that one day he would understand that truth. Returning to the harsh reality, those words kept repeating in Rengis' mind like a guiding light. High above, the instructor silently observed the match's progression with a deep, thoughtful gaze. Raiten grabbed Rengis by the collar and roared triumphantly, I think it's been long enough, let's end this here. He swung his fist and continued to hurl insults. A fake is forever a fake. Just crawl on the ground and live like that. But at that very moment, Rengis' eyes suddenly snapped wide open, blazing with a fierce willpower. Jake's mantra echoed, clouds drift calmly and water flows slowly. A stream of deep blue spiritual energy like a river suddenly enveloped Rengis' arm. It helped him halt Raiten's 1,000-pound punch right in front of his face. The sudden shift in momentum left Raiten shocked, exclaiming, Not finished dealing with this brat yet. What's coming now? Witnessing this astonishing burst of power, the captain of the Golden Dragon Legion slightly curled his lips in amusement. Oh, this is... In the middle of the arena, Rengis stood firm within a radiant glow, his sharp eyes indicating a complete awakening of his power. Raiten was shocked, unable to believe his eyes at the radiant glow around his opponent. Impossible? No way, how can this be? Rengis stood there with spear in hand, though covered in injuries. His will was stronger than ever. Raiten gritted his teeth in fury. He screamed with utmost jealousy, "I won't accept this. No way can that fake stand on par with me. I absolutely will not accept it." He poured all his power into the sword blazing with dark purple light, executing a violent sword art. Retin roared, serpent slash, releasing streams of spiritual energy that besieged the arena. Rengis's eyes blazed with a deep azure light. He calmly observed every movement of his enemy with absolute focus. Retin panicked, realizing his attack was completely ineffective. This little brat, clearly I hit him squarely. Has he seen through me? No way, it can't be like this. Refusing to give up, Retin frantically executed the snake strike sword art with the chaotic serpent assault slash. He roared in despair, block this too, with this move. However, Rengis glided gracefully between the sharp sword strikes, causing Retin to exclaim in shock, "What is this? What kind of freakish thing is this?" Witnessing this unbelievable performance, Lika worriedly called her friend's name, but Jake only calmly replied with full confidence, "Yeah." Jake noticed Rengizer had touched the core essence of martial arts. Under the pressure from Lika, he silently reasoned, "Clouds drift silently, water flows smoothly. No matter what happens, it never stops. It softly transforms and swallows all power before letting it drift away." Jake admired seeing Rengis quickly grasp what was taught, even though he had not yet realized this great change. Rengis's focus was admirable as he stood before the surging blue pressure glow. Breton completely lost his composure. He retreated in extreme terror. "What the hell is this? Oh my god, get out of the way, do not come any closer." Ignoring the opponent's panic, Rengis still advanced imposingly with eyes blazing with willpower. He gently swung his spear, easily neutralizing all of Retin's sword strikes. The harsh clang of metal rang out as Rengis used the spear shaft to block Retin's slash. Witnessing his disciple's awakening, Jake stood below and gave a sinister smile. At his right, water does not only flow gently. Retin gritted his teeth, his face contorted with anger and fear. Damn it. He did not understand why the one once looked down upon had become so terrifying an instant. Once the water current becomes violent, no one can stop its power. Rengis poured all his essence into the spear, unleashing the decisive strike bearing the power of a tidal wave. The stream of blue energy struck Retin directly. The powerful blow sent him flying. He immediately lost consciousness with a pale face. The loudspeaker echoed clearly across the arena. "The match is over. The winner is the East Hall." Retin lay slumped amidst the debris, completely unable to resist. Standing in the center of the ring, Rengis gasped in shock, looking at his own hands. "Huh? What?" At that moment, Lika rushed over frantically from below the stands. She cheered in admiration. "That was a great match. Congratulations on reaching 3 stars and winning the match. That was awesome." Rengis looked at his teammate in a daze. He muttered, 3 stars? I beat him?" Looking at Retin slumped at his feet, he still could not believe it. Did I really win? Lika and Celine immediately rushed over with radiant smiles. Yes, that was a wonderful match. Memories of Retin's humiliation flashed back, making Rengis stunned and wonder. I beat Retin again? I won? He stood still, gripping the spear tightly in choked emotion. Tears of joy rolled down Rengis's cheeks as he felt the fruit of his effort. Raymond and Lika were full of praise. "Hey, what was that cool move earlier? That was really awesome. Absolute top-tier skill." Raymond asked excitedly. "Yes, I want to know too. That move looked like a water dragon surging against a waterfall. It looked incredibly cool." Faced with the praise, Rengis exclaimed, flustered and embarrassed, "What is everyone talking about? I do not know any move like that." Master Zaman confirmed, but it really gave that feeling. Jake walked over from behind and calmly explained, "That move is the Ascending Dragon Pierce." He revealed this is one of the techniques in the lower volume of the Cloud Water Spear art. Jake looked at Rengis approvingly. "You only read the upper volume, right? Yet you reached it on your own. Well done." Lika asked in surprise, "Wait, so that is it? But how do you know that? Did someone gossip again?" Jake quickly made up that he glimpsed it on the second floor of the Dragon Script Pavilion, sweating inwardly as he thought, "I cannot say I created it." Witnessing Jake's modesty, Lika silently admired, "Oh, I see. Reaching the lower volume level on his own. Rengis is truly formidable." Jake watched his teammates retreating back, silently pondering about a martial skill from his past life that he created but could not remember when he had recorded it. He guessed that later generations had copied and divided it into many volumes for storage, making it impossible for the inexperienced to see the core hidden in the higher levels. However, the path leading to that hidden core, Rengis had excellently unlocked on his own. Jake smiled contentedly, truly a wonderful seedling. Suddenly, the referee's shout cut through the air. "East Hall, how long are you people going to stand there and chat?" Celine and Lika quickly apologized, while Rick eagerly urged the whole team, "All right, let us try winning and advancing like this." Celine clenched her fists with determination. "Man, I will do my best." After Rengis's resounding victory, East Hall reached the peak, but West Hall was not easy to give up. They quickly regained their morale, making the following matches even more brutal. In the fourth match, despite Celine fighting with all her might, she still had to accept a heartbreaking close defeat. Right after that, in the fifth match, Raymond gritted his teeth and held on through fierce attacks to win a breathless victory, prolonging the confrontation into a tense second half. Raymond returned exhausted, gasping that he himself didn't understand how he won, while Rengis spared no praise for his teammates' endurance. On the other side, Celine bowed her head to apologize for not being able to bring victory, but Lika quickly comforted her, saying everyone had done well. Lika reminded the team that East Hall was leading 3-2, needing just one more point for overall victory, and she announced she would go on stage to end it. As Lika was about to step out, Jake unexpectedly approached and called her name, causing her to ask in surprise what was going on. Jake kept a serious face, moved close and placed his hands on her shoulders, looked straight into Lika's eyes, and asked in a low voice if she was truly okay. Faced with Jake's strange concern and overly serious attitude, Lika was momentarily flustered before affirming that she was still completely fine. She quickly pushed Jake's hand away, reminded him not to stand too close, and decisively declared she would not lose. Renge's enthusiastic cheers rang out from behind. Lika confidently stepped onto the stage with a radiant smile. However, at the same time, Jake narrowed his eyes in alert as he sensed a strange and sinister energy fluctuating in the space. The West Hall enemy inwardly scorned Lika's resistance. He sneered, thinking ice was truly useless. Just winning here would bring everything back to the old track. Facing the blade pointed straight at her, Lika retorted sharply that was impossible, because she would be the one to win. Sixth match between East Hall and West Hall officially exploded right after the command. Lika charged forward with terrifying speed, causing her opponent to exclaim in shock, "Too fast." The West Hall enemy struggled to defend against the lightning-fast slashes. He realized Lika's lightning aura had truly far surpassed Celine's. In his heart, he admitted he could have lost this match. If Lord Venian had not taken action beforehand, a surge of black-purple energy from Venian's hand suddenly enveloped the arena, causing Lika to exclaim in shock, "What?" The opponent sneered maliciously, saying he had already told her, hadn't he? How could she possibly beat him, so she shouldn't bother anymore, such a waste of energy. Lika screamed in pain as a fierce red electrical current began violently ravaging her body. Her face contorted in pain. She realized in horror that she had lost control of her lightning, and couldn't even use her true energy. For a warrior, the body and true energy are always deeply connected, amplifying the power of every movement. In other words, if a warrior loses their true energy in the middle of a match, everything is officially over. Every attack from the opponent at this moment could become a fatal blow to Lika. Even though her body was weary and her face covered in blood, she still tried to bear the pressure, screaming inwardly to find a way to defend at all costs. Watching this from the stands, Celine was shocked to realize something was wrong. "Hey, there's something very strange here." Jake realized Lika's true energy was completely inactive, wondering what on earth had happened. Lika collapsed to the arena floor, coughing up blood continuously in utter helplessness. The West Hall opponent looked at her with mockery but also admiration for her will, to be able to endure this much without using true energy. Truly worthy of being a family heir candidate on par with Lord Venian. However, Venian sat in the distance with a sinister smile. His eyes gleamed brightly with satisfaction because his despicable plan had succeeded. The opponent coldly declared she had held out well, but this was where it ended. Saying he should hurry up and go eat, he swung his sword, intending to deliver the finishing blow to the girl who could no longer resist. Rengis screamed frantically through tears, begging for it to stop, but Rick held him tightly to prevent any recklessness. Witnessing his teammate being humiliated, Jake's eyes blazed with killing intent. A surge of furious energy erupted violently in his hands. Just at the moment the opponent's blade was about to descend upon Lika's head, a bolt of golden lightning suddenly struck straight down onto the arena. Celine had rushed out in time. Using her massive greatsword to block the cruel attack, she angrily shouted straight at the West Hall man, "What the hell are you thinking?" The West Hall opponent was stunned, grinding his teeth in annoyance at the sudden interference from the North Hall prodigy. Celine angrily yelled right in his face, "Hey, this isn't a place to mess around, you hear me? What the hell are you thinking? How dare you interfere in the match like this? Don't play dumb with me. You deliberately wanted to cripple Lika just now, didn't you?" Facing the sharp accusation, Alan maintained a nonchalant attitude, calmly replying that it was a dangerous accusation, and he absolutely did not such a thing. At that moment, Aegis also stepped onto the arena with a stern expression. He affirmed that no matter from which angle you look at it, that attack just now was far too dangerous. Alan irritably retorted, asking Aegis if he was opposing him, but he coldly reminded him to be more careful with his daily actions. Aegis continued to point out sharply, "Everyone saw Lika couldn't use her true energy, yet you still used your aura to attack such a person." Amidst the tension, Venian suddenly approached, placed his hand on Alan's shoulder and sneered, saying Aegis interferes with the match and then butts into their way of doing things. How ridiculous. That was your fault. He smiled evilly, asserting that in real combat, the opponent's condition didn't matter, only crushing the enemy counted, and West Hall always treated every match as a true life-or-death struggle. Celine shouted indignantly, but even so there has to be a limit. This isn't a life-or-death match. Vinian looked at Celine with contempt, mocking her for being so naive. That's why you always lose. He emphasized that West Hall doesn't play at real combat like others. They actually fight in real battles. He emanated a pressure-filled black-purple spiritual energy, calmly affirming that they were also holding back, because this wasn't a life-or-death duel. He smirked sinisterly along with Alan, adding a sarcastic remark that even though they didn't intend to kill, it was perfectly normal for something to get crushed or broken. Celine grit her teeth in fury, lightning crackling around her body. Suddenly, a massive purple pressure enveloped the arena, causing everyone to tremble in fear. Team leader Kim Long, Tekmanchik, appeared with an overwhelming aura, coldly questioning the lack of order and discipline. Even though Celine tried to explain about Alan's dangerous actions targeting Lika, he merely shouted for her to be silent. With his authoritative eyes blazing, Tekmanchik declared that unauthorized personnel on the field had no right to speak. Faced with the team leader's wrath, Aegis and Celine could only bow their heads and admit fault. The referee officially announced West Hall's victory, ordering unrelated personnel to leave the field to prepare for the final round. Aegis told Celine to hold Lika's sword, and together they carried her out of the arena. Seeing Lika's terrible condition, Rengis and his teammates couldn't help panicking with worry. Aegis reassured the group that he had given her a recovery potion, but her injuries needed time to heal, so he would take her to the medical room. Aegis smiled at Jake, silently understanding that he had also intended to step in and stop the opponent's cruel actions. Jake watched his teammates thoughtfully, calculating his next move. You guys rest easy, I'll handle this round. On the way, Celine was still puzzled about how Lika had been defeated so easily. She sensed something abnormal from Lika's first match. It seemed West Hall was using shady tactics to manipulate the outcome. Celine anxiously warned Jake to be especially careful when facing them. Facing Jake, Vinian smugly raised his magical artifact, sneering that Jake's defeat was already predetermined. However, Jake's contemptuous silence and calm demeanor made him feel deeply insulted. The speaker's voice rang out clearly, announcing the start of the 7th match between East Hall and West Hall. But before anyone could react, Jake had already charged forward and landed a straight punch to the face. He sent Alan flying, shocking everyone. The entire arena fell into stunned silence at Jake's lightning-fast counterattack. Even the supervisor's face changed, unable to believe his eyes at this child's strength. Jake looked at his enemy struggling to get up, a faint sneer curling his lips. You seem far too careless. He extended a hand in challenge, his amber eyes blazing with madness. Isn't this what you like? Then I'll fight by real combat rules too. Witnessing the shift, Vinian's underlings screamed in terror. Vinian clutched his bloodied face, gasping in pain and disbelief. He couldn't believe he had been beaten senseless by Jake before even seeing what hit him. Observing the flow of spiritual energy, Jake realized Vinian belonged to one of the 4 great families with a characteristic wind attribute power. He smiled provocatively, revealing that he had intentionally copied Vinian's despicable style to make him taste his own medicine. Insulted, Vinian charged in a rage, but Jake had already vanished before his eyes. In the blink of an eye, Jake appeared behind his opponent with a cold glare, declaring this was the 2nd time, and he delivered a blow that sent Vinian flying in helplessness. He panicked, wondering how he could be dealt with so easily. While Vinian was lost in thought, Jake closed in with a mocking look. Well, looks like you're busy thinking in the middle of a real fight, huh? He added, chilling Vinian. You must feel pretty safe, don't you? Then he threw a 1,000-pound punch into the opponent's stomach, making him scream in agony before collapsing. Standing before the enemy who was on his knees coughing up blood, Jake calmly stated that was the 3rd time. Vinian tremblingly asked back, what the hell are you talking about? Jake pointed a finger at his face, explaining the number of times he had died. He listed the lethal points he had touched. First was the face, 2nd was the neck, 3rd was the heart. Jake affirmed Vinian had died 3 times in a real battle. Vinian stared in shock at his trembling hands, stammering in despair. Impossible. Jake delivered a brutal kick to Vinian's head, sending him flying. He calmly repeated, oh right, this is real combat. Vinian flipped through the air then crashed down, while Jake declared the break time was over. From the stands, Celine and Aegis stood frozen in shock, realizing this was a one-sided beating that far exceeded the rules. Aegis bitterly realized his previous match with Jake had only been a friendly sparring session. He was shocked by Jake's unfair level of power when he saw him emit a dark, oppressive spiritual energy. Standing proudly over the crumpled Vinian, Jake asked clearly, do you understand what real combat is now? He admitted that the concept of crushing the enemy was correct, and West Hall could become excellent warriors. Jake watched Vinian struggle to rise and added, but this isn't a battlefield. There are supervising instructors and recovery potions here. You could say this is a pretty soft environment for someone who always talks about real combat. Jake slightly curled his lips, his amber eyes sharp. Your real combat is far from touching its essence. You're just running away from your own weakness. Stung in his pride, Vinian roared madly, shut up. A violent surge of wind energy erupted, tearing the ground apart as he lost control. A bastard like you has no right to lecture me. Facing the fury, Jake remained unruffled, teasing him. Oh, so you're in your rebellious phase. Then there's no other way. Jake got into a ready stance, clearly stating he would take the attack. Just come at him and vent all your frustration. Venian charged like a wild beast, screaming, "Why are you so stubborn? I told you to shut up. Stop acting like you know everything." He swung his fan, invoking a wind fan technique with wind blades that created sharp gusts of air. Deep within, Venian was screaming in despair. Just once, a single moment, as long as he could touch him even a little. And Ding Quang attacked, pouring his entire life force into each slash with a faint hope of turning the tide. Below the stands, Renja stared in shock at the shattered ground, unable to understand why it had cracked open like that. A trainee explained that it was the power of the Fan Yu family, one of the 4 great clans. Their wind spirit energy was invisible, unable to be seen with the naked eye, creating extremely dangerous attacks. Celine, sitting far away, curled her lips in contempt. Such filthy power, it suited them perfectly. Though admitting that this was a tough opponent with invisible chain attacks, Rengus still watched Lord Jake with concern. On the arena, Venian was completely broken. Why had none of his attacks hit the target at all? Feeling bitter. Feeling bitter means nothing special. If it is too bitter, just give up and go back to sleep. Jake, dodging calmly with his eyes closed, casually flicked his forehead in a painful strike. It would be very easy if you go with the flow. Venian held his head and roared furiously. What? Stop spouting that nonsense. Jake moved lightly like a ghost, continuously pointing out flaws. There it is again, full of openings. Despite Venian frantically swinging his fan and screaming, Jake still moved with his eyes closed, skillfully weaving between the wind blades. He sighed in exasperation. Ah, the rebellious age indeed. Jake asked calmly, how's it going? Feeling any better yet? Venian roared in utter resentment. Damn it all, do not mess with me. I will kill you. Jake sighed softly, silently acknowledging that stubborn will was admirable. But Venian's body had actually reached its limit long ago. Very quickly, Jake closed in and delivered another punch to Venian's stomach, causing him extreme pain. He coldly warned that if he continued, Venian would only suffer more, and suggested ending the match here. Venian stubbornly clung to Jake's leg, his hand suddenly blazing with a sinister purple spirit energy. Seeing his opponent kneeling at his feet, but refusing to let go, Jake muttered, "Oh my god, quite tough eh? So you still want to see this through to the end?" Suddenly, Venian burst into insane laughter, haha, echoing throughout the arena, making Jake wonder what scheme he was brewing. Venian's eyes turned crazed, he looked up at Jake with a savage smile. "You are finished." Instantly, a violent surge of azure wind energy erupted, enveloping his body, creating a powerful shockwave that startled Jake, making him wonder what kind of power that was. Venian poured all his remaining strength into the wind fan art with the ultimate technique, Wind Cutter. Extremely strong gusts of wind shot straight towards Jake, leaving him only time to utter a sound, before being completely engulfed. Witnessing the shocking scene, Renjus yelled in disbelief. Oh my god, did he actually hit Lord Jake? Up in the stands, Aegis quietly observed with a thoughtful expression. A trainee remarked that Jake seemed different, making Aegis squint suspiciously and ask what she meant. At the climax of the battle, Celine had managed to bring Lika and Marin back to the stands area. Seeing their teammates safe and sound, Renjus and Rick rushed over anxiously to ask Han, "Are Lady Lika and Marin alright?" Marin apologized profusely for causing everyone worry. Rick looked towards the dust-shrouded arena and worriedly turned to ask Lika if she knew what was happening with Lord Jake. Lika gazed pensively towards the arena, bitterly realizing a shocking truth. Rather than knowing, it is more accurate to say I realize he is just like me. She revealed that during the previous match, she suddenly could not use her primal power. Renjus and Rick exclaimed in shock. Lika continued her analysis, noting that Layla also showed a similar strange behavior in her match against Venian, and worriedly asserted that if it was a secret scheme, then at this very moment, Jake was also falling into a state where he could not use his power. On the arena, Venian laughed loudly in satisfaction at his opponent's plight. Ha ha ha, that felt damn good. That is the price for daring to be arrogant with me. He swore he would make sure Jake never got back up again. Pouring all his strength into the wind fan art, the first secret technique, Endless Wind Earth. A blinding sandstorm engulfed Jake. Venian roared, "Die." While Renjus below could only scream in despair, Lord Jake. But right in the eye of the storm, a steel fist suddenly broke through the violent wind stream. Jake, without needing primal power, used only pure physical strength to shatter his opponent's secret technique and punched him straight in the face. Venian screamed in pain as he saw the lightning-fast counterattack flying straight at his face. He was sent flying helplessly. Venian collapsed, coughing up blood continuously in utter resentment. Why did you? What about premature sharpness? Premature sharpness just means early failure, nothing else. Witnessing that scene, Lika smiled slightly in admiration. She realized that even if his power was sealed or faced with any scheme, it meant nothing to a monster like Jake. Amidst the ruined arena, Jake stood tall with an overwhelming spirit energy, his clenched fist glowing bright as a declaration of absolute power. Why? Venian blurted out in despair. Jake quietly looked at his hand, which was emitting a sinister purple aura. He smirked slightly. This is poison. Venian roared in astonishment. Impossible. How did you know it was poison? That type of poison should not have been detectable. Jake walked calmly, offering a rare compliment to his opponent. You finally managed to surpass the threshold. The reason everyone who fought you failed by a hair's breadth is because this poison only activates when primal power is stirred. Watching the poison aura dissipate, Jake marveled inwardly. It slipped past even my senses until I actually used primal power. You did quite well. Is his hobby praising people who fail under him sarcastically? Venian gritted his teeth, insisting that with that poison, he was sure he had sealed Jake's primal power. But why? How could you still unleash that final blow? Jake calmly flexed to show off his chiseled muscles, clearly declaring that such things were meaningless against a thoroughly trained body. Having primal power sealed is no big deal. A top fighter like me would never be shaken by it, right? Jake's words completely unsettled Venian. He gripped his weapon tightly, roaring with grievance. Worthless. You dare call me achievement a god-killing poison? Worthless. Jake squinted and asked back, oh, so you created this poison yourself? It seems harmless to you, but you use your inner force to transmit it into others to unleash its effect. This is indeed a very impressive breakthrough poison. But Jake's voice suddenly turned stern. But it's useless against me. Immediately, Jake channeled his energy and expelled all the toxic gas out through his nose. Venian was so shocked his limbs went limp. He detoxified himself through his nose. Jake pointed straight at his opponent, spitting out harsh words. That nameless poison was interesting, but that's all it is. Everything eventually comes back to the power of your own self. He asserted that if Venian remained dependent on toxins, his path ahead was still very long. Venian stood frozen, his face contorted in disbelief at what had just happened. So then, are you satisfied now? Venian gnashed his teeth in rage, the feeling of utter humiliation making him only able to cry out about this wretched world. A cruel world surfaced in his memory, where he was once a child with soulless, gloomy eyes. His harsh mother always haunted him. No matter what you have to do, you must be number one. If not, you have no reason to exist. Venian was once an extremely ordinary person in a family full of outstanding individuals. While everyone praised Lika for mastering secret techniques early, or gossiped that Venian was the least likely candidate, he silently endured his mediocrity. He realized that no matter how hard he tried, his efforts only exposed his lack of talent compared to his older brothers and younger sister. His mother ceaselessly screamed, whipped, and scolded him for failing to do the simplest tasks. She insulted her useless child throughout the endless days. But in the darkness of despair, Venian found an escape through books and chemical flasks. He dedicated himself to research and finally discovered his true talent, poison. Looking at the scattered rat carcasses, Venian laughed maniacally as he held the fiery purple solution, immersed in his only deadly talent. He believed that poison alone was enough. He could fight and climb to the top to gain recognition from his mother. Venian roared with grievance. What do you know about me? I have always been compared to geniuses, every day, by everyone. No matter how hard I try, compared to their talent, I am nothing. Yet they still compare me to them. No matter the cost, I must crawl my way up. And you, who knows nothing, dare to judge me? He felt a twinge of pity, exactly the same feeling as being compared to someone else's child. Han Ding Quang charged forward with the short blade, but Jake calmly dodged every sword stroke by a hair's breadth. In an instant, Jake grabbed Venian's arm and twisted it behind his back, causing the short blade to fall immediately. A violent explosion of dark purple spiritual energy erupted, enveloping them both, making Rengus and his friends below shout in worry. Watching from a distance, Celine squinted in suspicion, wondering what kind of monster that boy was to possess such terrifying power. Venian was engulfed in an ominous, deep purple aura, screaming madly, really on poison? That's right, as long as I win, nothing else matters. I have no combat talent, but with poison I have talent. As long as I have poison, I will not lose. He drew a secret device, his eyes showing a reckless resolve. I didn't want to use this, but if I want to win, I have no choice. He planned to create a deadly smokescreen along with poison-coated needles that even he would find hard to cure. But just as Venian activated his final, sacrificial move, Jake closed in and firmly gripped his hand. He looked directly into his opponent's eyes, asking coldly, "That's your final move, isn't it?" Venian was stunned, completely shattered. What? He fell to his knees, trembling and retreating as Jake approached like a phantom. In his heart, Venian screamed, "What the hell is this guy?" Jake extended his radiant hands, his eyes white with immense pressure, grabbing Venian firmly, leaving him only knowing the numbness of utter despair. Jake looked straight into Venian's eyes. "Listen carefully, you are making a huge misunderstanding." He asserted that to become strong, one does not need martial arts talent, and one also does not need a special talent to control inner energy. Jake's eyes blazed with power. "All you need is this. I want to win. That very desire is the path to true strength." Seeing Venian bewildered, Jake pointed a finger at his face and snapped, "You claim you have no martial arts talent? Nonsense. The real problem is that you're using the wrong weapon." Jake suggested, that's right, something with a longer handle. For example, an umbrella would suit you quite well. Faced with Venian's dazed look, Jake asserted this was no joke. Strange as it sounds, just like a metal fan, an umbrella also has a long history as a weapon. Casually declared that in his opinion, almost anything could become a weapon. Venian asked himself in a daze, something that suits me? He sank into painful memories of his lack of talent, but Jake suddenly rubbed his head in a friendly manner. You always think you have no combat talent. Ignoring his struggle, Jake patted his shoulder and encouraged him. But when you step onto the battlefield, you carry the bearing of a warrior more than anyone else. Hearing such a sympathetic story, a few more words and they would go from enemies to sworn brothers. Jake looked distantly at the murderous battlefield, lowering his voice. In a real fight, like you said, as long as you win, that's all that matters. If you cling to a warrior's pride, you won't be able to protect anything. He asserted that to win and protect what is important, one must know how to use every tool at their disposal. Jake concluded that Venian's reasoning was not wrong, only that he had misapplied it. He stood up with a radiant smile, extended his hand toward Venian, and said, come to me. If you do, I promise I will make you as strong as you desire. Venian was stunned and asked tremblingly, what do you mean? Jake gave a faint smile of confirmation. That is right, as you can see, I am stronger than you, am I not? He gave a friendly smile and extended his hand. Do not worry. When I am done with you, you will no longer complain about talent. I will forge you until you become strong. Witnessing Jake's overwhelming confidence, Venian stood frozen, inwardly marveling. That guy sure knows how to talk. But in the middle of that touching moment, Jake suddenly stopped as if remembering something. Gus forgot one thing. Before the bewildered opponent, Jake suddenly threw a powerful punch. Lightning struck Venian directly in the face. We are still in the middle of a match. When you wake up, come find me, alright? What is up with that? Just a few words of affection and then he hits the guy like a bolt from the blue like that. Venian lay motionless, managing only to groan out a curse before completely passing out. The referee announced the final result in a firm voice. The match is over. He was secretly horrified, thinking that the young man had even managed to dispel the poison in that moment. The loudspeaker announcement resounded throughout the arena. The champion of East Hall. Jake stood tall with a radiant smile amidst the roaring cheers. Rengis, Celine, Raymond, and the members of East Hall erupted in joy, hugging each other to celebrate this historic victory. Meanwhile, Venian was quietly helped away by his teammates in disappointment. It was a bit pitiful, but oh well, the loudspeaker firmly concluded the event. To celebrate the glory of East Hall, a grand feast had been prepared with great care. Aromatic grilled meat, hot bread, and countless delicacies were beautifully arranged on a long, splendid table under the shimmering candlelight. Amidst the luxurious space, students from other halls were also present and could not help but wonder. Hey, East Hall won, right? So why are we all gathered here too? Another person replied in confusion, I do not know the full truth either. I guess they are about to explain, so let us just wait and see. While everyone was still buzzing with discussion, Jake remained calm, devouring a giant chicken leg with a satisfied expression. Seeing Lika looking at him with a tense expression, he chewed noisily and asked what was wrong. You should eat quickly, or it will all get cold. How can you casually eat and drink in this situation? Are you not curious about what they are about to explain? I am speechless with you. At that moment the large door burst open. The high-ranking official entered with a composed demeanor. Sorry for making you all wait. He looked around the room and continued. Even though some of you have started, the rest of you should also have your meal. This feast is a reward for you all for having striven to participate in the recent selection matches. High-ranking official stood at the head of the table, his expression stern. Now I will explain about the special mission. A timid student raised a hand to ask if they were allowed to hear about this matter. He nodded in confirmation. It is possible that you too will be participating in this mission. He began to reveal the shocking information. A few days ago, a special rift was discovered within the territory of the Eldragon family. The entire room fell into a state of astonishment upon hearing the news of that rift. Jake gnawed on his chicken leg while silently recalling the knowledge he had once read at the Dragon Literature Pavilion about this mysterious phenomenon. The high-ranking official explained that these were places that could not be conquered by conventional means. This made Lika wonder about the true meaning behind those words. The secret gradually unfolded as he spoke of the harsh conditions. Only 7 people of Tier 3 star or below could enter inside. Anyone who has reached Tier 4 star or exceeds the number limit will be pushed out by a powerful coercive force. Even the family head cannot enter if he does not meet the requirements. The reason you were chosen is because the family's 3-star forces are stretched thin due to the recent surge in the appearance of rifts. The ultimate objective is the magic water, a miraculous liquid necessary to awaken magic, which is rumored to exist within that special rift. Hearing this, Rengis and the group of students exclaimed in shock. Magic water? Jake looked extremely interested, silently praising, that definitely is. The official confirmed that magic water helps convert mana energy into magical power. Thinking of the prospect of touching a new power, Jake's eyes sparkled with excitement. He shouted loudly, magic. Looks like he is too excited, big bro. Say it slowly. The official reiterated that the world is ruled by the 8 great families, including the Eldragon family, but the other 7 families have magic springs, while Eldragon is the only one without that treasure. In other words, this mission is to conquer the special rift to collect magic water for the family. He looked at the students with sharp eyes, asserting that this was an important mission and failure absolutely must not happen. However, the high-ranking official lowered his voice in warning that this rift is located close to the territory of the Cerberus family, one of the 8 ruling great families. They will surely set their sights on this prize. Because of this complex nature, the family organized the selection. Celine nodded upon hearing this. Yeah, so that is it. So the 7 winning members of East Hall will take on this mission? We are so lucky. However, the official immediately clarified that although East Hall won, those 7 people do not automatically become the conquest team. Instead, under the leadership of East Hall, a new team will be formed from all the people present here. He explained that making everyone fight to the end was for the organizing committee to have a clear view of each individual's capabilities. Even though some people may not have shown their full strength, it is the basis for building the optimal team for the mission. Therefore, Jake, please select the members for the Rift Conquest team. Jake flinched and shouted in confusion, Hummy? For his surprise, the high-ranking official calmly reminded him that Jake was the representative of East Hall, so this was his responsibility. Feeling troubled, Jake pointed at Lika and frankly told her to handle the task of selecting people to help him. Lika was so shocked her mouth fell open in disbelief. Jake chuckled, confirming he would participate, but leaving Lika to decide the team composition herself. When asked if he was sure, Jake casually replied that if he had to choose, the team would probably consist only of himself. His arrogant statement left Lika speechless, as she knew with that personality, Jake could very well do it. Jake further explained that if Lika wanted to become the head of the family, learning to judge people with her own eyes was a valuable experience. He asked the official if Lika could represent them. Although not opposed, the official worriedly reminded that leading the team was an important stepping stone to the position of family head. But Jake flatly waved his hand, saying he had no intention of becoming the family head. The shocking declaration caused both Vinian and Lika to stare wide-eyed in astonishment. He had no plan to become the family head after his shocking declaration? Lika asked in shock. This was no joke, was he serious? Why not? He had the right to do what he wanted. That might be so, but if he became the family head, he would have the entire Eldragon family in his grasp. Jake nodded coldly. Forget it. I do not need that. The only thing I seek is just one. Meanwhile, in a gloomy yet luxurious mansion, a mysterious man wearing sunglasses and smoking a cigar sat lounging on a sofa. Beside him, 2 black hunting dogs with glowing red eyes. His subordinate respectfully reported that the demonic water seemed to truly exist there. He smiled sinisterly. Ah, I understand. In that case, they will want to reclaim it at any cost. So what are the conditions to enter that special rift? The subordinate bowed. A maximum of 7 people, all below 3-star rank. He assessed that this condition was not too difficult, but the problem was that the Eldragon side had already moved a step faster. He laughed contemptuously. Those lizards will surely take all the slots. But it seems they lack manpower, planning to send even newly trained soldiers into battle. The subordinate asked in amazement, were they planning to conquer the rift with children who were not yet true warriors? He calculated maliciously, it seems so, but if the children go to conquer the rift, those hairs of the old lizard will definitely be present. He suddenly asked his subordinate, how many camouflage bracelets did they have left? Upon hearing the report of about 4 left, he immediately gave a decisive order. This is a command. Use all of those bracelets, eliminate those brats for me. The subordinate asked again in shock, worried about the precious items, but he dismissed it. Leaving them in storage would only let them rot. Using them all at once here was far more worthwhile. Besides, I am very curious to see what face that old lizard will show when he sees his children killed. It will surely be amusing. He flashed a eerie smile beneath the cigar smoke, preparing a malicious plan aimed at the young sprouts of the Eldragon family. Back at the party, after being given the authority to decide the team lineup for the special mission, Lika declared clearly, alright, the one I choose is. Immediately, an extreme training plan was implemented under Jake's guidance. Standing before his teammates, he said clearly, now everyone needs to get stronger. First, Rick and Marin will do basic exercises. Like Rengus and the others, you need to run every day and train your muscles. Rengus and his friends strained as they crawled under the weight of massive boulders. Rick and Marin turned pale. Jake casually explained, strengthening the foundation helps you use martial skills more powerfully. Seeing their terrified expressions, he naively asked what was wrong. Despite being panicked, Rick suppressed his fear and gritted his teeth, replying, no, it is fine. The group entered an intensive training phase. Jake flipped the red cloth, revealing a rough, angular stone. He turned to Raymond, telling him he would use this regeneration stone prepared by the instructor. Raymond exclaimed in astonishment, a regeneration stone? Jake confirmed this was the perfect choice based on the unique properties he had just recalled. He explained that this stone would reflect all impacts with 100 times the force, and could not be destroyed unless using true primal force. Before everyone's bewildered eyes, Jake announced a crazy decision. From now on, without primal force, I will hit it with my bare hands. Lick and Rick were stunned with their mouths wide open. Going with this guy, every time he opened his mouth to speak, it nearly made people faint. Jake focused intensely, throwing a powerful punch with his bare hand at the stone. He punched normally, but without using primal force. The rebound force should have been immense. Yet Raymond quickly realized the secret behind that action. When he saw Jake use the shield on his other hand to completely block the rebounding energy, he blurted out in shock, "Oh my god, for real?" He completely blocked the rebound force using his shield. Jake skillfully channeled the rebound force along his body, then used the shield to neutralize it, creating a reflex and physical training exercise on an entirely different level. Jake raised his shield to demonstrate, like this. The exercise I assign is training on how to directly receive an impact or redirect it. Raymond watched in admiration, thinking to himself, so that is it, I am supposed to do this. I never expected this kind of training with a regeneration stone. After Raymond's part, Jake turned and called the next person. Alright, next is Celine. She hurriedly replied yes. Jake handed the sword to Celine, telling her to continuously stab the regeneration stone. She could use primal force, but he stressed not to let the target be scattered, only focus on a single point. Celine answered firmly, understood. She immediately gathered her strength, taking a deep breath. Then she unleashed lightning-fast thrusts, tearing through the air towards the stone. After the effort, Celine panted as she looked at the result. Jake frankly remarked, you see, even trying to focus on one point is not easy. Celine wiped her sweat and admitted, that is true. Jake further explained, the exercise I assign is to aim precisely at a single point. Looking at the stone which had already self-repaired, he continued, it has finished fixing itself already. No matter how many times I look at it, I cannot get used to it, but it is perfect for training. Now watch closely. In the blink of an eye, Jake delivered a powerful thrust, causing the stone to shatter at the point of contact under Celine's astonished gaze. Witnessing that power, she blurted out in shock, amazing. Jake calmly explained that his swordsmanship focused on the number of attacks, but it would be better if he learned to cherish each slash and aim very carefully. Celine smiled and replied clearly, I understand. Finally, Jake turned to call the last member. Now it is Rengis's turn. Rengis waited anxiously and asked, yes, what should I do? Jake casually handed over a pure white feather. This. Rengis asked back in confusion, a feather? Instantly, Jake used his wind aura to skillfully make the feather flutter and spin. Witnessing that, Rengis was stunned to realize something unusual. Hey, damn, what is that wind? Isn't that Lord Venian's wind? Since when do you know how to use it? Jake explained casually as if it were obvious. Oh, this. After I fought Venian. After being hit by his wind aura, I could use it right away. Rick standing nearby broke out in a cold sweat from astonishment, while Rengis was completely speechless at this great master's absurdity. He said it so casually, so unreasonably. Not caring about his friend's shock, Jake began the lesson. Your exercise is to practice letting yourself flow with the current. You have to try hard, mess up, and I will kick your ass to the chicken coop. Looking at the light feather being freely controlled by Jake, Iz wondered, letting yourself flow with the current? Jake calmly explained, that is right, not following or grasping the current, just let yourself flow with it. And if he mastered it like this, Jake stood firmly, holding the feather in absolute balance. On the tip of his nose it shone brightly. He looked at himself. He could even create his own current. Just then the sound of Lika's voice rang out from the city gate. Hey Jake! Lika waved urgently, if we do not hurry we will be late. Jake suddenly remembered the schedule. That is right. He threw a bundle of knives, causing Rengis to catch them flustered. Then, while running off, he instructed his teammates. So, I have given you your assignments. Train hard, okay? Rengis and Rick could only stand dazed, watching his retreating back. Rengis sighed helplessly. Is there anything easier? I cannot possibly achieve this today. He and Rick looked at each other with emotion and promised to give their best effort to live up to everyone's expectations. Meanwhile, Jake and Lika were walking along the corridor. She could not help but wonder what Jake had done to make everyone wait. He smiled apologetically and explained that he had just given training exercises to Rengis's group. Jake enthusiastically commented that this lineup was truly interesting. Lika also laughed heartily with excitement, while Jake inwardly affirmed these were the most elite members selected, and this time it seemed as solid as a rock. Just as they reached the end of the corridor, they saw Aegis waiting for them. He smiled in greeting when he saw the two had regrouped, then softly apologized for keeping everyone waiting. The elite team of the Eldragon family had finally assembled, including Celine, Venian, and Alan. Jake's eyes blazed with a wild light. He gave a proud smile and then commanded clearly, let us go. The group immediately charged forward with fervor, heading straight for the mission. At the main hall, a high-ranking official reported to the Patriarch Banja that the selected team had officially departed. He stated that the Cerberus family had also discovered this special rift faster than expected. Even so, he affirmed that even if those hunting dogs came, El Dragon's elite team had officially entered the rift. Banja sat in silence with a pensive face, facing the new variables of the journey. In the office, the official respectfully reported, "There is only one worrisome thing." In response to Banja's question, he expressed concern that after the rift was conquered, the wild dogs of Cerberus might come to steal the spoils. He believed that if the selected team and the guards regrouped, everything would be fine. Banja pondered for a moment and then asked about the selected team's level of ability. He affirmed they were among the strongest at the 3-star level, and there would be no problem conquering the first rift. Just hearing it was credible enough, making one feel proud. He believed that even when facing those wild dogs, this lineup could hold its own. Even though Banja asked doubtfully about a 2-star member being mixed in, he clearly confirmed, yes, even Lord Jake alone is more than enough. The statement made Banja astonished. He explained that he had witnessed all of Banja's children, but Jake was the first person whose true limits he could not see through. Although the other official wondered about Jake only being a 2-star, he affirmed that after witnessing Jake fight in person, he realized that the number of stars did not determine strength. He added a sentence that shocked his colleague. Furthermore, the first time I saw Lord Jake's martial arts, I had the exact same feeling as the first time I witnessed the dragon-slaying war art of Lord Banja. Shocking revelation made Banja exclaim, "What? One must know that the dragon-slaying war art was the ultimate secret technique passed down only to the heads of the Eldragon family and was always kept absolutely confidential. Even ordinary people did not have the qualifications to learn it." The other official was shocked and asked if Jake truly possessed such terrifying power. With a firm gaze, he affirmed that because he had witnessed the dragon-slaying war art many times, he was certain Jake's martial arts were identical to Lord Banja's. Jake's power was not only comparable to the dragon-slaying war art, but according to N, it was somewhat superior. Looking at Jake's figure blazing with spiritual energy, the commander thought to himself, "No, more accurately, they can surpass it. Perhaps I was ultimately wrong." Banja thoughtfully recalled several years ago when he ordered Freya to investigate everything about Jake, including his birth records. However, the result was a complete blank as no useful information was found. There was even no trace of Jake having learned martial arts from anyone before entering the dragon pit, and was stunned and questioned himself. So that means all of it? His martial arts were all self-taught? How ferocious is that? A wild speculation surged within his heart, as if he were the first patriarch or the 15th patriarch, looking at the imposing portrait and blurted out, "He is like a reincarnation of them." That assertion made the atmosphere freeze, every gaze fixed on the unbelievable truth. Deep in his heart, the clan leader muttered in doubt about a reincarnation. Reincarnation transmigration, Banja muttered skeptically at N's shocking theory. He chuckled lightly, casually brushed it off and spoke, "You are just talking nonsense. It sounds ridiculous." Even so, the clan leader's eyes suddenly turned cold. He asserted that if that brat was truly that strong, then the Sebaroth bunch were not worth worrying about. A week later, at the special rift, the atmosphere was tense with purple spiritual energy covering it. A group of confused soldiers reported to Freya. Before we could realize it, His Majesty had already vanished. Looking in the direction pointed into the deep forest, Freya sighed in exasperation. That man, honestly, she worriedly wondered if sending a few more people would be okay. Suddenly, Freya sensed a familiar aura. She lifted her eyes slightly. "Oh, he has arrived." Seeing the figure strolling over, she spoke in a reproachful tone. "If you all had run at full speed, you would have arrived sooner." Jake replied bluntly, "What's the trouble? Why waste energy before a mission?" Lika was startled to recognize Instructor Freya. "Why are you here?" Freya corrected sternly, "I am on a mission now, not an instructor." She revealed that she was there to guard and protect this special territory area. Before the group was a mountainous forest region distorted by streams of ominous purple-black energy. Lika exclaimed in shock, "Oh damn, is this the legendary special territory?" Freya explained that some special rifts would affect the outside world and form a territory surrounding it, and this place was no exception. Standing before the rift emitting a suffocating pressure, Jake merely crossed his arms and observed with fascination. Looking at the pitch-black trees, Jake pondered, recognizing the familiar power flow. It was exactly like the black bone from the Berserk boar, so it turns out all mutations came from the rift. Jake turned to ask Freya why she had to guard the territory. She calmly replied that it was to prevent the Cerberus family from coveting it. Seeing Lika confused, Freya added that if they conquered the rift and obtained the magic water, Eldragon's power would skyrocket, and Cerberus would never like that. Besides watching for enemies, Freya said they also had to handle monsters pushed out of the territory. Jake asked curiously, "What the hell, what do you mean naturally pushed out?" Freya confirmed and reiterated the rule that this rift only allowed a maximum of 7 people of 3-star level or below to enter. Venian, standing nearby, also spoke up to confirm he had heard of that. To prove it, Freya reached out and touched the blazing purple spiritual energy, and was immediately thrown back by an extremely strong force. She asserted that even she was rejected by this barrier. Same thing happened to monsters of 4-star level or higher. Those who did not meet the conditions could not set foot in the territory. Freya emphasized the cruel rule: entering the rift was first come, first served. Until those inside succeeded or were wiped out, no one else could enter. Jake reached out and gently touched the barrier, silently assessing. So this is the barrier that chooses who is worthy. Enter. He heard Freya say this thing could not be broken by force. Red eyes suddenly blazed with a manic gleam. He clenched his fist, flashed a proud grin, rushing through so much. Hearing that makes me want to break it even more. Freya broke out in a cold sweat and reminded him, Jake, you should listen carefully when others are speaking. Jake winked confidently. Of course I listened, making her only mutter silently that he was a liar. Freya quickly regained her stern expression. She urged the team because they did not know when Cerberus would come, so they had to enter immediately. Standing before the gate of life and death, everyone shouted in unison with fighting spirit, yes, we are ready. Freya smiled encouragingly, then I wish you all good luck conquering it. As soon as the team entered the barrier, a gloomy purple mist immediately enveloped everything. From the darkness, a herd of mutant deer with glowing eyes charged in to attack wildly. Standing before the giant monster, Venian had already assumed a defensive stance with his new weapon in hand. With a loud shout, Venian swung the staff, creating surging streams of emerald wind energy to blow the opponents away. Witnessing the impressive display, the accompanying subordinate murmured, truly wonderful. Venian replied with a simple, his expression emotional as if he still could not believe this power. Memories suddenly returned to a few days prior, and Alan accidentally stumbled upon a secret conversation in the hallway. Alan peeked curiously. Oh, he recognized Jiazik and Venian standing opposite each other. Venian held the staff with an extremely annoyed expression. He pressed, what is this? Jake looked at his opponent with a determined gaze, repeating his promise. I told you from the start, I will personally train you. Venian asked in shock, are you serious? He still wondered what this item was for. Jake stated clearly, of course, once I say I will do it. He emphasized this was a real combat opportunity and demanded Venian use that staff in the mission. Venian was so shocked he yelled, hey, that's too difficult. You mean you want me to use a weapon I've never touched in this important mission? Facing Jake's calm nod of confirmation, Venian could only rage and scream damn it, then kicked hard to vent his anger. He gritted his teeth, firmly refusing the insane suggestion. Now, no. Jake roared decisively. Do it. Despite Venian's firm refusal, Jake did not let up. He lunged into a scuffle, forcing his opponent to grab hold of the staff no matter what. I don't care, just do it. The struggle was both funny and frustrating as Jake kept pushing despite the other party's weak resistance. Venian collapsed to his knees, breathing raggedly, admitting Jake's stubbornness was unshakable. He wondered about the umbrella Jake had mentioned during the selection, but was not here. Jake bluntly explained the staff was a replacement because of the similar usage, and demanded Venian train with it immediately. Venian was bewildered, wondering how to train when he did not know any staff or stick techniques. He was worried about his lack of basic knowledge right on the eve of an important mission. Jake laughed heartily, reassuring his opponent that he had created his own martial art called Illusory Wind Blossom Technique. When he held the staff and channeled wind spiritual energy as instructed, Venian immediately felt an astonishing compatibility, almost wanting to take him as a master right away. Witnessing Venian's sharp movements, Alan could not help but be startled into thought. He realized his master's staff path was now lighter and sharper than when using the fan, blending perfectly with wind energy. Alan wondered if Jake had truly personally created this martial art for Venian. Jake crossed his arms in admiration of his opponent's finishing blow on the monster, praising that the strike just now was very solid. Alan, drenched in sweat, tremblingly asked again to confirm if Jake really created the Illusory Wind Blossom technique. Receiving a nod, both of them were frozen. Only one question remained in their minds. Just who was Jake that he could personally create martial arts? Alan was completely lost in speculation about the true identity of this young master. Amidst the silent space, Jake suddenly called out when he recognized a familiar figure behind him. Hey, you are Lila, right? The light purple-haired girl gave a sharp, faint smile. Found out. She still firmly held a long staff in her hand. Lila approached, her eyes shining with curiosity mixed with admiration. She looked straight at Jake and asked, hey, is it true that you created that martial art? Facing Lila's bewildered expression, Jake crossed his arms confidently and affirmed it was true. When Lila was still stunned, asking how it was possible, he only slightly curled his lips in a proud smile. Do you even need to ask? Of course, darling, because that is me. Witnessing such excessive confidence, Lila showed admiration while Celine, standing behind, was utterly exasperated. What is he saying? Creating martial arts by oneself is impossible. Although she denied it out loud, deep down Celine was still shaken. Somehow it sounded convincing. If it was Jake. Standing not far away, Venian coldly turned away and dropped a sentence. Whatever, right? He stated through gritted teeth that he just did not want Jake to become a burden dragging the whole team down. Celine raised an eyebrow sarcastically. Oh, is that easy? A man who cannot fight normally without poison now wants to use this unfamiliar martial art. Are you really enjoying it yet? Venian retorted angrily. That is exactly what I am saying. The atmosphere became extremely tense as Venian and Alan furiously shouted, If you would just shut up and listen. Watch your words. Look, Celine was not one to back down either. She yelled back, Oh, does the truth make you angry? If you are a servant, then do something for your master. Seeing the situation about to spiral out of control, Aegis quickly intervened. Wait, Sister Celine, everyone stop arguing. Right now we are all comrades conquering this special rift. He gave a conciliatory smile, reminding them that no one knew what would happen inside, and cooperation was necessary to complete the mission. However, Celine still could not swallow her anger. She grumbled, cooperate with those who poisoned Lika and almost killed her. Do not joke. She decisively turned her back and left, declaring she did not accept this personnel choice. Despite Aegis calling after her, Celine kept walking without looking back. Aegis turned to look at Lila with concern. Lila, are you okay with this? Standing next to Jake, Lila only paused before asking back, What do you mean? Aegis quietly asked if she felt uneasy about having to team up with Venian. Contrary to Celine's harshness, Lila only calmly replied that she did not really care, because in the end she just wanted to complete the mission well. So dissatisfied that now she only wanted that, a simple wish but hard to fulfill. Seeing that calm attitude, Jake laughed heartily, not sparing praise that Lila was truly a person with backbone. However, the tense atmosphere had not yet cooled when Celine kept badgering Lika about the reason for choosing Venian and Alan into the elite team. Facing her cousin's interrogation, Lika hesitantly admitted she did not have the tolerance like Leela, but she clearly stated that the abilities of those two could not be denied, and she had set aside personal grudges to choose the people needed for the mission. Celine inwardly assessed that Lika had developed more mature thoughts befitting a leader, but she still did not forget to taunt Venian as inferior to her own younger sister. Offended, Lika snapped back, asking if Celine wanted to pick a fight. Aegis quickly intervened to keep the peace. Are teammates ready to devour each other at the slightest opening? Jake silently observed the internal rift, secretly worried whether this ununited team would be alright when entering a life-and-death place. Jake realized the after effects of the selection match still heavily impacted everyone's morale, making them unable to truly trust each other enough to have each other's backs. He understood that without understanding and accepting each other's nature, they would forever remain a fragmented, risky gathering. While Jake was immersed in thoughts about the team's future, a sudden strong tremor startled everyone. Lika pointed ahead in panic, shouting loudly for everyone to look. In the dark space, a gigantic spatial rift glowing with purple spiritual energy was gradually becoming clear, emitting a suffocating pressure that enveloped everything. Jake and his comrades exclaimed in shock as they witnessed the legendary spatial rift right before their eyes. The chaotic energy radiating from within seemed to devour anyone who dared approach. Lika clearly reminded the entire team to stay highly focused because no one knew what was awaiting them inside that dark land. He clenched his fist, decisively ordering everyone to enter together. However, at the very moment they stepped into the purple light, Jake's eyes suddenly glowed in an odd manner. Jake was silent for a moment, then calmly replied that there was nothing. He urged everyone to quickly move inside the rift to begin their perilous conquest. Jake clearly ordered, All right, let's go. As soon as the team stepped into the rift, a dazzling purple light burst forth powerfully, engulfing everything. However, instead of a normal passageway, the space inside twisted bizarrely. In the blink of an eye, the group realized they were no longer standing on the ground but were falling freely. Leica screamed in terror, What is this? While Jake and Celine were also shocked by the perilous situation, the entire team fell straight down from the clouds, seeing the deep green forest rushing towards them at a terrifying speed. Amidst the panic, Leica tried to calm herself. Calm down. First, we need to find a way to land safely. However, she froze when she saw Jake leisurely hovering on the back of a strange fat golden bird. Jake casually remarked while Celine shouted in the distance, Now what again? Wait. Jake looked at the bird holding onto his leg and said calmly, Oh my god, this is pretty interesting, folks. Leica retorted angrily, That is my line. Come here and help quickly. The bird carrying Jake flew right past her, leaving Leica to only shout his name in frustration. On the other side, Aegis was also falling and called out Leica's name worriedly. They realized the ground was right beneath them. Landing safely was more important than Jake right now. The forest was close. In desperation, the team could only yell, What do we do now? Han gritted his teeth in annoyance, cursing, These useless fools are completely worthless. Immediately he barked an order, Alan. Alan quickly replied yes. Venian immediately cast illusory wind dispersion, coordinating smoothly with Alan's wind blade projection. They both unleashed full gale strike and wind shear at the same time. The wall created a massive barrier of wind that covered the space to cushion the team from the deadly fall. Vinian and Alan quickly coordinated to use wind spells, creating a strong vortex to slow the group's falling speed. Even so, the landing was far from gentle. Everyone slammed hard onto the grass with pain cries. Celine sat up angrily and shouted, "Hey, listen, I know it's urgent, but keep an eye on us a bit. You need to give us a proper landing." In response to her anger, Vinian only coldly turned away and said, "Not my business." Aegis got up, dusted himself off, and tried to defuse the situation. "Come on, thanks to them reducing the impact, we got off lightly." Lila staggered to her feet, groaning in pain but reassuring herself that the team had managed. Looking up at the gloomy sky of the chasm, Aegis inwardly lamented the harshness of falling from such a height and being attacked by giant birds. To prepare for the dangers ahead, the group decided to drink recovery potions immediately. Lika approached Vinian and Alan, sincerely thanking them for saving the team. Vinian snorted coldly, turning his back. He justified that he just did not want the team's combat strength to diminish, leading to a mission failure right there. Seeing his attitude, Lika could only sigh inwardly and tell him to learn to accept thanks more sincerely. Lila worriedly mentioned Jake being taken by the monster, but Vinian snapped at her to ignore it. When Lila teased him about being worried for his friend, Vinian blushed and vehemently denied it. Celine and Aegis also noticed his lack of honesty, but agreed that worrying about someone like Jake was probably pointless as he would surely be fine. Aegis mused, admitting that they themselves needed to worry about their own safety at that moment. Lika looked into the deep forest with a contemplative gaze, wondering what kind of existence Jake really was in everyone's eyes. Memories of his insane feats and power, his inhuman nature made them all agree in unison that Jake was indeed a monster. Lika could only stare blankly, wondering if she was the only weird one here. Aegis looked around the treacherous terrain, determined that no matter what, the team had to find a way to regroup with Jake soon. Because being separated in this place full of uncertainty was a real problem. Right, hurry up so he can back us up. Aegis worriedly looked at the positioning device, realizing the team had no idea where to go in this unfamiliar forest. Just then, Lila mentioned a strange pillar of light she had managed to see while everyone was free-falling. Although Celine was hesitant because after the shocking fall, no one remembered the direction. But Lila confidently pointed in one direction and insisted that was where they needed to go. Celine asked in amazement if Lila had really checked the direction while falling and got a calm nod of confirmation from her friend. Lika realized the bird carrying Jake also flew toward that pillar of light, so she suggested the team head toward the halo to reunite. Vini and Alan also agreed, understanding that given Jake's personality, he would certainly never ignore something so strange. While his teammates were worried sick, Jake was leisurely lying on the back of the bird monster. He found the current situation very interesting and inwardly marveled at the experience of being kidnapped by a bird right after entering the chasm. For a top expert like him, sensing spatial presence was a new and valuable experience. Teammates running around looking for me, I'll just chill folks. Even though he was separated from Lika's group, Jake believed they would manage on their own somehow. The unexpected aerial journey ended as the bird began to descend and slow down. Jake curiously asked if they had arrived at the destination yet, but then he froze when he saw a gigantic bird nest with chicks opening their beaks waiting to be fed. The huge bird suddenly opened its mouth wide, emitting a terrifying pressure right in front of him. Realizing he was about to become dinner for the chicks, Jake immediately leaped off the monster's back, only managing to let out an astonished cry as he fell through the air. "Oh man, this place is really troublesome. Any longer and I would have been a juicy meal." Observing the perilous mountain scenery, he realized he had wandered into a strange other world. Jake mused, recalling information about monsters called chaos that often lurked inside the chasms. Looking at the small, frightened creature behind him, he curiously asked, "Are you one of those creatures?" Jake reached out and patted the bird's head, inwardly noting it was surprisingly cute. However, he quickly noticed a poor condition upon seeing its body covered in wounds and pitifully thin. He wondered to himself, just what was the story? What happened to bring it to this state? Suddenly, Jake opened his eyes wide with alertness as he sensed a strange presence that had been silently following him all this time. The small bird cried out in panic, as from the horizon, a horde of insect monsters carrying purple spirit energy was swarming over to surround them both. Jake immediately understood the problem. He understood now. Those insects were the ones hunting this bird. He never expected insects here would attack birds too. Seeing the sinister evil energy radiating, he was certain these were chaos monsters. Jake quickly assessed their strength, realizing the locusts were at 3-star level, while the largest one had reached 4-star. Faced with this dangerous situation, the small bird cowered in fear. Jake pondered, asking himself what he would do in this situation. Looking at the trembling bird, a thought flashed through Jake's mind: run away. However, even though it was terrified, the small bird still bravely spread its injured wings to shield its young behind it. Witnessing that action, Jake smiled in admiration. "Micah, I like that, Will. Excellent. He clenched his fist, resolutely declaring that he would lend a hand. The horde of chaos monsters began to roar, emitting a thick killing intent as if it could pierce the sky. Jake silently assessed. Their killing intent was as sharp as if slaughter was their only instinct. So this was chaos killing intent. Not letting them act first, Jake shot forward like a bolt of lightning. He delivered a punch weighing 1,000 pounds, blowing the insect monster apart instantly. His gaze turned cold, focusing entirely on the battle with the surrounding monsters. Standing amidst the encirclement of the screeching, threatening insects, Jake silently released a terrifying pressure. The small bird could only stare with its beak agape in shock at the transformation of its savior. A radiant golden draconic aura flared up. The image of a pair of massive, majestic dragon eyes materialized clearly behind Jake. The terrifying pressure made the chaos monsters tremble. They retreated in absolute terror before an existence far beyond their comprehension. Jake pointed at the monsters and coldly issued an ultimatum. If you turn back now, I will spare you. But if you remain stubborn, I will play until I am satisfied. Since she said that, the whole family is fine, my brother really likes to scare people. Weak, his eyes blazed with madness, radiating a killing intent that paralyzed the leading monster. Seeing the monster still obstinate, Jake softly pronounced his verdict. Very well. Then disappear. It turned out that while fleeing, this bird had been lucky enough to catch some prey for its young. Looking at the chicks lying on the ground, he thought to himself that he had almost become food as well, but perhaps this was a strange twist of fate. Jay clapped his hands and clearly declared, "All right, I've decided." He looked at the still dazed little bird and asked with a smile, "Hey, let me ask you something, you're still hungry, aren't you?" "No," the bird chirped weakly, its stomach beginning to growl loudly because its hunger was not yet truly sated. Immediately, Jake eagerly suggested, "Then let's go hunting right now." The little bird exclaimed in utter astonishment. Jake flexed his muscles, clearly declaring, "So you will never have to struggle for food again. I will train you." Meanwhile, in another area of the rift, a sharp blade had just pierced straight through a monster's head, spraying blue brain matter. Strangers in suits and black fedora hats appeared in the dark forest, surrounded by the corpses of monsters lying everywhere. One of them mused, "Honestly speaking, I never expected this rift would connect directly to the sky like this." He casually adjusted his fedora, muttering a sentence, "Whatever." The group simultaneously drew their swords, emitting a thick killing intent that enveloped the space. Now then, looking at the pile of monster corpses at his feet, the leader slowly stepped forward with a glowing sword in hand. He flashed a sinister smile, loudly ordering the entire team to begin the hunt for the Eldragon lizards. 1 week after stepping into the rift, the situation seemed worse than ever. Strange creatures with burning pink eyes continuously emerged from the darkness, emitting piercing shrieks that tore through the dark, sinister space. Ellie screamed in panic and utter terror. While swinging her glowing sword to slash repeatedly at the monsters, she cried out in despair, "Damn it, what kind of hellish place is this?" Witnessing his teammates' loss of composure, Venian swung his battle staff and shouted, "Shut up! Instead of screaming, focus on moving your limbs." The whole team was struggling to fight in a dark cave where the monsters seemed endless. Renjis wiped his sweat tiredly, muttering in frustration, "This has no end, we've been fighting nonstop for a whole week." Then, hearing the wounds, better to struggle to live than die early. The others could only sigh in agreement, feeling they had enough of the chaos and exhaustion in this godforsaken place. Raymond let out a bitter laugh and immediately channeled his strength into his sword, yelling as he delivered a finishing blow to a monster approaching from behind. Instantly, Lika shot forward like a golden lightning bolt, loudly executing. Great sword technique, wide area lightning web strike. A massive web of lightning erupted powerfully, incinerating the entire horde of strange insects in a thunderous lightning explosion. Lika panted after unleashing her technique. She asked worriedly, "Hey, is everyone okay? No one was left behind, right?" Aegis silently observed and realized she was pushing herself too hard under the burden of leadership. Celine did not stop complaining about the harshness of this place, saying each rift led to a different chaotic realm. Aegis patted her shoulder to comfort her, saying they were just unlucky to have encountered the insects she hated the most. Though still annoyed, Celine had to admit complaining would not help complete the mission. Aegis smiled faintly, secretly feeling lucky to have Leica leading the team. Looking at his hand covered in the monster's green ooze, Venian felt the shift in aura and affirmed the exit was very close. Celine asked again with skepticism, but Venian coldly demanded she not come near with that ooze-stained appearance. The entire team rushed toward the radiant glow at the end of the path, hoping to escape the gloomy forest. Lika cheered excitedly when she saw the exit. Celine was mad with joy because she would soon say goodbye to those disgusting insects. However, right as they stepped out of the brilliant light, the smile on Celine's lips suddenly froze completely. Celine ran toward the pillar of purple light that was piercing straight into the sky in the middle of the gloomy rocky canyon. She breathed heavily, exhausted, halfway there. What now? Oh god. Aegis looked around the canyon pensive. Hung sighed that this place was no less troublesome than the forest earlier. Venian pointed affirmatively, saying that was the light pillar the team saw from above. Venian smirked slightly. "We We have arrived very close. Lika pointed toward the glow. She exclaimed, "Hey Aegis, that light really is..." Aegis nodded. Standing this close made everything perfectly clear. That is the energy from the Chaos Stone that Instructor Tech once mentioned. The memory of a few days ago at the El Dragon Mansion surfaced. He emphasized that merely collecting demonic water would not count as completing the mission. Jake asked back in confusion, what now? Is that not enough? He wondered whether conquering the rift meant they had to seal it. The instructor firmly confirmed that was correct. He emphasized that the team must destroy the Chaos Stone, the source of all chaos, to permanently close the rift. Hearing about the Chaos Stone, Jake recalled the knowledge he had read. It was a mineral ore that was the origin of the dimensional rifts in the world. Jake realized the stone was the very root of the rift. The instructor opened the ancient book, asserting it was not only the origin, but also the true threat of this land. He explained that the stone continuously released massive energy to maintain the rift's existence. Evil energy seeped into every nook and cranny. It corrupted the entire ecosystem of the chaotic realm, turning all living beings into completely mutated monsters. The instinct of chaos was slaughter. They ceaselessly kill until they conquer the entire world, and they continue seeking new lands by traveling through the rifts to begin their invasion of the human world. Hearing this, Jake rubbed his chin. Oh, this thing is quite dangerous. Sounds really troublesome indeed. Aegis and Lila, sitting nearby, also fell into deep thought. They understood the mission required finding both the demonic water and the Chaos Stone. Aegis opened the ancient book, pointed at the illustration, and explained that demonic water often appeared near the Chaos Stone. The tech member standing above confirmed precisely and clearly, first find the Chaos Stone. He emphasized that although the characteristics of the stones differed, they all released a massive source of energy. As long as one got close enough, anyone could sense its presence. Turning to reality in the middle of the canyon, Venian pointed at the purple pillar of light and decisively concluded that from now on, they should just head straight toward that light source. Alan smiled in agreement while Celine squinted and looked at that place with a mocking expression. Are these guys for real? Do they know how to say anything other than insults now? Hit right where it hurt, Venian snapped back, What? What? So what? Aegis could only smile, hoping that if they joined up with Jake there, everything would be perfect. Lika looked at the halo and silently hoped Jake had already found the location of the Chaos Stone. Venian still wore a sour expression, urging the team to move instead of worrying about useless things. Seeing Layla about to tease him for caring, Venian yelled, "Why so talkative? Please shut your mouth." To hide his embarrassment, the team advanced deeper into the canyon. Lika noticed that this place did not have a single insect. Celine breathed a sigh of relief because she was too exhausted. But the instructor's warning still echoed in their minds. Near the Chaos Stone was the dwelling of extremely powerful chaotic creatures, heavily mutated by the stone's evil energy. Aegis thought to himself with dismay how troublesome. After Lika sensed an uneasy atmosphere surrounding them, she warily reminded the team to be careful. The group cautiously advanced deep into the gloomy limestone canyon, where the purple light pillar emitted a suffocating pressure. Surprisingly, they reached their destination without encountering any obstacles. Lika breathed a sigh of relief. We have arrived here without anything happening. Before the team's eyes was the Chaos Stone, a giant purple crystal block floating and glowing brightly. Celine remarked, "So this is the Chaos Stone. What an evil thing." Lila was also stunned by its enormous size. Celine became careless, seeing the surroundings too quiet. How boring. There is not a single monster at all. But immediately a shadow from above lunged down, causing Lika to panic and shout loudly, "Everyone above us." A horrifying impact occurred as the object slammed into the ground, creating a thick cloud of dust. The group hastily took defensive stances, ready to deal with a powerful enemy. However, from within the smoke, a calm voice rang out, "Oh, long time no see." A foot stepped out, and appearing before everyone was Jake with a bright smile and a friendly wave. Lika was overjoyed. She yelled, "Hey, Jake!" The team burst into excitement as they finally regrouped with him. Lika said enthusiastically, "Glad we have all gathered together." Aegis also breathed a sigh of relief, "Glad you are safe." Jake looked around and then cheerfully remarked, "Oh my, everyone here seems very lively, How wonderful." Venian angrily snapped, "Lively where exactly?" Alan tiredly complained that the whole team was in a sorry state. Jake squinted to look closely at his teammates' disheveled appearances, and then asked dazedly, Now that you mention it, I see it." Aegis pointed in shock, stammering, That centipede. That thing is..." The whole team froze as they saw the carcass of a giant dark purple bug lying motionless in a deep pit. Jake scratched his head and asked back dazedly, This thing?" Not long before, Celine was startled when the high-level chaos beast suddenly burst out from the shadows. Celine's scream echoed through the canyon as she had to face the ferocious creature bearing its fangs and claws right in front of her. Aegis broke into a cold sweat, recognizing this as the powerful chaos creature that had been mentioned, and Lord Jake had defeated it. Jake calmly explained that since it attacked suddenly, he just dealt with it. Could it be that the reason there were no monsters along the entire path was because Jake suddenly remembered and added added a nonchalant remark. It seemed he had also conveniently cleaned up a bunch of them. Witnessing Jake's absurd calmness, the entire team, from Lika to Venian, stood frozen with their faces contorted in shock, all simultaneously screaming in their minds that this man was truly too much. Setting the monster matter aside, Jake pointed at the purple crystal that radiated a suffocating pressure. More importantly was this stone. He had a premonition, so he waited here for everyone. Aegis nodded in confirmation. Yes, this was definitely Chaos Stone, exactly as they had predicted. Right beneath the floating stone was a small pool of water shimmering brilliantly amidst white crystal formations. Lika and Celine asked in confusion, "Water?" Staring intently at the radiant pool, it was clearly magic water. Jake excitedly leaned close to the water's surface, so it was true. Excellent. He noticed the amount of magic water here was more than expected, but noted that to achieve magical effect, each person needed to consume a certain quantity. With this small pool, it was probably only enough for a few people to use. Lika quickly took out small glass vials, urging the team to hurry up. "Let's collect it and finish this matter." The group carefully scooped each drop of the miraculous water into bottles to prepare for completing the quest. Lika raised the bottles, announcing that the team had finished collecting the magic water. She explained that depending on the water's color, the usable magic attribute would change, such as fire, water, or lightning. However, the water they had just found was transparent, or rather, it bore a strange color with sparkling radiance. Aegis held the bottle and observed, confirming that despite the unusual color, it was definitely magic water. Celine also acknowledged this strangeness, while Jake looked on thoughtfully. Venian stood nearby, grumbling that they were all paying too much attention to insignificant trivial details. Suddenly, Jake's eyes lit up as he sensed a terrifying murderous intent approaching. Without time to explain, he immediately grabbed Lika and pulled her forcefully behind him. As Lika cried out in confusion, a massive beam of energy tore through the air, crashing down on the spot where they had just stood. An earth-shattering explosion occurred, dirt and rocks scattered everywhere, leaving Lika stunned in disbelief. From within the smoke and dust, steady footsteps rang out with immense pressure. A man in a suit and black fedora hat strode forward imposingly. He casually remarked that they had dodged that attack just now. With blazing red eyes and strange tattoos on his face, he looked at the group with contempt and called them little lizards, always ready to strike at any opening. No wonder they were so unlucky. The entire team immediately took a defensive stance, highly alert at the sudden appearance of the strangers. In contrast to his teammates' tension, Jake kept a proud smile. He stared straight at the leader and declared in a sharp tone, "So you've finally shown yourselves.